Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku, back with another fanfiction. This is the fourth part of What If Deku Was in Love with Ibara. Now before starting, please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Bakugo no All Might shouted nearly at the top of his lungs as the boy vanished. Blizzard Kamui Woods looked back towards the green-haired heroine. Outside in the street, the psychokinesis user was doing everything she could to keep the situation contained. Things had been going smoothly until the plan suddenly went belly up. Their team managed to subdue the villains and secure the hostage in a matter of seconds. But just when they were about to get the transport team ready, multiple pools of black liquid suddenly appeared out of thin air. Before Blizzard could even blink, the entire area had been overrun by what she assumed were those Namu creatures that she was briefed about prior to the mission. Endeavor and Genist were supposed to make sure that these things were taken care of. Blizzard thought to herself as she took control of the Namu surrounding her and the police. Detective, something's wrong. Endeavor's team isn't responding, Tsukachi shouted back at her. The villains have escaped. Kamui Wood's voice howled through all the confusion. This was not good. These guys were only supposed to have one person with a teleportation quirk. Obviously their intel was wrong, but there wasn't enough time to worry about that now. Before she had a chance to reply, a whirlwind suddenly appeared from inside the building, flinging these abhorrent creatures in every direction. Blizzard the woman then looked up to see All Might standing at the massive hole in the wall he created at the start of the operation. Are you keeping up? We have the situation handled. If you're going to after them, then do it. Well, catch up shortly. Fine, I'll leave it to you, was all the number one hero said before dashing off in the direction of the other hideout. She didn't know why, but Blizzard had a really bad feeling about all of this. Katsuki Bakugo was absolutely fed up. Not only had he been captured by these lame-ass villains, he had to endure listening to their incessant ramblings for the last few hours. For some reason their leader was under the impression that he could convince him to join the side of villainy. As if something so stupid was even possible. How dare these fools even think that Katsuki Bakugo would stoop so low as to become a villain? That was not his goal, not by a long shot. He was going to become a hero, one who never knew defeat and achieved the glory of becoming number one. He had no time to play these foolish games, and that's exactly what he made clear when he blasted that stupid hand villain in the face with his quirk. Just as Bakugo was about to try and break his way out of this hellhole, things got pretty crazy. In the blink of an eye, All Might and some other heroes broke into the building and made quick work of capturing these losers. And as much as he hated to admit it, he was a bit relieved that someone came to rescue him. But that's when everything went to shit. From out of nowhere, this disgusting black fluid erupted from his own mouth and covered his entire body, encasing him in a cocoon of darkness that he wasn't able to escape from. The last thing he heard before everything went dark was All Might calling his name. Just as quickly as it came, the liquid vanished and Bakugo found himself standing in a completely different place than he was a second ago. God damn it, what the hell, he managed to let out in between coughs. My apologies, Bakugo, a sinister-sounding voice said to him. Deciding to take in as much information as possible to figure out what was going on, the boy quickly scanned the area. And when he did, his heart almost dropped into his stomach. All around him was rubble and carnage. The entire area looked like a twister just ran through it. But that was the least of his worries. In his field of vision, Bakugo caught the sight of multiple bodies laying on the ground around him. But these weren't just any bodies, they were all heroes that he recognized. Endeavor, Best Genist, Mount Lady, all people whom he considered strong in some capacity. What the hell is going on here, he asked himself before locking eyes onto a very familiar sight. Right in front of him were two people. One was a large man with some shiny-looking mask covering his face wearing a cheap suit. And the other person was that stupid loser, Deku. Before the explosion quirk user could speak, multiple other portals suddenly appeared around him and those other loser villains fell through them. Master the hand villain said in a surprised tone. I do apologize, Tamura. The man replied. Do not be discouraged at your failure. This was simply an unforeseen complication. One that can easily be corrected. What the hell happened here? The lizard-faced villain asked what everyone else seemed to be thinking. It was quite the spectacle, Spinner. Midoriya here blasted away all of the heroes in a rather impressive show of force. He'll admit that even I wasn't expecting him to use so much power. The masked man then motioned over to Midoriya, who was standing next to him. The boy was wearing a blank expression that was both calm and slightly intimidating. Those words lingered in Bakugo's mind for a good 5 seconds, as they did everyone else's. Did he hear that right? Deku just attacked and took down all of those heroes? No, that was impossible. Deku may have been an idiot, but there was no way that he would do something like that, unless... Suddenly, a moment of clarity struck Bakugo like a freight train. Everything started making sense. It had been hours since he last saw the nerd. And now, here he was standing right next to the villain boss like he belonged there. The dots seemed to connect instantly and Bakugo started boiling. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but one thing was clear to him. What the hell's going here? Deku, he shouted towards the greenette, demanding some type of answer. Don't tell me went and joined these losers. Midoriya stayed silent, almost as if his presence hadn't even registered in the boy's mind. Bakugo was already pissed off, but the last thing he was going to tolerate was being ignored by someone like him. I asked you a question, you damn nerve. The next thing Bakugo felt was his body lock up and his feet leave the ground. He upturned his eyes to see Midoriya holding his hand out towards him. The boy's face was still unchanged and it was almost like he was peering directly into his soul. What happened next threw everyone off guard. Bakugo's arms lifted up in front of him. He tried his hardest to break free from the boy's quirk, but it was useless. "Let go of me, you damn loose." Snap. There was a brief delay before the pain caught up to his brain and the horrid sound of Bakugo's scream echoed throughout the area. The explosion quirk user looked on in absolute horror at the sight of his arms, which were now bent in an awkward direction. "You're so annoying," Midoriya calmly said to him. The last thing Bakugo felt was his body flying through the air before impacting the remains of a nearby wall. As the world around him faded to black, the only thing he could see was Deku's smug face staring at him with that blank expression. "Oh shit," Magna shouted in surprise at what she just saw. "That was amazing," Izuku Toga outwardly gushed. All for one would be lying if he said that he didn't find that somewhat amusing. He wasn't expecting the boy to act without orders, but considering Midoriya's internal hatred towards Bakugo, he should have seen something like that coming. The downside to the obedience quirk was heightened aggression. It was the same power he used on his Nomus before sending them out to wreak havoc. But no matter, things were still going according to plan. Tamura may have lost Bakugo, but Midoriya was a more valuable piece. "Master," All for one then turned to face his successor. "You must not be discouraged, you can try again. That's why I've brought you and your associates back with you. And you now have Midoriya here to assist you with your future endeavors." His voice was what one would consider caring. "Start over as many times as you like. I am here to provide you with help. All if this is for Yoa, there you are." Before the others had a chance to react, All Might came bursting through the smoke and collided directly into All for One, resulting in a shockwave strong enough to blow everyone back, including the heroes who were still unconscious on the ground. "Hill, have you returned my students, All for One? Have you come to kill a second time, All Might?" Another shockwave quickly followed along with a massive cloud of dust and debris. The damage to the area seemed to double with that collision and everyone knew that things were about to change. Once his vision cleared, All Might scanned the area to get a feel for the situation. The scene was absolute chaos. All around him were the bodies of his comrades who appear to have already fallen. The seasoned pro took in as much information as he could before his gaze locked onto Bakugo, who was unconscious with massive bruises on both arms. "It took you 30 seconds to get here, All Might. Have you gotten weaker? You're one to talk. It's kind of difficult to ignore that life support mask on your face. Aren't you overexerting yourself, old man?" The number one hero mentally prepared himself for what he knew was coming next. With his greatest enemy before him, it would be difficult for the man to secure Bakugo and get him to safety, not to mention all the others. Unfortunately for him, All Might didn't even get the opportunity to consider his next move before a massive piece of concrete came flying at him. With ease, All Might pulverized the boulder with a single punch. The man then looked in the direction where the attack came from and his mind froze. There, floating in the air a few meters above the ground, was Midoriya. The boy looked to be unharmed, however he was using his quirk to carry the villains who managed to slip away from his grasp. "Good work, Midoriya. Thank you for protecting Tamura and his friends." All for one thanked the boy. Young Midoriya, the number one hero, shouted. "What is the meaning of this?" All he received was silence before another boulder came flying at him. Once again, he punched the piece of concrete into oblivion, but now his attention was fully focused on his student. Were his assumptions correct after all? Was Midoriya really working for the League of Villains? He didn't really know what to think. All for one could practically read the man's facial expressions like a book. Looking to use this to his advantage, he decided to add a little bit of doubt into his enemy's head. "Don't get the wrong idea, All Might. Midoriya here is not acting on his own free will. I used a quirk of mine to make the boy obey me," what the blonde-haired man countered. Now he was confused. The scene around him was already chaotic enough, but now his student was being controlled. Was he wrong? What have you done? The effect isn't permanent, I assure you. He'll be back to his old self in about a day or so. But in the meantime, I think it would be most entertaining to see you do battle with one of your precious students. The masked man then turned his gaze towards the greenette. "Midoriya, would you care to lend me a hand? Tamura and the others will be fine. Please make sure that you keep All Might entertained." I don't recall him ever facing off against anyone with a powerful telekinetic quirk. Midoriya didn't verbally respond. And like a well-trained dog, the boy set the villains down on the ground before making his move. Midoriya then launched himself through the air like a rocket on a direct course towards his opponent. All Might shoved his feelings down for the moment and cocked his arm back, ready to deliver a powerful smash. Strong enough to knock the boy out, but not injure him. The only problem though was that he was immediately flanked on his right side by a powerful blast of air. One strong enough to send him careening into a nearby building and destroy more of the area. I didn't say that I wasn't going to join in on the fun, now did I? All for one mocked him before once again turning his attention towards his young aide. "Bring him to me." Midoriya used his powers to lift All Might's body off the ground and levitate him over to his handler. The pro hero struggled as he tried to break free of the telekinesis, but it was not working. "You're getting sloppy in your old age, Toshinori. I'm almost disappointed that I was able to capture you so easily." You fiend, the blonde-haired man continued to struggle. "Young Midoriya, you mustn't let this man control you like this. I'm afraid that you're the last person he'll listen to. He absolutely hates you after all. No matter, I suppose he'll have to enjoy this victory of mine at a later time." All for One then pointed his hand directly at All Might's face. I wonder if he'll be able to survive a blast from this close. Damn it. Just when All for One was about to deliver what was sure to be a devastating blast, something unexpected happened. Without any warning, Midoriya was sent flying backwards into a nearby wall and the control on his quirk was broken. Not waiting for an invitation, All Might used this to his advantage to punch All for One square in the chest, sending the masked man soaring into some rubble. Midoriya, you better have a damn good explanation for what I'm looking at right now. Everyone in the area looked up to see none other than Blizzard floating in the sky above them. The woman appeared to be out of breath and had a serious look on her face. Blizzard, All Might, what the hell is going on? Young Midoriya is being manipulated. They've used some kind of mind control quirk on him. What the green-haired heroine immediately looked to the boy who just got back onto his feet. A few thoughts were running through her mind upon hearing that declaration, and none of them were pleasant. She hoped that her eyes were playing tricks on her when she saw what appeared to be Midoriya aiding one of the villains, but apparently that wasn't the case. As much as she wanted a detailed explanation on what exactly transpired before her arrival, it didn't look like she was going to get the chance. "Ah, Blizzard, how nice of you to join us." All for One then spoke as he pulled himself out of the rubble and began floating in the air. He can fly too. How this is going to be a problem. The woman thought, what have you done to Midoriya-kun? Him simply borrowing the boy for a bit, nothing to worry yourself over. The masked man replied in a smug tone. However, now that you're here things have gotten a bit more interesting. Release Midoriya-kun at once, you bastard. But why would I do that when I can have him to keep you busy? I've always wanted to witness a battle between two strong telekinesis users, and this is the perfect opportunity for that. I think Midoriya here would prove to be quite the challenge for you. Does have your sister's quirk after all. The air grew stiff as Blizzard processed the man's last statement. What did he just say? Midoriya had her sister's quirk. What did that even mean? Sure, they had similar powers, but that was it. Nothing about that comment made sense to her. Ah, you haven't figured it out yet, have you? You see, Midoriya is currently in possession of your dearly departed sister's quirk. I gave it to him shortly after our first encounter. I myself didn't have much use for it, but the boy seems to be managing quite well. Wait, All Might interjected. Did ya, you monster? Midoriya, change of plans. Keep Blizzard entertained while I deal with All Might. The two of you have much to discuss. Once you're done, return to me. All for One ordered the boy. The green-haired teen didn't reply. Instead, he launched himself towards Blizzard at full speed. The woman reacted fast enough to avoid getting hit, but Midoriya circled around faster than she expected. She quickly chose to ascend further into the air to avoid a collision, but the boy changed direction just as fast and followed her. It only took a few seconds before the two telekinetic greenettes got into what could only be considered an aerial dogfight, both of them gaining more and more altitude with each passing second. Blizzard, All Might shouted. Your fight is with me, All Might. Let the children have their fun. You bastard, what have you done? What do you intend to do with young Midoriya? That boy should be the least of your worries right now. After all, the two of us have a score to settle. In a matter of moments, the two telekinesis users were a significant distance away from the other two fighters and gaining more altitude with each passing second. Blizzard still had no idea what was going on, but the fact that Midoriya was being controlled made this situation a lot more tricky. She was glad that her student hadn't turned to the side of villainy of his own accord. But now there was a rampaging teenager that she had to deal with. Her thoughts were interrupted when Midoriya charged her again, and like before, she was able to dodge it easily. Now that she had some distance, the woman used her power to push the boy further away and give her some room to think. Her main focus right now was to find a way to subdue Midoriya without injuring him. But that might have been too tall of an order given the situation. Under normal circumstances, that would have been a piece of cake. But when facing someone with a similar skill set as you, it was considerably more difficult. Midoriya-kun, snap out of it, she shouted. However, the only response that she got was the boy charging at her yet again. Damn it, it looks like talking to him is out of the question. Blizzard took a brief second to look down and scan the area. She needed to find somewhere with a lot of loose material that would help her put the boy down. But all around them were apartment buildings and residential neighborhoods. It would have been easier to just use the remains of the already destroyed buildings. But this was the type of fight where any reckless actions on her part would only add to the chaos. Luckily, she was able to spot what looked like some sort of factory about a kilometer away from where she had left All Might. One that was outside of the residential area. Seeing as this was probably her best option, the green-haired heroine turned around and made a beeline straight for it. And as expected, Midoriya was right on her tail. As the two grew closer to the factory, Blizzard could see that the place was shut down. The lights were off and there didn't appear to be anyone in sight, which meant that there definitely wouldn't be any unnecessary casualties. The woman then spotted some steel girders near the entrance gate. Something like that was easy for her to manipulate and would be perfect for subduing her opponent. However, just when she was about to grab hold of the object, she felt her body get pulled backwards, immediately forced to the ground. Blizzard looked up and saw that Midoriya had already caught up with her. The boy was levitating some loose debris around his body and wasted no time in launching it all directly at her. In response, Blizzard used her powers to stop the debris in its tracks before sending it right back at him. Midoriya dodged to avoid getting hit, which caused him to lose his focus. With that small window of opportunity, Blizzard decided to just bite the bullet and rip some nearby streetlights out of the ground. She was hoping to avoid any unnecessary property damage, but it looked like she wasn't going to be that lucky today. In response to this, Midoriya followed suit by also ripping some streetlights out of the ground and flung them towards the woman. What followed was a rather impressive display from the two telekinesis users, both of them sending a variety of objects towards one another while also somehow managing to avoid getting hit themselves. Damn it, this is getting me nowhere. Blizzard clicked her teeth in annoyance. Suddenly, Midoriya changed battle strategy and charged at her once again. This time, however, he was able to connect and the two went flying through the factory doors and into the main building. Push, the woman shouted before using a short burst of her power to create some space. Something was wrong here. There might be more to this mind control quirk than what she thought. Midoriya usually wasn't this aggressive during a fight. In fact, the boy preferred to keep his distance whenever possible, and right now he seemed to be more combative than his usual self. Ah, the boy shouted while waving his hands into the air and bringing them back down, quite literally causing the roof to collapse down on top of them. Thankfully, Blizzard had the wherewithal to stop the loose pieces of wood and metal from hitting her. Otherwise, she might have gotten impaled. Things quickly took a more serious turn when Midoriya began floating higher and higher into the air. The boy looked around for a second before holding his arms out at either side and levitating a ridiculous amount of material off the ground. Hellstorm. In the blink of an eye, Blizzard was surrounded by a massive vortex of debris. This wasn't good. She already knew that Midoriya was powerful, but the scale of this move wasn't what she was expecting. The space around her began closing in, but the woman certainly wasn't about to let herself get bested by something like this. Hellstorm. The whirlwind began rapidly changing shape, fluctuating more and more each second. In the air, Midoriya appeared to be struggling to maintain his grip on the super move, while down below, Blizzard seemed to be doing everything that she could to negate it. The stalemate came to an end when the vortex dispersed, sending wood and scrap metal in every direction. Did you forget that I'm the one who taught you that move? Boy, you have a long way to go before you can overpower me with that. Blizzard's brief taunt seemed to strike a nerve with the boy. His face immediately shifted from one that was devoid emotion to one that showed what was undoubtedly displeasure. Without any warning, everything around her began levitating and Blizzard felt a chill go down her spine. Looks like hurting him is unavoidable. I'm sorry, Midoriya-kun. Not looking to wait around and get impaled, the woman launched herself into the sky and charged directly at Midoriya. The boy failed to react fast enough to avoid getting punched in the face and flew back a good 4 meters before recovering. Blizzard knew that she couldn't give him a chance to get himself together, so she proceeded to let loose a slurry of well-placed punches and kicks. Midoriya tried his best to dodge and maneuver, but her hand-to-hand skills were just too good. The tables quickly turned when Blizzard delivered a well-timed kick to the abdomen which caused Midoriya to clutch his midsection. With that brief window of opportunity, she then used her quirk to force him to the ground and sent him right into the pile of rubble that he previously created. Once the dust cleared, Midoriya was quickly back on his feet and sent another wave of debris at her. But the green-haired woman stopped the attack before tossing it to the side. This seemed to anger Midoriya even more and the boy responded by throwing a couple of steel beams at her, only to get a similar result. Give up, Midoriya-kun. You can't beat me. You are only delaying the inevitable. Blizzard knew that her words were pointless, but that didn't stop her from trying. Midoriya responded to the declaration by using his quirk to grab hold of her and fling her into another adjacent building. Despite the jarring impact, the woman easily recovered and turned tables. About 200 meters behind Midoriya on the other side of the building was a small tower comprised of metal beams. With ease, the green-haired heroine grabbed hold of him and forced him into it. She then used her quirk to wrap the pieces of metal around him and locked all of his limbs in place, making sure that he wouldn't be able to move. Now that the boy was trapped, Blizzard flew over to him. Midoriya struggled to undo his makeshift cage, but the woman maintained a strong grip on the beams. Midoriya-kun, give up. The sooner you stop trying to fight, the sooner we can get you back to normal. The boy groaned as he struggled to break free. It was pointless though. With Blizzard maintaining her hold on the beams, there was no way that Midoriya was going to overpower her. I guess I have no choice. She sighed internally before raising her hand towards his neck. In all honesty, she hated using this move. It was both abhorrent and reckless. But with Midoriya in his current state, trying to get him to calm down was unlikely. Using a force choke to knock him out was the best option. Just when the psychokinesis user was about to activate her power, she was suddenly pushed away by an invisible force, the strength of which was enough to send her back a good 20 meters. It barely took Blizzard a second to reorient herself, and when she set her gaze back onto Midoriya, her heart almost dropped into her stomach. Floating hair, glowing green eyes, those two signs accompanied by a look of absolute ferocity. Yup, there was no doubt about it. Midoriya just activated Overdrive. He does have your sister's quirk after all. The villain's voice replayed in her head. She had no clue what he meant by that. But now wasn't the time. She'll have to get those answers later. All Blizzard could worry about now was stopping Midoriya before things got out of hand. Overdrive may have given him a substantial boost in power, but the price was too great. The longer he stayed in that form, the more severe the consequences. The woman was brought out her thoughts when the metal surrounding the boy uncoiled itself from his body and began levitating around him. Before she could even blink, they were sent flying towards her with incredible speed. Enough so that evasion was the only thing that she could do. The beams didn't even fully pass before Midoriya appeared right in front of her face. And the next thing the green-haired heroine felt was an absolutely devastating blow to her abdomen. One strong enough to completely knock the wind out of her. The next thing that Blizzard felt was her entire body being thrown to the ground. She tried her hardest to stand back up, but the immense force that Midoriya was exerting on her was too great. By sheer luck, she just so happened to be facing the sky, otherwise she wouldn't have been able to deflect the small boulder that was about to come crashing down on her head. The woman then used her quirk to take control of the boy's body and push him back into the tower, which gave her enough time to pull herself together and take to the sky. Once she was a good 30 meters in the air, Midoriya bursted out of the newly created rubble and charged straight at her. She was about to use her quirk to catch him once more, but his speed was too great and he disappeared from her vision. Her eyes darted across the area before receiving yet another blow to the back, courtesy of Midoriya's left shoulder. Shit, he's too fast now. I can barely keep up with him, she mentally cursed. Kaboom! All of a sudden, a loud explosion could be heard in the distance and Blizzard noticed a massive tornado appear in the area where All Might was supposed to be. With everything going on, she had forgotten that the #1 hero was still fighting that masked villain, and things appeared to be getting crazy over there. Unfortunately for her, this lapse in awareness was all that Midoriya needed to close the distance between the two of them and deliver a powerful left hook that connected with her jaw. Using all the power that she could, Blizzard used another force push to create some distance between the two of them, roughly 40 meters or so. With the situation now what it was, the green-haired woman was left with no other choice. Midoriya needed to be put down, and there was no way for her to do that without going all out. So through gritted teeth, Blizzard resolved herself and flooded all the energy that she could into her quirk. Overdrive. Like with Midoriya a few moments ago, the sudden rush of power was accompanied by a wave of telekinetic energy erupting from her body. The boy's face slightly shifted as he looked towards his opponent, who now had her own set of glowing green eyes. This is your last chance, Midoriya-kun. Surrender now, and I won't have to hurt you. As she expected, the woman didn't get a response. All she got was some more rubble thrown in her direction. But now she didn't have to worry about dodging them. Instead, Blizzard caught the objects and sent them right back at the boy. Midoriya was somehow able to evade this counterattack before charging at her again. And not looking to be on the receiving end of another one of the boy's punches, the woman flew straight up into the sky. In a matter of seconds, the two greenettes were high above the city streets. In fact, they were so high up that you could see nearly the entire prefecture in one glance. The two repeatedly collided with one another while exchanging blows in the process, but neither one was able to gain any significant advantage over the other. Blizzard knew that a slugfest wasn't the kind of fight that she wanted right now, so the woman chose to nosedive directly towards the ground. And as expected, Midoriya followed suit. In the distance, the woman spotted a supply truck near the other end of the factory fence. Under normal circumstances, her range was limited to 600 meters, but in her overdrive mode that was nearly doubled. So with ease, she lifted the vehicle off of the ground and threw it right at her opponent. Midoriya was so focused on her that he didn't see the thing coming until the last second. Instead of dodging, the boy deflected the vehicle and sent it flying off into the distance. Once the two were back above the factory, Blizzard turned towards the boy and summoned all of the strength that she had available. Hellstorm Tornado Alley. 6 powerful whirlwinds suddenly appeared out of thin air and Midoriya quickly found himself trapped. Wood, metal, anything that wasn't bolted to the ground was kicked up into the air and there was nowhere for the green-haired boy to go. He tried his best to maneuver himself out of the chaos, but everywhere he looked there was just more debris. This move was the absolute pinnacle of Blizzard's abilities and was only possible with the power boost from Overdrive. Even now, it took every last bit of concentration that she had to maintain it. With the opportunity to put the metaphorical nail in the coffin, the green-haired heroine brought her hands together and all 6 tornadoes collapsed in on each other, resulting in a chaotic blast that was strong enough to shake the ground itself. That had to do the trick, the woman huffed out. It had been a couple of years since the last time she used Overdrive and she was already starting to feel its effects. The moment she released her quirk, she would more than likely pass out. So before that, she needed to confirm whether or not her plan was a success. How her sister was able to maintain this form for as long as she did was truly a mystery to her. However, her respite from the battle was short-lived when Midoriya bursted through the smoke and came flying at her at top speed. The boy's face was covered in and his arm was cocked back ready to deliver what was sure to be a devastating blow. Oh shit. Just when he was about to make contact, something strange happened. Midoriya stopped mid-flight and began clutching his head. The boy proceeded to let out a pain howl as his body started to violently jerk around in every direction. Midoriya-kun, Blizzard shouted. Something was wrong, that much was obvious. It seemed like the boy was perfectly coherent a moment ago, but now that didn't seem to be the case. Was this a side effect of that mind control quirk? Tsubuki Midoriya struggled to let out as he continued thrashing through the air. Hurry up and do it, you damn brat. The woman paused for a second at those words. Midoriya just called her a brat. But it wasn't just that. It was the way that he said it. The only person who ever called her that was her sister. Why did he suddenly call her that? Stop wasting time and knock me out, the boy continued before letting out another scream. one that echoed throughout what was left of the factory. Shibuki Katsuragi had no clue what was going on with the boy, but now wasn't the time to worry about that. She needed to put him down for good, otherwise there would only be more unnecessary destruction. With her overdrive still active, the psychokinesis user held her arm out in front of her and envisioned herself wrapping her hand around Midoriya's neck. Forced choke. Almost instantly, Midoriya tried to clutch his hands around his neck, but his arms appeared to pull themselves back down. It was as if someone else was in control of his body. For the next 15 seconds or so, Blizzard made sure not to apply too much pressure on him to avoid causing injury. But once it was over, Midoriya was out cold. As carefully as she could, Blizzard descended back down to ground with her student in tow. And she wasted no time in using every piece of scrap metal that she could see to create a cocoon around his body. She hated that she had to do this to him, but now wasn't the time to be careless. Once that was done, the green-haired heroine gave the boy one last look before letting out a relieved sigh. I used too much power with that last attack. My head's already pounding and I'm pretty sure my jaw is broken. Her final act before powering down was pulling her phone out from her pocket and pressing the emergency button on the screen. Somehow the thing was still in one piece after all the abuse she just took. And with any luck, someone would be here soon to recover the two of them before it was too late. The moment Blizzard finally released her quirk, a heavy stream of came pouring out her nose and it felt like she got nailed in the back of the head with a sledgehammer. The woman dropped to her knees and the last thing she saw before everything went dark was Midoriya's wide face trapped in her makeshift cage. I'm sorry, Midoriya-kun. Darkness was all that Midoriya could see as he once again found himself floating around the endless void. The same one that seemed to have no end in sight. However, something was different. The last time that he was here it was like he was experiencing a dream. But now, it felt like a real place. One as tangible as the world he knew. How pathetic. The boy immediately rotated himself around and was met with the misty gray figure he encountered the last time that he was here. Only this time, the person was more defined. Like before, the only visible feature that he could see were her bright green eyes. But now her body was more solid as opposed to incorporeal. Yui shouted at the figure. Understand this, Brett? This will be the only time I help you out. The next time you let this happen, I might not be nice enough to let you have your body back. Our personalities may have already started merging. But don't think for a second that he'll hesitate to take over. What are you talking about? He questioned the ghost before him. He still had no clue who this person was, but something about her, especially her voice, seemed really familiar. The misty figure didn't respond before fading away, once again leaving Midoriya all alone in the endless void. The last 24 hours have been pretty insane if Takagi had anything to say about it. Last night, she watched the epic showdown between All Might and some unknown villain on television along with her family. And to say that she had a newfound respect for her heroics teacher would be putting it mildly. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing for the last few hours due to most of her classmates talking about the fight. But there was still one detail in particular that plagued the green-haired girl's mind. There had yet to be any announcement concerning the whereabouts of Midoriya or Bakugo. The only thing she had been able to gather was that the two of them were indeed rescued from the villains sometime in the middle of the battle. But aside from that, there were no other updates at this time. As the girl scrolled through news articles on her laptop, she was patiently waiting for something to let her know that the boy was okay. Luckily, her silent prayer was answered when a text notification from Kayama popped up on her phone screen. Whip, you didn't hear this from me, but Midoriya is safe and sound. He's currently at Musutafu General Hospital getting some injuries treated. But he should make a full recovery in no time. T-Rex, really? Whip, yeah. Whip, you should be able to visit him sometime tomorrow after he gives his statement. I can drive you over there after I'm done helping Vlad and shout to get ready for the press conference tomorrow. Try to keep this quiet though. T-Rex, thank you so much. Whip, no problem. Just try to keep things graded when you finally see him. Midoriya slowly opened his eyes and turned towards the sound that suddenly woke him up. His vision was still blurry, and it took a second for him to adjust to the bright light directly overhead. But once things started to clear up, he instantly became confused at what he was looking at. Immediately to his right was a figure with a very familiar patch of gray hair. Ianagis, the boy groggily questioned. Well, yes, but not the one that you're thinking of. The person responded in voice that he didn't recognize. He gave them a confused look before the blurriness finally subsided. Now that he could actually see, the boy was able to tell that the person he was looking at wasn't his classmate. Instead, it was an elderly man with gray hair and black eyes. It's good to see that you're awake, young man. We were worried that you'd be out for another day or so. Who are you? My apologies. The man quickly adjusted his glasses. My name is Sho Yanagi. I'm one of the doctors currently tasked with looking over you. My granddaughter is actually one of your classmates. It took a second for those words to register in Midoriya's brain, and once they did, he immediately tried to sit up. However, the moment he did, he noticed that his arms were strapped down to the guardrails on the bed. What? Midoriya-kun, I need you to remain calm. Those restraints are there to keep you in place in case you are still under the influence of that villain's quirk. Sho Yanagi told the boy in an attempt to keep him calm. What's going on? Midoriya asked in a panicked tone. Midoriya-kun, what is the last thing that you remember? Midoriya paused as he tried to recall everything that happened before waking up in this room. And to be honest, he wished that he hadn't. Almost instantly, a wave of memories came flooding into his mind and the boy had to stop himself from vomiting right there on the spot. He remembered all of it. The attack on the camp, his time spent with the villains, his talk with the masked man, even his fight with Katsuragi. All these events playing in his mind like the film reel of a movie that he didn't want to see. "Oh my God," the boy shakily said while placing his hand over his mouth. "Judging by your reaction, you seem to recall a great deal of what you had to go through," Yanagi stated before placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Midoriya-kun, I don't know all that happened to you when you were captured, but I assure you that everything will be okay. Everyone is fine and you're not in any trouble." "What? Listen, just do what you can to remain calm. I know this might be a lot to take in since you just woke up, but please try not to overexert yourself. You overdid it with your quirk and you haven't fully recovered. We did a scan of your brain about an hour ago and everything was normal. Whatever that villain did to you, it's past. You are perfectly fine and perfectly safe." Despite the man's reassurance, Midoriya's heart was ready to leap out of his chest. He did his best to stay composed, but that was a lot easier said than done. His mind was still replaying the events that transpired and hole grew where his heart was supposed to be. He hurt people, not just any people, heroes, the same ones who came to try and save him. Were they truly alright? What became of them? What was going to become of him? Yanagi just said that he wasn't in any trouble, but could he really trust the man's words? The next thought that popped into his head was one that he couldn't really make sense of. I's quirk. Although things were still a bit foggy, he clearly remembered that masked man telling All Might and Katsuragi that he gave him Tornado's quirk. But that couldn't have been true. Something like that was impossible. Quirks were genetic. They weren't something that could be passed between people. It violated the very understanding that society had of quirks altogether. However, deep down, something was telling him that it was true. The boy was snapped out of his thoughts when the elderly man once again placed his hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry about any of that right now. Now that you're awake, we'll need to run a couple of quick tests to clear you to be freed from these ridiculous restraints. Do you think that you can handle that?" All the boy did was give the man a weak nod. He was unsure of a lot of things right now, but all he could do for the time being was play along and do as he was told. About an hour later, Midoriya was finally done with the exams from Yanagi and a few other doctors that were assigned to him. The boy did his best to keep his mind off of what happened, but every now and then he would have flashbacks of the night before, and all of the new information that he was still having trouble processing. To combat this, Midoriya just kept striking up conversation with his classmate's grandfather to keep his mind off of things. As it turns out, Sho Yanagi was one of the top neurologists in the country, and he was apparently an expert in telekinetic quirks who was called in just to look over him. It was odd how the man had a rather cheery disposition, which was a stark contrast from the younger Yanagi's stoic personality. Once the testing was done, Midoriya was freed from his restraints and finally had the chance to move around freely. His body still felt a bit weak, but that was expected considering he used the overdrive technique that Katsuragi explicitly warned him against. A few hours later, the boy was finally reunited with his parents, and it was certainly shocking to see his father come into the room along with his mother. As it turns out, the black-haired man booked the first flight back to Japan after hearing the news that he was kidnapped. Midoriya was certainly glad to have him around, mainly because he was the perfect person to keep his mother from flooding the place with her tears. But that warm-hearted reunion was short-lived when a man in a trench coat came into the room. "I apologize for interrupting," the man said politely. "I'm Detective Naomosa Tsukachi. I'm currently overseeing the case regarding the League of Villains." "Hello, Detective. What can we do for you?" Hisashi asked. "I apologize for the abruptness of this, but I was hoping that you would allow me to talk to your son so that we can get his statement regarding the details of what transpired. To my understanding, you've already been notified that your son will not be facing any sort of punishment. But I think it's best that we hurry and get this done so we can get out of his hair." "Can't this wait?" Inko protested. "I just got my son back and you want to interrogate him about what happened. I completely understand if you'd prefer to postpone this for a later date." Midoriya stayed silent as he thought about what he should do. He was still trying to come to terms with everything that happened, and a lot of stuff was coming at him way too fast for any normal person to deal with. But he knew that the quicker he got this over with, the sooner he'd be able to relax. "I understand, sir. I think it's best that we hurry up and get this over with," the boy then said. Izuku and Ko gave her son a bewildered look. "It's fine, Mom. I honestly just want to get this over with." "Are you sure?" Hisashi asked him. "Yeah, thank you for your cooperation, young man. I have a room available on the next floor up where we can talk. I won't be asking anything invasive, I just need your account of what happened. After that, our business will be concluded." All Midoriya did was give the man a silent nod before the four of them exited the room. While he and the detective made their way over the questioning area, Hisashi and Inko were escorted over to another part of the hospital. Once they reached their destination, Midoriya found himself in a plain-looking office with a single window overseeing the city streets and a camera already set up on a tripod. "Now, Midoriya-san, you don't have to say anything that you aren't comfortable with me knowing. The footage from this camera will only be used as a reference for later on when we finally track down the men who kidnapped you. It's strictly confidential." "I understand. There's a few things that I want to cover, but I think it's best for you to just give your side of the story. So, where do you want to start?" "Let's begin with the masked man. When did you first meet him?" The green-haired boy let out a long sigh before mustering up the courage to speak. He really didn't know where to begin with that. So in his mind, it was best to just start from that day on the rooftop. I guess it would be easier to start at the beginning. I first met him about 10 months before the start of the school year. Unbeknownst to Midoriya, the camera was actually a live feed into a separate location on the other end of the hallway. Inside that room were Principal Nezu, Recovery Girl, a heavily bandaged Toshinori Yagi, Gran Torino, and Sir Night-Eye, who all watched via our laptop. For a good 4 to 5 minutes the heroes listened to every last word that came out of the boy's mouth with rapt attention. And to say that the mood quickly shifted would be an understatement. As more and more time passed, it was hard for the adults to wrap their heads around everything that they heard. But there was one detail in particular that stood out the most. Toshinori, for the love of God, please tell me that boy is not telling the truth. The jet quirk user pinched the bridge of his nose as he glared towards the blonde-haired man. Yagi didn't respond, instead the man just stood silent. He himself was still reeling from the testimony. A lot of things suddenly started to make sense and the man honestly had no clue how to react. After listening to Midoriya's account of that day on the rooftop, he couldn't believe what he had heard. Did Midoriya truly think that he said those words to him? Toshinori Yagi would never let such disgusting things come out of his mouth. It would go against everything that he stood for as a person and a hero. That boy is going to need some serious counseling. Recovery Girl shook her head. Indeed, Nezu nodded. The situation was way worse than what he anticipated. He'll have a chat with Inuo-kun later to set up a session with him. But that's not the only thing that concerns me. You're right, the healing heroine interjected. The scarring on that boy's body is another issue altogether. I haven't interacted with him that much, but he obviously has some deep-rooted depression issues that were never properly addressed. This is a goddamn mess. Gran Torino continued shaking his head. I need to talk to him, Yagi suddenly declared, surprising most of the others in the room. What? It's obvious that young Midoriya's memories have been manipulated. More so than he probably realizes. I think it's best for me to talk to him and set the record straight. I strongly advise against that, Toshinori-kun, Nezu told the man. What? I agree with Nezu. Recovery Girl chimed in. That child has been through a lot in the last few days. His whole world has practically been turned upside down. And the last thing he needs right now is you going up to him to try and prove your innocence. Yagi wanted to protest this, but it was hard to argue with the woman's logic. Although he agreed that it was best to give his student some time to recover from this entire ordeal, he still felt the need to clear the air between them. It was obvious that All for One had some bigger scheme planned for the boy, but he'll have to wait until a later time to figure out exactly what that was. How are those other two doing? Gran Torino then asked, hoping to quickly change the subject. Bakugo woke up a couple of hours ago and I've already patched up his arms. I'm going to check up on him immediately after this. Recovery Girl answered. What about Katsuragi-san? She's still recovering from having her jaw reset, but I suspect that she'll wake up pretty soon. Her and Midoriya both overused their quirks, but it looks like she expanded a lot more energy than he did. Forgive me for my rudeness, but we need to address the situation with her immediately. Night-Eye finally spoke up. That woman will undoubtedly have some questions about what All for One said, and we need to figure out exactly what we're going to tell her. Silence fell over the group for a few seconds as everyone pondered over the man's words. If the information they now had was true, then Midoriya was in possession of her sister's quirk. It was safe to say that All for One wasn't lying, and the timelines added up almost perfectly. But now they were going to have to figure out a way to break the news to the woman without overwhelming her. As expected, Night-Eye was completely against telling the woman the truth altogether. His reasoning was that it could put the secret of One for All in jeopardy. However, after a brief discussion, the Foresight user agreed to only tell her the bare minimum of information, only the parts that were relevant to what she needed to know. In any case, everyone knew that they were going to have a long and difficult road ahead of them. Thank you, Midoriya-san. I have no further questions for you, Tsukachi said to Midoriya after the boy was finally done talking. Never before had the man hated his ability to detect lies, because right now he truly wished that none of what he heard was true. But as much as he despised having to put the victim of a kidnapping through a soft interrogation, the detective still had a job to do. The only bright side to all of this was that he now had a good enough reason to begin a formal investigation into the boy's previous school. There were a few gaps in his inquiry that Midoriya had unknowingly filled during his testimony, and he was more than happy to submit a request for his department to immediately look into Aldera Junior High. Yes, sir, the boy replied. I'm sorry to have to put you through all of this, but rest assured that the police will be out of your hair. So I am not in any trouble, he nervously asked. I guarantee that nothing will happen to you. The villain himself admitted to using a mind control quirk on you, so you can't be held responsible for your actions while under the influence of his quirk. I see something about that still didn't sit well with the boy. The fact that he injured so many people weighed heavily on his mind, along with everything else that happened. What about everyone else? The heroes that were present were already briefed on the situation, and they were more than forgiving of what you were forced to do, especially given the circumstances. You won't have to worry about any type of backlash from them. The man continued. It was mostly the truth, and the only issue they were going to have to deal with on that end was an already agitated Endeavor. All right, and since there were no witnesses to what happened between you and Blizzard, we can sweep that under the rug pretty easily. The HPSC will clean that up and take care of the damages. So as far as the public is concerned, it never happened. Midoriya should have been happy after hearing that. He was pretty much going to walk away from this entire debacle without any actual consequences. But that did nothing to change his feelings on the matter. He may not have been in control of himself during the fight, but that didn't make it any better. On top of all the heroes that got hurt, Bakugo was an entirely different issue altogether. He was going to have to face the explosion user at some point, and he could already tell that it wasn't going to be far from a pleasant encounter. Maybe I should think about switching schools, he said to himself in slightly joking manner before Tsukachi stood up from his seat. Well, our business here is concluded, Midoriya-san. You are free to go and relax for the rest of your stay. Once again, I do apologize for having to put you through this. It's fine, sir. In any case, I hope you have a nice and relaxing rest of your day. Make sure that you get plenty of rest. Now that this portion is done, you'll be able to receive visitors tomorrow depending on what the hospital staff says. Ensure that a lot of your classmates are eager to see that you're in good health. Yes, thank you, sir, the boy dryly stated before the two of them began making their way back to his room. Now that all of this was over, all Midoriya wanted to do was rest and figure what he was going to do next. The next day, Takagi was rapidly moving through the building as she made her way over to where the receptionist told her that Midoriya was supposed to be staying. Naturally, she wasn't allowed to run in a hospital, but that certainly didn't stop the girl from walking at a very brisk pace. 319, 320, 321 here at his room 322 the girl's feet came to a grinding halt when she finally found what she was looking for. Takagi paused while reaching for the handle, only now realizing how totally unprepared she was for this situation. On the other side of this door was Midoriya, and she had no clue what to expect. She had no idea what he had to go through during his time being held captive by those villains and wondered what she should do. A part of her wanted to grill the guy about everything that happened and slap him for giving himself up in the first place. But another part of her wanted to just wrap her arms around him and give him the biggest hug ever. Deciding that waiting was a lot more painful than taking action, the green-haired teen simply turned the handle and flung the door open, completely forgetting to knock altogether. The moment the entrance was opened, she was met with the sight of Midoriya sitting up on the bed and stretching his arms out above his head. The boy looked fine and didn't have any obvious injuries that could be seen at first glance. Izuku Takagi blurted out, startling the boy enough to make him jump. As Setsuna he widened his eyes at the sight of her. Takagi didn't really know what came over her at that moment, but the green-haired girl let instincts take over and rushed him without any regard for what was going on around her. In the fraction of a second, she closed the distance between the two of them and crashed her lips into his while grabbing either side of his face. The young couple stayed in that position for a good 10 seconds before she finally decided to let go of him. Naturally, Midoriya was a blushing mess because of the sudden act of affection, and the boy's eyes were practically swirling around in his head. "I'm so glad that you're okay," she smiled at him while clutching his shoulders. "Don't you ever do something that stupid ever again. Do you know how worried I was about you?" Setsuna order yo. Izuku the metaphorical record in Takagi's head scratched at the sound of another voice in the room. And against her better judgment, the girl turned her head to the right and found herself looking at two other people whose presence she failed to register when she suddenly barged in. One was a short woman with green hair and matching eyes who had an expression of pure confusion plastered onto her face. The other was a tall man with curly, black hair and black eyes. He was rather plain-looking, but his most prominent feature were the numerous freckles scattered all over his face. Takagi was pretty damn good when it came to math, so it was easy for her to solve the equation of who exactly she was looking at. "Oh shit, well this is unexpected," the man said in a slightly amused tone. "Izuku, how is this?" the woman questioned, seeing as there was no way out of this painfully awkward and embarrassing situation. Midoriya mustered up as much courage as he could and gave the two adults a wobbly grin. Dad kind of already knows what's going, so he started as the redness on his cheeks further intensified. "Mom, this is Setsuna Takagi and she is my girlfriend." What? As much as she wanted to be happy about being referred to as the boy's girlfriend, Takagi quickly tried to find a way to remedy this total blunder that she put herself into. Deciding that it was best to just lean in and play to her strengths, the girl gave the elder Midoriya members a confident smirk that showed off her razor-sharp teeth. "It's nice to meet you guys. At least now I know where Izuku gets all his good looks from." Nailed it. It had been 2 days since Midoriya was released from the hospital and allowed to go home with his family. And as strange as it was to admit, the boy was finally able to relax considering everything that happened to him. But despite getting to rest in his own bed and eat some of his favorite food, there was still a lot running through his mind. The first was his uncomfortable talk with Recovery Girl and his parents during his stay at the hospital. The healing heroine recommended that he get counseling from Hound Dog if his parents decided to let him go back to UA. The reason for this was because of the scarring on his abdomen that he had been able to hide up until this point. Despite the reassurance that he wasn't cutting himself anymore, the woman still thought that it was a good idea for him to see the man at least once every week and get some type of evaluation from him. And both Hisashi and Ko had a hard time disagreeing with her. They still had time to come to a decision, but either way the boy knew that it needed to happen regardless if he wanted to remain in the hero course. The second thing still weighing heavily on his conscience was his quirk. Or more accurately, Tornado's quirk. Midoriya still had no clue what to think about all of this, but the possibility that he was in possession of that woman's quirk was difficult to think about. Forget the possibility of quirk transference being a real thing. How could he even begin to rationalize something like this being true? This entire situation was like some sick joke. On one hand, he wasn't just a late bloomer like he thought he was all this time, meaning that he was truly born quirkless, and the fact that he now had this quirk was the result of plain old dumb luck, as one would call it. On the other hand, it was hard to come to terms with this information. The boy's mind then flashed over to Katsuragi. Did she know what were her thoughts about all of this? If he was having a hard time, she might have had it even worse. Not only did this mean that her sister was truly dead, but someone that she knew was now in possession of her quirk. What exactly did the woman think about him now? Would she hate him, pity him? In all honesty, this was all too much for Midoriya to be thinking about right now when he should be focused on resting. Just when the boy sat up from his bed to make his way over to the kitchen, he suddenly got a notification on his phone. T-Rex, say, how are you doing? Rabbit, good. T-Rex, that's good. T-Rex, soon a scale of 110, how bad of a first impression did I make on your parents? Rabbit, I don't think it was bad at all. My dad actually likes your spunky attitude. T-Rex, and your mom? Rabbit, I think she still needs time to process. T-Rex, I wouldn't doubt it. T-Rex, Soto, you think you can hang out today? Rabbit, my mom doesn't really want me to leave the house. Rabbit, but I can talk to her about it. To be honest, I need to get some fresh air. T-Rex, awesome, we haven't been on a date in a while. Rabbit, I have my last checkup at the hospital this morning, but I should be free this afternoon. T-Rex, sweet, I can meet you at your house. Everything will be my treat. Rabbit, you really don't have to do that. T-Rex, you're right, but I think the situation calls for me to pamper you a little bit. Rabbit, it's fine, really. T-Rex is 15, oh good. Rabbit, yeah, that should be fine. T-Rex, cool, he'll see you then. Later that morning, Midoriya and his parents made the journey over to the hospital. Upon arrival, they were quickly escorted into the room that Recovery Girl was using for the day and were surprised to see that Katsuragi was already there. Midoriya really didn't know how he should act around the woman right now, especially considering all that happened up until this point. He couldn't even find the courage to look her in the eye when they greeted each other. Katsuragi seemed to be her usual self, and she didn't appear to harbor any type of resentment towards him that he was able to pick up on. But he could tell that she was exhausted, judging by the bags under her eyes. Once the greetings were out of the way, Principal Nezu of all people came walking into the room. After formally introducing himself to Inko and Asashi, the unidentified mammal began explaining what they were all doing here. The man brought the two elder Midoriyas up to speed on the whole situation concerning his quirk, and to say that the two adults took a while to process the information would be putting it mildly. Asashi was doing his best to take it all in, while Inko nearly fainted a few times. After a robust round of questions and explanations, Nezu was finally comfortable enough to make his proposal. Midoriya-kun, do you know how quirks work exactly? Nezu asked him. Yes, sir, the boy nodded. It mainly has to do with the quirk factor, which determines a person's physical and genetic traits. The key component for this are Plus alpha cells, and those are unique to each individual. That's exactly correct. Recovery Girl smiled. The elderly woman was actually impressed that a teenage boy knew something like off the top of his head. So what's that have to do with anything? Inko inquired. I have a theory, Nezu announced. Like Midoriya-kun said, Plus alpha cells are unique to an individual. They even contain that person's DNA. We don't exactly know how all for one's quirk works, but I believe that it has something to do with the transference of the Plus alpha cells themselves, if that makes sense. So what you're saying is if Izuku is actually in possession of Tornado's quirk, then his body might contain her cells. Asashi then said. That's exactly correct, Midoriya-san. Of course this is just a theory, but it might be our best bet to verify whether or not that man's claim was true. I guess that's why you asked me to come here. Katsuragi interjected. You need me to be a frame of reference. If this theory of yours is correct, then mine and Midoriya-kun's cells will be a match. Yes, this is also confusing. Inko began rubbing her head. The woman honestly didn't understand all this talk about quirks and DNA. She was a legal assistant, not a doctor. So what do you say? Midoriya-kun. Nezu then turned to the boy. Of course this is all voluntary, but I believe that by doing this we'll finally be able to put this case to rest. All we'll need to do is get a sample from both you and Katsuragi-kun, and then Chiyo-san will be able to analyze them. The whole process will only take a few minutes. Midoriya took a moment to think about all of this. I'll admit that it was hard to argue with Nezu's logic. The man was one of the smartest beings on the planet after all. But the fact that they were even talking about this was still pretty crazy to him. Part of him was interested in seeing if it would actually work, but the other was more than a bit terrified of finding out the result. If this theory was correct, then it would only confirm what he had been dreading for the last couple of days. It would prove that he indeed was in possession of someone else's quirk, and not just any person, but a former top hero. He pondered over this for a good 30 seconds before letting out a bit of a sigh. There was no point in trying to avoid it. and confirming whether or not all of this was true would finally bring an end to all of this nonsense. "Alright, let's do it," he said. "What about you, Katsuragi-kun? I'm on board with it as well," the green-haired woman replied. "It's worth giving it a shot." "Excellent," the unidentified mammal clapped his paws together. "It will only take Chiyosin a couple of minutes to get ready. After that, we can collect the samples and analyze the results." Everyone gave the man a quick nod before Midoriya and Katsuragi were ushered into the hallway by Recovery Girl. Although they were still a bit skeptical, the entire group was more than interested in seeing what the result of this was going to be. After Midoriya and Katsuragi had their drawn, it took Recovery Girl all of 25 minutes to process the results and make her way back into the room. The atmosphere quickly shifted and Midoriya could feel his heartbeat rapidly increasing with both nervousness and anticipation. It was like he was stuck in some weird space, one where he was both anxious and dreadful about hearing what exactly was on that piece of paper. So that's the verdict. On the other side of the room, Katsuragi wasn't doing much better herself. These last couple of days weren't exactly easy for her, and she was still trying to wrap her head around all of this. Not only did the woman have to deal with learning the truth about her sister's fate, she had to come to terms with the idea that her quirk was stolen and had been given to her own student. Deep down the woman had a feeling that it was true. All the signs seemed to be pointing in that direction, but that didn't make it any less hard to believe. Time seemed to stand still before Recovery Girl let out a short breath and gave the two greenettes a curious look. "I ran the test twice just to be safe and confirmed it with one of the other doctors in the lab. Both sets of cells are a match," she announced, taking a moment to pause before continuing. "I can confirm that the plus alpha cells in Midoriya's body are in fact Tatsumaki's. Siblings usually share 50% of their DNA with each other, and that is exactly the case with both samples." Silence fell over the room as everyone took a moment to absorb the healing heroine's words. No one really knew exactly what to say in this situation. Their suspicions, fears had been confirmed and now it was a matter of what they were going to do next. "Well, I guess all those jokes about us being related weren't so wrong after all." Katsuragi finally broke the tension with a slight grin on her face. "Yeah, I guess so," Midoriya responded with a wobbly grin of his own. "Well shit," Hisashi finally released the breath that he had been holding. "So what happens now?" Inko nervously asked. "Nothing," Recovery Girl quickly reassured the woman. "We just needed to confirm whether or not this all was true. Now that we have done that, we can bring this matter to a close." "I see. Excuse me, Midoriya-san, but is it alright if I talk to your son for a few minutes?" Katsuragi looked to the boy's parents. The two adults shared a brief look before glancing over to their son. The green-haired teen still looked particularly uneasy and they were worried about what was going through his head right now. "Yeah, I'm fine with that," the boy then said before standing up. "There's a room on the other end of the hall that I'm using as an office for the day. You two can talk in there," the elderly heroine said to them. "While Midoriya-kun and Katsuragi-kun have their chat, I was hoping that the three of us could talk as well," Nezu said to Inko and Hisashi. The two of them simply nodded before allowing their son to leave. Midoriya was curious about what Katsuragi wanted to say to him. A few things popped into his head and none of them were particularly pleasant. But in his opinion, it was better to just get this over with. Barely 2 minutes later, the two telekinesis users were inside of the aforementioned office and Katsuragi was quick to lock the door behind her. Midoriya's already agitated nerves were getting worse with each passing second and he had no clue what the woman was about to say to him. There was a painfully awkward silence between the two of them that seemed to last for eternity. "Fubukusani, I don't really know what to say right now," he shakily said. "To be honest, me neither. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this. I am sorry." Midoriya apologized. He doesn't really know why, but it seemed like the appropriate thing to say. "What for?" "Your sister," he replied. Her quirk." Katsuraga's gaze was stone cold for a moment before her face softened into a smile. "Look, Midoriya-kun, I came to terms with my sister's death a long time ago. All this did for me was confirm what I already knew. So you have no reason to feel guilty for any of that. In fact, the only thing I'm worried about right now is you." What he gave her a perplexed look. "He'll admit that I'm having a hard time with all of this. But I bet that doesn't even hold a candle to what you're going through. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," he said in a not so convincing tone while averting his gaze. "I can tell that's not true. You look exhausted and there might as well be a cloud over your head." All the boy did was remain silent. He had always been told that he was as easy to read as a book, so it shouldn't be a surprise that the woman was able to pick up on his mood. "Look, I want you to know that I am in no way, shape or form upset with you. Frankly, it would be ridiculous of me to even think that way. You didn't ask for any of this. But still, as long as we're being honest, I'm actually kind of glad. If there was anyone that I'd want to have that quirk, it would definitely be you." What the boy lifted his head. "Did he hear that right?" "Yeah," she nodded. "You're a smart kid and you obviously want to become a hero for the right reasons. That's a lot more than I can say for myself at your age. So it's kind of reassuring to know that my sister's quirk is the hands of someone so capable. That's really nice of you to say. However, I can already tell that you're letting this affect you a lot more than it should. I understand that a lot has been thrown at you in a very short amount of time. But it's important for you to not focus on the negatives. I can practically feel the sadness radiating off your body. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. I know, believe me, I've been there. I hit a rough patch when my sister first disappeared and let that consume more than I should've. And because of that, I think it's better for you to focus on the bright side when it comes to these kinds of things. I'm not saying that you should just pretend that none of this stuff ever happened. But you shouldn't let yourself get dragged down into a hole because of this. So what do you think I should do then? Midoriya then asked. The easy answer would be to just take it one day at a time and do what you can to relax and stay positive. I know it sounds incredibly cliche, but you'd be surprised at how effective it is. I see, he said quietly. Although she did have a point, trying not to let any of this get to him was a tall order. His entire world had been flipped upside down in a matter of days, and there was still so much that he wasn't sure about. Before he could continue, Katsuragi placed her hand on his shoulder and gave him a warm smile. If you ever need someone to talk to, he'll be more than happy to listen. Besides, the two of us are going to be spending a lot of time together in the future anyway. What? Of course, now that we officially know that you have my sister's quirk, it's pretty much my responsibility to train you to make sure that you master it. Plus, there's no way that you were going to get rid of me that easily. You did promise that you'd join my agency after you graduate. Yeah, I guess you're right. Now that I think about it, since you have One-Ichan's DNA inside of you, that really does make us siblings in some weird roundabout sort of way. Katsuragi then said in a joking manner to lighten the mood a bit. You know, I've always wanted to have a younger sibling. Midoriya was able to pick up on the woman's attempt to cheer him up and decided to just roll with it. I guess I should start getting used to calling you One-Ichan then. He quipped. Just don't let Osanachan hear you say that. I already have to deal with her making jokes about it whenever you come up in conversation around the agency. Yeah, a few of my classmates would have a field day with that. With the mood now lightened a bit, the two pseudo-siblings agreed to rejoin the others to conclude their business for the day. Midoriya would be the first to admit that he still had his reservations about this entire situation. But the fact that Katsuragi was so agreeable about the whole thing did help out a lot. Try and stay positive, huh? Later that afternoon, Takagi found herself walking up the steps to Midoriya's apartment building. The girl was uncharacteristically nervous about this encounter, which was more than understandable considering her less than stellar introduction to the boy's parents. In fact, Takagi was determined to not accidentally make a fool of herself again. As funny as it sounded, the girl ended up asking Kendo and Shiozaki for advice on what to do, seeing as she didn't have a mom of her own. And Kayama was far from the best reference point to use for these kinds of things. She thought it was best to look to her friends for help, which didn't go as well as she hoped considering their advice to her was to essentially not be her usual self. Before she knew it, Takagi was standing in front of the door and paused for a moment before ringing the bell. The girl only had to wait a couple of seconds before Inko appeared before her and welcomed her into their home. Takagi-chan, it's nice to see you, the woman greeted in a peculiar tone. Hello Midoriya-san, how are you doing today? She responded with a polite bow. Takagi typically wasn't one for formalities, but there was no harm in going the extra mile. I'm doing well. Come on inside. Izuku told me that you two would be hanging out today. He's still getting ready, but you can just have a seat on the sofa. The girl nodded before entering the apartment and sitting down in the aforementioned seat. What she wasn't expecting, however, was for Inko to sit down in the chair directly across from her, with only the small coffee table separating them. There was an awkward silence that lingered for a few moments as Takagi subconsciously tried to keep her posture straight and not appear too relaxed. In the back of her mind, Takagi could tell that her boyfriend's mom was sizing her up, and she had to stop herself from trying to break the tension with some slightly inappropriate joke that probably wouldn't go over too well with her. You have a really nice place here. The girl then spoke. I really like the decorations. Thank you, the green-haired woman replied. Inko really didn't know what to make of this girl. She seemed nice, and she certainly didn't want to judge her unnecessarily. But the woman was still trying to come to terms with her son having a girlfriend that he never bothered telling her about. And the fact that her ex-husband who was living on the other side of the planet had knowledge of this certainly left a bad taste in her mouth. So Takagi-chan, what do you and Izuku plan on doing today? Nothing really, just going out for a bite to eat and chilling out. I see. The woman continued sipping a cup of tea that seemed to magically appear out of nowhere. This is so awkward, the girl said to herself. Isn't this the exact opposite of how things were supposed to go? Wasn't the guy supposed to be the one who gets silently scrutinized by the girl's parents when he first comes to her house? Now that she thought about it, she really needed to stop watching those sappy romance movies with her sister. Thankfully, this painful encounter soon ended when Midoriya came into the living room. The boy was wearing a simple pair of khaki shorts along with a red t-shirt with the katakana for business casual written out on it, which was pretty amusing seeing as the girl was also wearing a pair of khaki shorts, except she was sporting a black t-shirt with the picture of a velociraptor on it. Hey, the boy greeted her with a slightly nervous smile on her face. Hey, she smiled back. Are you ready to go? Yeah, well, I hope you two have a wonderful time. Don't stay out too late, Inko said before standing up and making her way towards the kitchen to start preparing dinner. Yeah, no problem. The young couple were quick to take their leave and Takagi was finally able to let out a breath she didn't even realize that she was holding. Once the two were far enough away from the door, the girl turned to Midoriya and gave him a toothy smirk. I don't think your mom likes me very much. What makes you say that? He tilted his head in confusion. She was giving me this weird look before you showed up. Don't worry about it. he reassured her. She's kind of like me when it comes to being awkward around people. Speaking of which, where's your dad at? He's staying in a hotel not too far away from here. Cool, she responded. At the very least, she knew that she had the approval of at least one of the boy's parents. So, where are we going? Midoriya then asked, hoping to change subjects. There's a ramen shop I looked up that isn't too far away from here. It's supposed to be pretty good judging by the reviews I saw online. Cool, was all the boy said. Now that they were away from any potentially prying eyes, Takagi finally felt comfortable enough to grab the boy's hand and interlock their fingers together. It was weird how she missed doing this small act of affection considering they had only been separated for a few days. But now she had the entire day to make up for lost time. And with that, the young couple were ready to embark on their impromptu date. Barely an hour had passed by the time the two greenettes were walking out of the ramen shop that Takagi picked out. And everything had been going pretty well so far. The two spent the first part of their date catching up on what all happened after the events of the camp, and Midoriya was relieved to know that everyone who was subject to the gas attack were only out for about a day before waking up. The boy made a mental note to tell his classmates that he was okay since they hadn't gotten any updates on what was going on with him. Man, that food was pretty damn good, Takagi cheered as the two strolled down the city street. No kidding, Midoriya smiled. I haven't had any pork ramen in a while. We should definitely make that place a regular spot. Small shops always have the best selection. Sounds good to me. So I really didn't have anything else planned besides that. Is there anything that you want to do or somewhere that you wanted to go? Nothing really comes to mind. Oh come on, there's gotta be somewhere. Aren't there any spots that you usually go to just chill? Midoriya took a moment to think about possible venues that would be good for the two of them to relax. But the boy was drawing a blank. As sad as it sounded, he never really had a chance to explore the town as much as other people his age. Since he didn't even have friends up until recently, the boy mostly spent his time either at home or at the library. However, there was one place that did pop into his head. Well, there's Dagoba Beach. But it's really not a place for people to hang out. Sounds good to me. Takagi gave him a devious grin. But I'm not really prepared for a beach outing. Unless you're just saying that so you can get a chance to see me in a swimsuit. The girl then smirked even wider and wiggled her eyebrows at him. Of course, this slight teasing was enough to force a bit of redness onto the boy's cheeks. And I know that's not at all. Yeah, I figured. But hey, the two of us can just swim around in our underwear. I made sure to match my bra and panties today so no one would look at us funny. Plus, I've been dying to get you out of that shirt for a while now. The girl continued her teasing by leaning in a bit closer and tugging at the collar of her shirt to give him a peek at her blue bra strap. Yes, Setsuna, and now fully flustered, Midoriya squeaked out. Takagi immediately began laughing after that. The girl was worried that he was starting to get used to her antics, so she was glad that she could get him to fold so easily. But in all seriousness, spending some time at the beach was a pretty good idea. It was the perfect place for the two of them to spend some quality time together. So, why don't you want to go there? It's actually where I go to train my quirk. The place isn't really suited for hanging out. It's kind of a dump, but it's where I spend most of my time, Midoriya explained. The fact that Midoriya just admitted to spending most of his free time at a dump quickly reminded Takagi that the boy was essentially a hermit up until recently. She made a mental note to make sure that he got out more. But seeing as she didn't have any better ideas besides maybe catching a movie, the girl decided to just roll with it. Hey, I guess it's worth checking out. The girl shrugged. Ooh, alright. The boy nodded before the two turned the corner and began making their way over to the beach. Once the two finally arrived at their destination, Takagi was certainly surprised by what she saw. When Midoriya said that this place was a dump, she was actually expecting it to be well a dump. But that certainly wasn't the case. Along the way, the boy explained to her that he had been cleaning up the place ever since his quirk manifested. And it plainly obvious that he was doing a stellar job. The entire beach looked like something out of an old era video game. There were massive cubes and pyramids of garbage neatly stacked along the coastline, and even a few pillars that Midoriya used to create a makeshift obstacle course for his flying. Takagi would be first to admit that it actually looked pretty fun, and it was clear that Midoriya had put a ton of work into this place. So you've been cleaning this place up all by yourself? Yeah, the boy nervously admitted. Why he decided to bring his girlfriend here of all places was a complete mystery to him. In hindsight, maybe he should have suggested a movie theater, or anything even remotely more date-worthy. Holy shit, that's insane. It must have taken months to get it like this. You even neatly stacked all those old refrigerators over there. The girl pointed to one of the pillars about 100 meters away from them. Yeah, he laughed. So where do you usually chill out around here? There's gotta be some kind of rest spot that you use. I usually just make a chair, he replied. Make a chair. Instead of responding, Midoriya activated his quirk and used it to bring over some nearby pieces of scrap metal. Takagi then watched as he quite literally constructed two decent-sized chairs right in front of them. Once he was finished, the boy took the liberty of sitting down in one and motioning for her to do the same. However, the green-haired girl had other plans. Instead of sitting in the one that he made for her, Takagi walked right over to Midoriya and sat in the boy's lap. She even went a bit further by draping his arm over her shoulder and snuggling up really close to him. Close enough that their faces were practically touching. Much better, she said to him with a satisfied look on her face. I'm glad that you're comfortable. The boy blushed. The two remained in that position and engaged in small talk for a good 10 minutes before Takagi finally decided to put her plan in motion. Hey, you said that no one ever comes around here, right? No, not really, why? Takagi's face quickly shifted into an almost predator-like smile before the girl grabbed him by the chin and tilted his face down towards hers. Because now that we're alone, I finally get that chance to do this. Midoriya didn't even get a chance to respond before the girl's lips crashed into his own and he felt Takagi throw her arms around his neck. His heart rate suddenly skyrocketed and quickly realized that relaxing was the last thing on the girl's mind right now. Before he knew it, Takagi broke away from the kiss and he could practically see the lewd intent behind her eyes. So she said while rubbing the side of his face, "You want to make out?" "Huh, do you want to make out? Don't get me wrong, I definitely enjoy the regular kisses. But I think it's time that we turn up the heat a bit," she told him. Maybe it was all the starting to rush to her head, but in her opinion they were long overdue for this step. Midoriya sputtered for a second before managing to put together his response. I've never done that before." "Yeah, that's pretty obvious. But neither have I. Besides, it can't be that hard now, can it?" "Sure." The boy nodded. It wasn't like he was opposed to the idea, quite the opposite actually. He was honestly more surprised that the girl just came out and asked him as opposed to just doing it. "Awesome, now just let me." Takagi grinned before readjusting her position. A moment ago she was just sitting on top of him. Now the girl was full and straddling him and he was thankful that no one was around to see this. Without any hesitation, Takagi leaned in and once again placed her lips on top of his. Out of instinct, Midoriya wrapped his arms around her waist and that was all that she needed to begin the next part. The girl ever so slightly parted his lips with her tongue and before they knew it, the two of them were engaging in a full-on makeout session. In truth, Takagi really had no idea what she was doing. But she had heard enough from both her sister and Kayama to have a general idea of how to go about this. This lasted for all of 10 seconds before Midoriya suddenly jerked his back and covered his mouth with his hand. "Oh, what's wrong?" The now blushing teen shot him a concerned look. "I think I just cut my tongue." It took a second for those words to register in her mind before Takagi came to a rather embarrassing realization. One that she probably should have taken into account before trying to go ahead with her plan. "Oh my teeth," the girl immediately chastised herself for forgetting something so obvious. "Are you all right?" "Yeah," he reassured her, but that did nothing to lessen the blow to the girl's self-esteem. The mood quickly shifted to one of complete awkwardness and Takagi wished that she had some sort of time manipulation quirk to remedy this blunder of hers. After taking a couple of minutes to recover, the young couple sat in silence while looking off towards the ocean. Mainly because neither of them knew exactly what to say about what just happened. "Sorry about that." The girl apologized once again, only for Midoriya to insist that he wasn't upset about it. Actually, the boy found the whole ordeal kind of funny. With that rather unpleasant experience now behind them, the young couple decided to leave the beach and wander around the city for the rest of the afternoon. Nothing exciting happened after that, but it was still an enjoyable day nonetheless. Eventually it got dark and two agreed to part ways so that Takagi could get home before it was too late. And like usual, she was sure to plant a long kiss on the boy's lips before getting onto her train. One that didn't involve potentially causing him another oral injury. Aside from that small mishap from earlier, the two of them had a great time. And much to her chagrin, Takagi reminded herself to ask her sister for some advice when it came to kissing your boyfriend when you have a full set of razor-sharp teeth in your mouth. After finally returning home and having dinner with his parents, Midoriya was laying on his bed while scrolling through his phone. Unfortunately for him, all of the major hero news sites were still running the story about All Might and his fight against All for One, which was the last thing that he wanted to think about right now. The boy still had no clue about what he was going to do when he ran into his heroics teacher again. But that was a bridge he preferred to cross at a later date. Deciding to take Katsuraga's advice and keep his focus away from all that, the green-haired teen ended up flipping through his social media accounts to see what else was going on in the world. Much to his surprise, there was a story about a bombing on Ai Island barely 24 hours ago. And from what he could tell, it was pretty similar to ones that were happening in Japan. Now that he thought about it, there hadn't been any of those in the last few weeks. This also reminded Midoriya that Anohana was supposed to be in that area. It had been a couple of weeks since he last talked to the pink-eyed boy and he thought that it was a good idea to check up on him to see if he was safe. No doubt the other teen had heard the news about what happened to him as well. Just as he opened up his contacts list, a text notification popped up on his screen. One that was from his gray-haired classmate, Ryuko Yanagi. "Ghost, my grandfather just told me that you got released from the hospital. How are you doing?" "Rabbit, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. How are you?" "Ghost, I'm good. Ghost, sorry I didn't come visit you. My parents have me on lockdown because of what happened." "Rabbits, it's fine. I was actually going to let everyone know that I was safe in the group chat." "Ghost, good. Rabbit, it's pretty cool that your grandfather is a famous doctor." "Ghost, I guess." "Rabbit, so is there something that you needed?" "Ghost, no. I just thought that it would be a good idea to see how you were doing." "Rabbit, I appreciate it. And I'm really sorry for what happened back at the camp. I really shouldn't have put you and the others in that position." "Ghost, don't worry about it. It's not like you really had a lot of options." "Rabbit, good point. Ghost, I'm just glad that you and everyone else are doing well." "Rabbit, same. Ghost, well, sorry for bothering you and have a good rest of your day. He'll see you around. Rabbit, you too. He'll be honest, Midoriya-san. I'm glad that you're still going to allow your son to attend UA, Kan said to Inko. Currently, Midoriya, Inko, Kan and Kayama were all sitting in the living room of the Midoriya household, and all of them were discussing the boy's future when it came to school. A couple of weeks had passed since the events of Kamino Ward, and it was announced that UA was going to be switching over to a boarding school format. The reason behind this was so that the students could be better protected. Yes, well, to be perfectly frank, I still have my reservations about all of this. If it wasn't for my son and exhaustion, I would have already started looking into other hero schools for him to go to. The green-haired woman responded. I understand your concerns. Any parent in your position would feel the same way. But you have my personal guarantee that Midoriya, along with the rest of the students, will be properly taken care of. Kayama smiled. It was weird for Midoriya to see the woman in a professional-looking gray pantsuit, which was a far cry from her usual NSFW attire. Truth be told, it did take a fair bit of convincing on Midoriya and Asashi's part to get Inko to agree to this, along with the parents' prior talk to Nezu during their recent hospital visit. The green-haired woman wasn't going to stifle her son's dream of becoming a hero and have him switch to a regular high school, especially after everything that he went through just to get to this point. But the fact that UA had allowed 2 villain attacks on the school was a major concern. If Inko wasn't so sure that her son could defend himself against these threats, she would have already had him submit his application to Shiksu. There's also the matter of your agreement with Principal Nezu, Kan interjected. I myself am not too clear on the details, but I have a rough idea of what's going on. Midoriya nervously shifted in his seat after hearing those words, especially since he knew what the topic of this conversation was going to be. Your son is scheduled for 1 counseling session a week with Hound Dog. Only myself, Kayama, Principal Nezu, and Recovery Girl know about this. We also took the liberty of having them take place after class on Thursdays. School clubs are closed those days and students aren't allowed to use the training facilities, so privacy won't be an issue. The themed hero continued. That's perfectly acceptable. Inko nodded. And your son will be allowed to come home on the weekends after getting approval from his teachers, which works out perfectly since you already live pretty close to campus. Kayama added on. Good. It's settled then. Aside from that, there's nothing else that we need to discuss. We'll be taking our leave now, if you don't mind. We still have a few houses that we need to visit, Kan said the 2 of them as he stood up from his seat on the couch, giving them a low bow. Yes, well, thank you for dropping by. I hope the 2 of you have an easy rest of your day. Inko replied. Thank you. We'll be seeing you next week. Midoriya. Kayama gave one final wave to the boy. Right. Once the 2 teachers finally left the apartment, Midoriya and Inko went about their day as usual. While the woman was preparing dinner for the 2 of them, the boy sat in the living room to catch up on the local news. Things hadn't been easy over the last few days, and Inko had a sneaking suspicion that they weren't going to get better anytime soon. With everything that happened, the woman found it increasingly difficult to interact with her son. Their relationship had deteriorated ever since that time he ran away from home, and now she was left wondering what she could do to make things better, which was already a tall enough order as it is. Inko couldn't help but think back to how things used to be. Only now, her pleasant memories of watching her child grow up were replaced with the knowledge that he had been keeping all of his hardships a secret in an attempt to not make her worry. If she had to describe the feeling, it was guilt. Guilt she had felt for not noticing how bad things had been for her son a lot sooner. Guilt for not doing more to make him feel loved. She did her best to make sure that he was happy, but apparently that just wasn't enough. The only bright side to all of this was the fact that he now had a quirk and actual friends, which meant that the days of him being tortured for being different were long gone. Izuku, she called out to him. Yes, I just want to let you know that I'm proud of you, sweetie. I know things haven't been great for you, but I'm glad to see that you're doing a lot better. Thanks, he said, albeit a bit awkwardly. I'm glad too. Now that you're going to be living at UA with all of your friends, I hope that you can make time to come see me. It's going to be kind of lonely without having you around. Don't worry, I'll make sure to drop by whenever I get the chance. Good. The woman smiled. You can even bring that girlfriend of yours too. I don't think we got off on the right foot last time, but I can tell that she's been a positive influence on you. I'll keep that in mind. All right, was all that the woman said before returning to the food. Things may have been rough right now, but Inko was determined to get their relationship back on track. Saitama Prefecture. The near-perfect summertime weather was a stark contrast to how Takagi was feeling right about now. To be frank, today was the one day out of the year that she disliked the most, mainly because of the metaphorical cloud that seemed to linger over her family's heads around this time. Normally, the girl would spend her time away from class bugging Tetsu or lounging about in her house. But today was different. As she placed a small bouquet of flowers down at the gravestone used to mark the memorial of her late mother, the girl couldn't help but feel a bit awkward about doing this yet again. It was hard to mourn the passing of someone that you didn't know, even if that person was the one who gave birth to you. But Takagi still made the effort to come out here to pay her respects, especially since it was the anniversary of the day that she died. This year was one of the rare occasions that she was by herself during this ritual. Her father had already stopped by on his way into work. Kayama was going to make the journey later on today and her sister was still in school. so she wouldn't be able to make the trip at all. She wasn't complaining though. Takagi actually preferred doing it this way, and as much as she hated to admit it, her dad throwing himself into his work was his way of coping with the loss. It probably wasn't the healthiest way to go about things, but she really had no right to judge him for it. Once she was done giving a silent prayer, the green-haired girl left the cemetery to continue going about her day. However, what Takagi failed to notice was the person about 36 meters behind a tree on the other end of the pathway leading up to the gravesite. Phew, I'm glad she didn't see me. Madoka Ozhana breathed out a sigh of relief as she watched the girl walk off into the distance. She had arrived at the cemetery only a few minutes ago and made sure to stay out of the green-haired girl's sight until she left. As conflicted as she was about the entire thing, Ozhana decided that it was best to avoid crossing paths with Takagi right now, mainly because she wouldn't be able to handle the possible inquiry that would come from her even being there in the first place. Ever since first meeting her during the internships, Ozhana felt weird being around Takagi. That dark green hair and those sharpened teeth were constant reminders of that day during her childhood when she was rescued from a burning building by a firefighter, only for that same woman to meet an untimely end just to keep her safe. Part of her wanted to tell the girl the truth, but she couldn't just come out and tell her that she was the reason why Takagi was forced to grow up without her mother. She honestly didn't know if she should even bring up the topic at all. So for the time being, Ozhana chose to keep that secret to herself, hoping that one day she'll be able to work up the courage to apologize to the girl for causing her and her family so much pain. Class 1B group chat. Ball, so is anyone not moving into the dorms? Boxing glove, it got kind of dodgy there for a second, but my parents agreed to it. Cross, yes, my mother was a bit reluctant as well, but Kan-sensei was very convincing. Cross, although I am surprised that Midnight Sensei wasn't her usual self. Welding torch, you got Midnight Sensei, Kan-sensei, and Present Mike were the ones who came to my house. Skeleton, my parents were actually on board with it from the start. Chameleon, does anyone know if we'll get to pick our own rooms? Fist, why? Chameleon, because I prefer to not have to deal with Midoriya and Takagi's shenanigans if at all possible. T-Rex, oh no, Monum is going to be living in the dorms too, well there goes my good mood. Chameleon, is that the best comeback that you could put together? I'm disappointed. T-Rex, if you wanted a comeback, you could try wiping some off your mom's face. Cross Setsuna. Skeleton, OOOHHH. Knife, OOHHH shit. Welding torch, OOOHHH. Dumbbell shots fired. Ball fatality. Beyblade, damn. Chameleon, well played. T-Rex, thank you, we'll be here all week. Mushroom, that escalated quickly. Bluestick, seriously. Lion, in response to the earlier inquiry, I believe that we will be able to select our own rooms once we make our return. Ball, thank God. That means I won't have to deal with hearing Tetsu snore every night. Skeleton, lucky you. Dumbbell, screw you. Fist, well at least everyone seems to be in good spirits. Ghost, this is going to be a disaster. Comic book, agreed. Crust, may God help us all. T-Rex, we should try looking on the bright side. Mushroom, what bright side? T-Rex, the hell if I know. I'm just glad that he'll get to annoy Monoma a lot more efficiently now. Dumbbell, and shall be able to cozy up with Midoriya every night. T-Rex, that too. Rabbit, this is so embarrassing. Fist, he'll be sure to ask Kan-sensei about enforcing a curfew. Apple, we're gonna have so much fun. Before they knew it, moving day quickly arrived for the first-year students of UA. As expected, packing up their belongings and saying goodbye to the families was a bit rough. But despite the fact that they would have to start attending class again in a couple of weeks, the would-be heroes were all excited to finally get back to training. Getting settled into the new dorms was actually much easier than the students had originally thought. And like they were told, Kan gave them all permission to pick out their own rooms. For Midoriya, the boy ended up getting the last room on the second floor, and on his hall were Tetsu, Honuki, and Awase. As for Takagi, the girl was able to score the first room on the third floor. Seeing as there were only 7 of them, the girls had a lot more options when it came to their selection. For most of Class 1B, everyone had their stuff unpacked and set up exactly to their liking within a few hours. The only people who were still getting their things in order were Komori, Monoma, Kiwaro, and Bondo. As for the rest of them, everyone except for Midoriya, Yanagi, and Kodai were lounging around in the common area. Man, I still can't believe how nice this place is. Honuki commented while looking around the kitchen with Shota. Seriously, it's like one big-ass mansion, Awase added. We definitely need to throw a party or something to break the place in. Takagi suggested from her spot in between Kendo and Tetsu on the sofa. We've only been here a few hours and you already want to trash the place, the orange-haired teen joked. The group of students proceeded to engage in random conversation for the next half hour or so, and Takagi was starting to wonder why Midoriya hadn't come down to join them yet. The boy said that he didn't have a lot of stuff, so it wasn't like he was still unpacking his boxes. In fact, with his quirk he should have been the first one finished getting settled in. Luckily, the girl didn't have to wait any longer before the green-haired teen came walking out of the elevator. He was wearing a simple pair of red gym shorts and a black t-shirt that actually didn't have some ironic wording written on the front of it. Hey, what took you so long? Takagi asked as he made his way over to an open seat. I was on the phone with my dad, he replied. Oh yeah, your dad lives in the US, right? I remember you mentioning that a while ago. Tetsu inquired, only for Tsunotori to immediately make her presence known. Wait, really? You never told me that the horn teen said in her native tongue. Yeah, he lives in Texas. Get the out of here, him from Texas. Why didn't you tell me that sooner? Guess it just never came up. The boy awkwardly rubbed the back of his. You'll have to let me check out your room later, Takagi suddenly suggested with a devious smirk. I didn't get to see it the last time I was at your place and am dying to know what you're hiding in there. A slight blush appeared on the boy's face. Of course, he didn't have anything that could even remotely be considered embarrassing. Now that he sold all of his old All Might junk, he actually didn't have a lot of stuff in his room at all. Just when the boy was about to respond, the main door suddenly flew open. Everyone immediately turned their heads towards the entrance and were met with a sea of sky blue hair. Casually floating above the ground was none other than Nejire Hadu. The third-year girl was wearing a pair of black shorts and a teal tank top that was doing its absolute best to hold her well-endowed chest in place. Tsuburaba's eyes nearly popped out of his head at the sight of the girl. Hada's eyes scanned around the area for a moment before locking onto Midoriya. Once she got sight of him, the girl's face shifted to a bubbly smile and Midoriya felt a slight chill go down his spine. Kohai, Hado-senpai, what are you doing here? Looking for you, the girl responded before flying over to him and grabbing by the shoulders to visually inspect him. I heard about what happened back at the training camp. Are you okay? Did you get hurt? How long were you held hostage? Did those villains force you to do anything? This mild interrogation went on for a few more seconds before the blonette halted her inquiry and gave the boy a serious look. Come with me, I need you. Hey look, you're already in workout clothes. That makes this even better. What's going on here? Takagi arched her eyebrow at the girl who was apparently trying to whisk her boyfriend away to go on some type of adventure. She didn't know a lot about Hadu other than her overly curious personality while also being considered one of the strongest kids in school. But she definitely had some questions about what she was doing. Oh hey, your girlfriend's here too. Don't worry Takagi-chan, I only need him for about an hour. I promise not to tire him out too much. Okay, wait, where are you trying to take me? A now confused Midoriya asked as the girl began pulling him towards the door. No time, he'll explain on the way. Let's go was the last thing Hadu said before dragging the boy out of the building in a dazzling display of yellow energy, leaving everyone completely bewildered about what just happened. Is he going to be okay? Honuki asked. Who knows? Takagi shrugged, although she was definitely curious about what that was all about. She had a feeling that it wasn't going to be nearly as entertaining as she hoped, so the girl decided to just ask him about it later. Seeing as there probably wasn't anything to worry about, the rest of the 1B students continued on with their conversation, only for the door to once again randomly fly open. This time, however, instead of a flying girl with blue hair, it was one with pink dreadlocks and strange goggles atop her head. Slightly smaller Tsuburaba nearly choked on his soda at the sight of the girl. Where's Casper and Broccoli Boy Thayer in this class? Right, the unidentified teen inquired. Who now it was Candace's turn to figure out what was going on. The two with telekinetic quirks. You mean Midoriya and Yanagi? Tetsu looked at her. Yeah, I have some new babies for them and we need to do a test run before they can get approved. Babies? Everyone internally questioned. Okay, who the hell was this girl and why did it sound like she had a few screws loose? Oh, you must be Hatsumesen, Shiozaki suddenly announced. Midoriya-kun just left. But Ryuko is in her room. She's on the 4th floor. Thanks, that statement was enough for Hatsum to immediately bolt down the hall and into the elevator before anyone could stop her. 30 seconds later, Hatsum returned with Yanagi in tow, dragging her by the shoulders. For the first time ever, the students of 1B could see a look of absolute confusion plastered on the gray-haired girl's face. Hatsumesen, what are you doing? No time to talk. The two of us have a lot to do, was her reply before pausing at the door and looking back at the rest of the class. Oh yeah, if any of you see Broccoli Boy, tell him that I made a new helmet for him that needs to be tested. Also, there's some machinery that I need him to move for me. In the blink of an eye, the two students vanished out the front door, leaving everyone absolutely stunned. Not even 6 hours into their first day in the new dorms and wacky stuff was already starting to happen. Okay, are any more cute girls with huge tits going to come through that door to kidnap another one of our classmates? Because if that's the case, then I want to be next. Awais yelled in a joking tone. Slap! The sound of one of Shiozaki's vines colliding with the Weld Quirk user's cheek echoed throughout the common area. Oh Shiozaki, what the hell? You shouldn't say such vile things. The now blushing vine-haired teen chastised him before walking towards the elevator. Barely a few minutes later, Midoriya found himself standing outside of Gym Gamma in the middle of PE grounds along with Hadu. Ooh, Hado-senpai, what are we doing here? Training, the bubby teen answered him with a smile on her face. I got done unpacking my stuff early and needed a way to pass the time. And then I thought, oh hey, why don't I go out and get some practice, and since I have all this time on my hands but everyone in my class was busy. And that's when the idea to come get you popped into my head. You're the perfect person to help me out. Okay, Midoriya gave the girl a confused look. Disregarding the fact that he was just kidnapped without any warning, the boy was genuinely curious about what kind of training she had in mind. Evidently, he would soon get his answer when a girl with reddish hair and multiple piercings in her ears came from inside of the gym. She was carrying a few large plastic rings in her hands and looked pretty tired. Oh Nejire, you're back. And you actually brought the flying kid with you, the girl then said as she made her approach. How's it going, Imuyuhaya? And for the record, I tried to tell Nejire not to bother you. Hello. Midoriya gave the teen a quick bow. Alright, now that we're all here we can finally get started. This is going to be so much fun, don't you think? With Kohai here, this will go a lot smoother than usual. Don't you think, Yuchin? Yeah, I guess so. The girl shrugged. So what are we doing exactly? Weren't you paying attention on the way over? Hadu pouted at him while folding her arms, completely forgetting that she never once mentioned anything about the actual training on the journey over to the PE grounds. Instead, the girl just rambled on about how cool the new dorms were and how awesome it was to live with her friends. You're going to help me with my aerial maneuvering. Pretty cool, right? Is that what the hoops are for? Midoriya turned his attention over the plastic hoops that Heya was holding. That's exactly right. Listen to this. Are you listening? You're gonna levitate these hoops and move them around while I try and fly through them. Usually I just have Tamaki-kun or someone else in my class do this for me, but they are all still busy. And there's no one better to help me on such short notice than you. Alright, this seems easy enough. Midoriya nodded. Since he was already here, he might as well help the girl out with her training. Plus, this would be the perfect chance for him to see her quirk in action and add some new information into his notebook. At the very least, it sounded like he didn't have to do much aside from moving the hoops around. Yeah, the blunette shot into the air with a stream of yellow energy at her feet. Without wasting any more time, the three students began their impromptu training session. While Hadu was moving through the air and doing her best to maneuver through the hoops, Heya decided to strike up a conversation with him. Sorry for dragging you into this. I tried to tell Nejair to leave you alone. It's fine, Heya-senpai. I don't mind. He waved off. So are you in the hero course too? No, I'm in the business course. Oh, so how do you know Hado-senpai? She's my girlfriend. Oh sorry, I didn't know. The boy apologized for some reason. Don't worry about it. The red-haired teen quickly dismissed any thought of her being upset. Since we're on the subject, I hear that you're dating that green-haired girl with the dismemberment quirk. Yeah, Midoriya blushed. Was word about the two of them spreading around that fast actually no. Now that he thought about it, he never did tell Hadu that he and Takagi weren't dating. Which is kind of a moot point now since they actually were. Cool. Fair warning, at some point Nejair is probably going to ask you to go on a double date. She's been wanting to do one for a while now. And since she still has it in her mind that she can convince you to join her at Rukia's agency, I'd start getting prepared for it. As he took a second to absorb those words, Midoriya could think of 5 reasons both for and against something like that. Although it didn't sound too bad, he could already imagine what an outing with both Takagi and Hadu would end up like. He'll keep that in mind. Kohai, pay attention, said Hadu as the girl continued flying around the air. Oh, right, sorry. It was about an hour later when Midoriya finally returned to the dorms once the training session with Hadu was over with. After showering and grabbing a snack, the green-haired boy was laying on his bed while jotting down notes in his hero analysis for the future number 15. He learned a great deal about the blue-haired girl's quirk and was looking forward to studying it a bit more. Actually, now that he was going to be living with his classmates, this was the perfect opportunity for him to learn more about all of their quirks, which was good because he had a particular interest in how exactly Monoma and Kiriwaro's powers worked. Midoriya was brought out of his writings when a knock on the door caught his attention. Since he already knew who it was, the boy was quick to get up from his bed and answer it. Once he opened the door, he was greeted with the smiling face of Takagi. The girl was dressed in her usual casual attire, however she was also holding a small box that was covered in red wrapping paper. Hey, what's that? He asked while pointing to the item in question. Rin from 1A dropped by earlier to give this to you. Apparently it's a thank you present for saving him from getting his head split open. Takagi answered. Oh, Midoriya nodded. So are you gonna let me in? The girl asked sarcastically. The boy quickly nodded and allowed her to enter the room. After placing the small gift down on the desk, Takagi was finally able to see what her boyfriend's room was like. And to say that she was underwhelmed would be putting it mildly. Not only was the room completely devoid of any decorations, it had the same black and green color theme on pretty much everything from the bedspread to the curtains. It was clear that Midoriya's Joe Smo persona didn't just apply to his sense of fashion. We really need to get you some more decorations, the girl joked while patting him on the shoulder. Yeah. The boy blushed, only now realizing that he just let a girl into his bedroom of all places. The two may have already gone past hand-holding and kissing, but this felt like a much bigger step than it should have been. You should come by and see my room later. I managed to find space for all of my decorations, even the old posters. I guess we can do that later. So, how have you been? We haven't had the chance to talk that much today. I'm doing good. How about you? No complaints so far. Takagi shrugged. I'm just glad that things can finally get back to normal. I'm actually looking forward to sitting through one of Samantha-sensei's lectures. Can't argue with you there. The boy laughed. He certainly agreed though. Some normalcy was definitely what he needed in his life right now. Hopefully returning to a regular schedule and training would be enough to keep his mind occupied. The young couple continued talking for the next 30 minutes or so. Takagi was glad to see that Midoriya was doing well, especially after all the craziness that he had to go through. Yet it was clear to her that there was something on his mind. Out of respect, she never bothered asking about what exactly happened to him during his time with the villains. However, it was obvious that something major occurred. She couldn't quite put it into words, but it was like he was carrying around some extra weight on his shoulders. Deciding that it was better to just give him some time and not reopen fresh wounds, Takagi put those thoughts to the back of her mind for now. Whatever happened to him, she was sure that he'd open about it eventually. And if Kayama's advice to her was any good, it would only be a matter of time. "Hey, do you have any plans for the rest of the afternoon?" the girl asked completely out of the blue. "No, why?" Before he even had a chance to think, Takagi wrapped her arms around Midoriya's neck and threw the boy onto the bed. Now that she had him where she wanted, the girl quickly mounted herself on top of him. "I think we should pick up where we left off a couple of weeks ago. Don't you agree?" What Midoriya glanced up at her. The heat was rapidly rising in his head and their current position wasn't doing him any favors when it came to calming himself down. "Are you sure? Don't worry, we won't have another mishap like last time." She smiled. Midoriya then watched as the girl used her quirk to detach the sharp ends of her teeth. She let them float around for a bit before placing them on the desk across the room, leaving her with a set of perfectly normal-looking teeth. "That's actually really smart," he thought to himself. It still amazed him how refined Takagi's quirk could be at times. "My sister told me about that little life hack," the girl told him before continuing. "No, where were we?" All Midoriya could do was resign himself to his fate and get ready for what was coming next. It's not like he wasn't expecting this. Quite the opposite, actually. But he thought that the girl would at least wait a day before taking advantage of their new living situation. "We got about 4 to 5 minutes before dinner. I think that's plenty of time for us to get some more practice in. Just promise to go easy on me," he said with a wobbly smile. "Not a chance." She gave him one last devious smile before crashing her lips into his. Later that night, Midoriya was sleeping comfortably in his new bed. That is until the boy's eyes suddenly flew open and he launched himself from underneath the sheets. He looked around the room for a moment before turning his attention to his hands, twisting and turning them repeatedly in front of his face while flexing his fingers. The boy's confused expression quickly shifted to a wry grin and a hushed laugh echoed throughout the room. "Well, it'll be damned," Midoriya said, except something was different. This wasn't his usual tone of voice. It was significantly more bratish and haughty. "Soft eyes is what it's like being in the body of a teenage boy, how gross." He continued stretching out his limbs before finally deciding to stand up from his bed, taking a moment to walk and jump around for a bit before letting out a relieved sigh. "My connection to this body is still shaky. I guess the only time I'm able to move around like this is when that brat is asleep. Or this is just some wacky coincidence. No matter." Midoriya quickly turned his attention to the green backpack resting on the floor next to his desk. He then activated his quirk and started levitating the object, only for it to immediately fall back to the ground. That was way harder than it should have been. "I guess I'm not able to fully use my quirk when I'm like this. What a dang pain." This continued on for a good 5 minutes before Midoriya stopped and returned to looking at his hands. "I don't know what the hell is going on, but I guess that part of my consciousness was somehow able to transfer along with my quirk. This shit is weird. I'm tempted to just go out and fly around for a bit, but I can already tell that I don't have a strong enough connection with my quirk to do that. And I have no clue how long I'll be able to keep this up." With that out of the way, the boy decided to wander around the room for a bit before sitting down at his computer desk and opening up the laptop. It was then that he spotted the multitude of notebooks neatly stacked together right next to him. With nothing better to do, he reached for them and took hold of the one titled Quirk Analysis Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya flipped through the pages for a short time before a slight grin made its way onto his face. He'll have to hand it to the little nerd, he has wonderful observation skills. It took me a while to figure out some of this stuff. He's got a firm grasp on how to use my powers, but it looks like he still hasn't figured out Pisca waves yet. The boy then grabbed a nearby pen and flipped over to a blank page, wasting no time in jotting down a few notes. He'll cut him some slack this time since he's still new at this, but that hideout needs to stopping around. But hey, I don't see why I can't throw him a bone every now and then. In the dark, Midoriya's hand continued to move as the new entry of his notebook was transcribed onto the page. The only thing that could be seen on the paper were the bold letters written at the top. Palace of Inertia. The early morning wake-up was not very enjoyable for Izuku Midoriya. For some unknown reason, the boy felt considerably more tired than usual. It had been a few days since moving into the new dorms, and this was the second time that he found himself exhausted for no good reason. Even factoring in the time that he spent hanging out with Takagi and his classmates, he had been getting more than a good amount of sleep. So the reason behind this was a complete mystery to him. As the boy made his way out of the locker room and over the training facility, he ended up running into his gray-haired classmate, Ryuko Yanagi. "Hello, Ryuko-san," the boy greeted with a friendly wave while taking notice of her new and improved hero costume. He remembered her telling him that Hatsum ended up going overboard with the new additions to her outfit. And from the looks of it, the pink-haired inventor certainly spared no expense. The general design was the same. She still had her white kimono with the furred collar. But in addition to what looked to be a new hover disc, she was also sporting a new belt with some strange attachments on it. "Hey," the stoic teen greeted him back in a slightly softer tone than usual. "How are you?" "A bit tired, but nothing serious." "Are you sure?" she then asked. Just asking. Is something wrong?" "Nah, just wanted to make sure," she replied. "You've just been kind of off lately." "You think so?" "Yeah," Yanagi nodded before giving him a slightly concerned look. "I know we haven't talked that much since coming back to school, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. You did go through a rather traumatic experience after all. You don't need to worry about me. "I'm fine, I promise," Midoriya reassured her. "All right," she conceded before turning her attention to the object that he was holding under his arm. "Is it the new helmet that Hatsune made for you?" "Yeah," the boy said as he held it out in front of her. True to her word, Hatsune took the liberty of making an entirely new mask for the green-haired boy. The overall design was still the same, but there were still some very obvious alterations. What was previously 2 separate eye holes were now converted into a single green visor surrounded by 3 metallic bands. Along with this was a new respirator attachment that apparently helped filter out smoke and gas. "I haven't tried it on yet, but it still looks pretty cool," he continued. "What does that new belt of yours do?" "Honestly, it would be easier to show you rather than explaining," she replied. "Oh, all right then." With that, the telekinetic duo continued making their way over to the training facility. "All right, students, listen up," Kan announced to the students of 1B. "As you know, your primary focus this summer is to obtain your provisional hero licenses. I don't need to tell all of you that you need to take this seriously." Currently, the students along with Kan, Midnight, Cementos, Ectoplasm, and 13 were standing in Gym Gamma, all dressed in their hero costumes. It was still pretty early for class to be in session, but no one was about to complain seeing as everyone was excited to finally get back to training. A hero license means that you will be responsible for human lives. You will be able to act on your own initiative or assist pros in times of emergencies. The exam itself is very difficult. Usually only 50% of applicants pass the tests required to obtain this permit in any given year. 13 followed up. "Damn, it's that hard for just a provisional license," Awais commented. "Your schedule for the next 2 weeks will primarily focus on you creating ultimate moves for you to use come exam day." Kan continued. "Ultimate moves," a few of the students echoed. "Yes, ultimate moves are skills that you develop to ensure victory against an opponent." Ectoplasm was the first to explain. "It's an action that is typically unique to your identity that no other person can copy, although some people do take inspiration from others. Take Midoriya for example." Midnight directed everyone's attention towards the green-haired boy, striking a very provocative pose in the process. His Hellstorm is a technique that's considered to be the specialty of the Psychic Sisters. "Kinda like Takagi and her Scalestorm, right?" said Shota, causing the rest of the students nodded in agreement. "Exactly." The students quickly erupted into various sidebar conversations about what kind of new techniques that they would be able to perform. Midoriya himself was curious as to the possibilities of what his classmates would be capable of. It was easy to assume that those with emitter-type quirks would need to increase the output of their powers, but people like Tetsu and Kamakiri with transformation quirks would have to think outside of the box. Simply put, you must learn to lean into your strengths. Ectoplasm's voice brought Midoriya out of his mental rambling. "Most pros possess ultimate moves, those who don't are fools," Midnight said. "For the rest of the afternoon, you all are going to spend your time brainstorming and constructing your techniques. Y'all pretty much have free reign to do whatever y'all like and the teachers will be here to assist you." Kan interjected. "This is gonna be awesome," Takagi cheered. The green-haired girl already had a new move that she's been waiting to test out and now was the perfect time to get started. It didn't take long before the students got into the swing of things. While some of the Hero Course hopefuls were running wild inside of the building, Midoriya, Yanagi, Shiozaki, Fukudashi, and Tsunotori were conducting their training outside since their quirks required a lot of space. "How are things going over here?" Midnight asked Midoriya while making her approach. "Everything's fine, Midnight-sensei," the green-haired boy replied as he took a quick break. "I'll admit that I'm a bit curious about what kind of technique you're going to create. With your quirk, I'm sure that it's going to be something dazzling." "Yeah, is something wrong?" The R-rated heroine tilted her head in confusion. "Not really, it's just that I'm having a hard time figuring something out," he answered honestly. "It wasn't necessarily a matter of creating a new move. It was more like figuring out how to put it into practice." Midoriya doesn't exactly remember when he did it, but at some point the boy already cooked up a new technique that he wanted to try out. Earlier when he was reading through his quirk notebook he came across a new addition that seemingly came out of nowhere. Palace of Inertia was what it was labeled as at the top of the page. The easiest way to describe it was that it's an area of effect move that would allow him to stop movement in a certain area. Although something like that would prove to be incredibly useful in rescue operations, putting it into practice was an entirely different issue altogether, especially since it focused so much on manipulating psycho waves. He remembered reading about that a long time ago, but why he decided to add that onto the page was mystery to him. "I see." Midnight nodded. "Why don't you explain to me what you're trying to do? Maybe I can give you some assistance." After a brief explanation of what he was trying to accomplish, all Midnight did was give him a surprised look. She already knew that the boy had some serious potential, and the fact that he could easily be considered the strongest student amongst the first years aside from Todoroki was a popular opinion. But even she was impressed by what he managed to think up. "Unfortunately, I don't think I can give you much advice on certain aspects of this. My quirk may be an area of effect type as well, but I can't control the direction that my gas goes when I activate it. The most I can do is limit the range." "Oh, alright then," Midoriya said. "But what I can tell you is that you shouldn't try to go too big too fast. Start off by trying to work in a 10-meter radius and focus on manipulating things in that area individually. With what you told me, that should be the first step. In fact, Inagi seems to be particularly good at that." the black-haired woman suggested. That makes sense. Still, I'm certainly impressed by what you came up with. It could easily be a game changer in any situation. Oh my, the youth of today are just so fascinating. She cooed. Yeah, I guess you're right. He awkwardly chuckled. Worry not, Midoriya, a strapping young man such as yourself will surely master this move in no time. You must remember to let those youthful juices of yours flow from every hole in your body, only then will you taste the thick and creamy nectar of success, Midnight shouted with a slight bit of drool on her lips. The boy internally cringed at the blatant innuendo in the woman's words. To be frank, Midoriya did sometimes wonder how his girlfriend's aunt was allowed to teach at a school full of teenagers. In the meantime, I suggest that you and Yanagi work together for now. That would be most beneficial to your progress. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. He agreed. Oh, and by the way, Midnight grinned before wrapping her arm around his shoulder and leaning in close. I snuck some condoms into Setsuna's room this morning. I'm on dorm duty for the rest of the week, so I guarantee that the two of you won't have any interruptions if you feel the need to blow off some steam tonight after training. She whispered in a sultry tone, which was more than enough to make the boy blush uncontrollably. Midoriya didn't even get a chance to respond before the R-rated heroine skipped off in the opposite direction to go offer some wisdom to Shiozaki, leaving the boy feeling slightly violated at her words. After his interesting conversation with his teacher, Midoriya made his way over to Yanagi. The gray-haired girl was diligently trying to perfect her own version of the Hellstorm. The two had talked about him showing her how to do it a few times before, but now that they had the opportunity, this was the perfect time for her to practice it. How's it going? Midoriya asked. Fine, the girl stoically replied before releasing her quirk. It's not as hard as I thought, but focusing on keeping the shape of it is difficult. Yeah, I'm still having that problem too. So, what's up? Nothing, I just needed some advice. About what? The girl quirked an eyebrow at him. She still found it a bit odd how Midoriya would always ask her for advice when it came to their quirks since he was more powerful than her. But she was used to it by now. What do you do to train your fine control? The new move I'm trying out is looking to be a bit more than I can handle, he asked. To be honest, I don't really train that part of my quirk. I mostly focus on weight and distance. My fine control is something that just comes naturally. I see. The boy nodded. He really should have expected something like that. When it came to quirk control, Yanagi was far ahead of him. He racked his brain for another moment before asking a question that she might know the answer to. Oh yeah, have you ever heard of psycho waves before? Yeah, she replied. My grandfather mentioned it a few times, but I never really understood it. It's something specific to telekinetic quirks. They are like a force that your body emits that allows you to manipulate objects. But how they function is supposed to be unique to the user. That makes sense, he thought to himself. It would certainly explain why their quirks function so differently. Ever since his talk with Monoma back at the camp, Midoriya finally started to notice the differences in their powers. Yanaga's range was limited, but inside that range it was like she had complete control of what she was using. While on the flip side, his range was greater while requiring more focus on a specific target. Yeah, I'd be better off asking Blizzard about it. She seems more knowledgeable about that stuff than me. Yeah, I think you're right, he agreed. Oh yeah, that reminds me, what does that new belt of yours do? Yanagi looked down at her waist for a moment before undoing one of the straps on her new support item. Without saying a word, Midoriya watched as the girl activated her quirk and began levitating multiple metallic discs that emerged from the pouches. Each one was the size of his fist, but from the looks of it there appeared to be about 15 of them. I've been thinking about something like this ever since my internship with Mushisan. Since my quirk is limited, he thought that it would be a good idea for me to have some weapons on hand that I could easily manipulate. And after telling Hatsumesan, this is what she came up with. Whoa, that's amazing, the boy said with a shocked expression. Having those on hand would mean that she wouldn't have to worry about supplies when it came to battle. It's still a prototype, but I think it would work well for me. Yeah, I bet. Anyways, since you're already here, we might as well train together. I still need some help with perfecting my witching whirlwind. Yeah, no problem. Later that afternoon, the students were finally done with their training session for the day. Midoriya still had a few minutes before Takagi was scheduled to drop by his room, so he thought that it would be a good idea for him to do a quick video chat with Katsuragi to get some advice. Izuku, how's it going? The green-haired woman smiled at him from what looked to be her office desk. Hey, sorry for calling you out of the blue. Is this a bad time? Not at all, I actually just finished up for the day. Is something wrong? No, I was just hoping that I could get some advice on a new move that I'm working on. Oh really? The woman perked up. And what exactly is this new technique of yours? It must be pretty difficult if it is you looking to your dear old sister for help. Well, it's called Palace of Inertia. Wait, what? The woman suddenly cut him off. Did I hear that correctly? What's wrong? He gave her a worried expression. Nothing, it's just that me sister had a move with that exact same name. Really? Yeah. Katsuragi nodded. It pretty much let her stop all movement within a certain radius of her body. It was certainly a top-shelf skill if you ask me. She created it right before she died, but never got around to explaining to me how to do it. Okay, that's definitely weird, Midoriya thought to himself. Not only did the technique have the same name, but apparently it was the same concept as well. Actually, the skill I'm working on is pretty much the same. Seriously, well, that's one hell of a coincidence, huh? Yeah, he said with an awkward laugh. So what did you need help with? I don't exactly know where to start. But have you ever heard of psycho waves? Of course, it's basically how all psychokinetic quirks work. It's a relatively new discovery, but I do know the basics. Is that so? Well, I'm trying to get some more information on what it is, and I figured online searches would only get me so far. Makes sense. The woman nodded. Basically, when you activate your quirk, your body emits. Katsuragi was cut off when a knock suddenly came from Midoriya's door. Without really thinking, the boy yelled out that door was open. And sure enough, Takagi came walking into the room with her laptop in hand along with a bag of popcorn. "What's up, handsome?" The green-haired teen greeted him with a smile. "You ready for movie night?" "Setsuna, you're early. Only by a few minutes." Takagi shot back. "Is that Takagi-san?" Katsuragi asked in a curious tone. "Oh hey, is that you, Blizzard? Long time no see." The girl waved at the heroine as she made her approach to the computer desk. "Indeed. I trust that you're doing well. I heard what happened back at the training camp." "Never felt better," she replied. "So what's this? I didn't know that Izuku had you on speed dial." "Izuku was just asking me for some advice on his new technique." Takagi certainly took note of the fact that her and her boyfriend were apparently on a first-name basis now. Katsuragi made it no secret that she was looking to recruit Midoriya after graduation. But when exactly did they get so friendly? "That's cool. I forgot Izuku told me that the UA students had moved into the new dorms. I kinda wish that we had that luxury when I was still in school." "Oh yeah, it's awesome. Now I get to spend more quality time with the green bean over here." The girl joked while wrapping her arms around the boy's shoulders and leaning forward to get a better look into the camera. "I trust that the two of you aren't doing anything irresponsible." Katsuragi's tone shifted into one that could be considered suspicious, almost like she was being protective of the boy. What? Midoriya immediately blushed. "Don't worry," Takagi waved off. "The only thing Izuku's hitting here is the books for now." "Good, school is still your top priority. You shouldn't let pleasure get in the way of business after all." Hoping to have a little bit of fun with this, Takagi wanted to see if she could push the envelope some more. "Since we have you on the phone, I gotta ask, what's the deal with you and Ed Shot? I've seen some pictures of the two of you on patrol together recently." "Nice try, dear, but he's way too old for me." "Ah, so you're into younger men? Oh well, if that's the case, our classmate Awace totally has the hots for you. I could arrange something off the record." "You certainly have your hands full with this one, don't you?" Katsuragi turned her gaze back to Midoriya. "I'm not going to argue with you there." The boy laughed. "Anyways, I guess I'll call you back later." "Fine by me." She shrugged. "Have a good day and stay out of trouble." "No problem, he'll talk to you later, One-ichin. Bye." Once the video call ended, Midoriya turned his head towards Takagi only to see the girl giving him a devilish grin. It was only then that he realized that he just called the woman his big sister right in front of her, and effortlessly at that. "If Juzo heard you say that, he'd have a field day." "Yeah, since when were the two of you so close?" "It's kind of a recent thing." "I see." She gave a slightly skeptical look, one telling him that he'd better think of a better answer soon to keep her from digging. "Now, I don't know about you, but I've been looking forward to this all day." "Yeah, me too." The two brunettes quickly moved over to the boy's bed and got ready to start watching the movie. Since they were going to be sharing a laptop, Takagi made it a point to snuggle up as close to him as possible. And in response, Midoriya wrapped his arm around the girl's shoulder, which gave her some more room to get comfortable. He still wasn't entirely used to this type of close contact, but he wasn't going to be complaining about it anytime soon. Spending some quality time together like this was one of the added benefits of now living in the same building. "So, you still plan on volunteering over at the orphanage this weekend?" He nodded. "I already got permission from Kan-sensei. It was actually a lot easier than what I thought it would be." "Makes sense. It's not an easy request to deny." "I'll ask him tomorrow after training if I can join you. I'm actually looking forward to seeing those kids again." "I'd like that." "I'm sure you would," she said before planting a quick peck on his cheek. Without any further delay, the two finished getting settled and began watching the movie. It was a recommendation from Tsunotori. From what the girl knew, it was some old-era American film about a group of guys who went around fighting ghosts. Luckily, the both of them were fluent enough in English to where they would be able to understand what was going on without subtitles. "Man, that was actually pretty good," Takagi said while stretching out her arms. She definitely needed to ask Tsunotori for some more recommendations later on. "I can't believe that special effects used to be that bad," Midoriya responded jokingly. "Then again, it is over 300 years old." "Good point. So how did training go for you today?" the boy then asked. "I didn't get a chance to see what you were working on since I was outside all day." "Oh, I cooked up a pretty sweet new move." The girl gave him her signature confident smirk. "It's called Scale Dash. Metalhead was helping me work on it today and I already have the basics down. I can't wait to see it." "Oh, you definitely will." Without any warning, Takagi decided to randomly wrap her arms around the boy's neck and plant a peck on his lips. She was amazed at herself for being able to hold out for this long. But now that the movie was over, she could finally get to the main event. "Hey, do you mind if I ask you a question?" "Sure. You don't have to give me an answer, but I'm just curious. What exactly were you doing in that alley back when we first met?" Of all the things that Midoriya expected the girl to ask, that certainly wasn't it. Now that he thought about it, he never did explain to her the circumstances about that day. Obviously there were a few things that he wasn't comfortable with telling her right now, but he didn't really see a reason to lie about it as long as he omitted certain details. Well, to make a long story short, I ran away from home a couple of weeks before that. I was wandering around for a while and just so happened to end up there. It was impossible for Takagi to hide the shocked look on her face. She had a feeling that something like that was the case, but hearing him admit it was certainly a surprise. I take it that has something to do with why you and your mom aren't so close. That's part of it? Yeah. Well, considering everything you told me about how you grew up, it's not all that surprising. Yeah, he nodded a bit shyly. But since we're on the subject, I never did get a chance to thank you for that granola bar that you gave me. That was the first thing that I had eaten in days. Just promise to make it up to me on our next date. She smiled at him before continuing her inquiry. What about after that? You kinda ran off on me before we really had a chance to talk. Actually, I ended up running into an Ohanesan that night. Him and Kase-san let me stay at the orphanage for a few days before I finally decided to go back home. And I started volunteering over there to make up for them having to put up with me. That was nice of them. Yeah, he'll be sure to give Brain Boy my thanks for helping you out. What's he been up to anyway? He's starting college in a few days. He ended up choosing to go to Tokyo University. Hey, my sister goes there. I'll tell her to be on the lookout for a nerdy boy with pink eyes. Maybe I can even get the two of them to start dating. Are you sure that's a good idea? Midoriya said in a joking tone. No, but it'll be fun to watch. And it will definitely help her out in the dating department since she's terrible at that. He'll make sure to give him a warning. After a few seconds of laughter, the young couple resumed their previously scheduled activity and went back to watching movies for the rest of the night. Takagi was glad that Midoriya was finally starting to open up to her more. It was a sign that their relationship was moving in the right direction. Naturally, she wanted to know a bit more about what happened to him, but she was more than satisfied for now. When their movie night was finally over, Takagi made the short trip back to her room to get some much-needed rest. As much as she wanted to spend the night with her boyfriend, she knew that some late-night spooning probably wasn't the best idea since they had to get up early tomorrow for training. As soon as the girl opened the door, she immediately made her way to the bathroom to brush her teeth and get comfortable. However, she paused at the sight of a box covered in blue gift wrap sitting atop her sink. What's this? She wondered before grabbing the neatly folded note on top of the item and opening it up. Dear Setsuna, consider this a housewarming gift for moving into the new dorms. Try not to have too much fun, and be sure to properly hydrate and stretch before using them. And if you don't, that's fine too. If you ever run low, I've got a stash in my desk in case your father ever wants to pay me a visit at work. Enjoy. XOXOXO Nimuri. This ought to be good, Takagi said before tearing off the wrapping paper, only to pause at the not-so-small box of condoms in her hands. A million things quickly ran through her mind in that moment, and none of them were exactly rated PG. But instead of freaking out like a normal teenage girl would, the lizard tail splitter quirk user simply tucked the box inside the cabinet underneath her sink. Well, you can never be too safe nowadays. She smiled before continuing on with her nightly ritual. Unknown location. In a dark and dingy alleyway somewhere in Japan, a hooded figure wearing all black was making his way over to a small group of similarly dressed individuals. Good to have you back, Nitro. I heard that your trip was a success. One of the individuals with a feminine voice said to him in a satisfied tone. Of course it was. The person now identified as Nitro replied. Just be glad that the timing of your little operation coincided with my vacation. And we greatly appreciate your assistance. I like the new mask, by the way, one of the other individuals said to him. The person was sporting a blacked-out mask with two small eye holes that kept his entire head covered. Soto, you have the goods. Instead of responding, Nitro simply removed the backpack from his shoulders and tossed it over to one of the other men. That person took a moment to verify its contents before handing him a similar-looking backpack filled with money. Excellent. The feminine-sounding one smirked. With this, we'll be able to resume operations in a few days. Remember our deal. You make sure to give me a heads up on where you're going to use that and they'll keep the supply coming. I'm gonna be moving pretty soon, but that should be enough for the next month or so. No problem. Are you sure that you don't want to reconsider our offer with you? We can do a lot more damage. Another person asked the masked individual. I already told you, I'm not interested in becoming a member. The only thing I'm concerned about is cash. So you guys can forget about me joining your little crusade. Fine by us. If we're all done here, I've got to get going. Where are you heading off to this late if you don't mind me asking? Word on the street is that some Yakuza guys just released a new product that I'm particularly interested in. I wanted to see if it was the real deal or not. Nitro replied in a tone that no one could really describe. Well then, good luck to you, and feel free to keep in touch. Whatever was all the masked individual said before disappearing into the shadows. So you have to see Hound Dog at least once a week, Ryoko Yanagi asked Midoriya in her usually stoic manner. Yeah, every week on Thursdays, the boy replied. At the moment, the two telekinetic students were alone in the kitchen, both of them propped up against the counter closest to the sink. It was pretty late into the night, and most of the other students had already checked into bed by this point. Yet, the two of them just so happened to run into each other while they were both in the mood for a late-night snack. So who else knows about this? The gray-haired teen continued. Aside from you, there's Kan-sensei, Kame-sensei, Recovery Girl, and Nezu-san. Not Setsunechan. Midoriya awkwardly rubbed the back of his head for a moment before responding. To be honest, I don't want her to know about this right now. Actually, I was hoping that you wouldn't mind covering for me. For now at least. Fine, the girl said with a slight sigh. He'll help you out. But you're gonna have to tell her at some point. She's going to find out sooner or later. Thank you, Ryuka-san. I really appreciate it. Don't mention it. Yanagi nodded. The next day of training was shaping up to be a good one. Over the last few days, the students of 1B were well on their way to perfecting their new ultimate moves. There were a few hiccups and mishaps, which was expected. But overall, the students were progressing quite well. Alright Izuku, you ready? Tsunotori shouted to the boy from across the field in her native English, surrounded by 10 of her already expended horns. Good to go, Midoriya responded with a thumbs up. Alright, the horn teen flashed him a grin before taking control over 5 of her horns. Although this was still her limit, she was making great progress on her control over her quirk. And without so much as a word, Tsunotori launched the objects at him at about half of her top speed. Palace of inertia with barely a second to react, Midoriya activated his quirk and the air around him grew stiff. The moment the horns came within 10 meters of his body, they froze midair. Despite her best effort, Tsunotori was unable to move them any further. It was almost as if they suddenly became encased in an imaginary block of ice. After nearly a week of practice, Midoriya was finally able to crack the code on his new ultimate move. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something inside of him instinctively knew what to do, almost as if he had experienced doing it before. And now that he had a good idea about the concept of psychowaves thanks to Katsuragi, all he had to do now was work on expanding its area of effect. Well, I'd say that was a success, said Kan as he made his approach towards the students. It looks like you finally mastered that move of yours, Midoriya. Thank you, sir. The green-haired teen bowed. And Tsunotori, good job on trying to attack him from different directions. If it was anybody but him, you would have definitely knocked them down for the count. Your speed and execution has improved greatly. Thanks, sensei. As if on cue, the rest of the 1B students began filing out of the building along with Cementos and Ectoplasm. Their training time was almost up, and they needed to make space for Class 1A who was due there any second. You having fun out here? Izuku Takagi wrapped her arm around the boy's shoulder and flashed him a toothy grin. Yeah, he nodded. What about you? In grade I've pretty much perfected my ultimate move already. I even gave Ibara here a run for her money. Yes, Setsuna's new attack is quite difficult to deal with. The vine-haired girl politely agreed. Midoriya still had yet to see the girl's scale dash in action, but from what she described, it was the perfect combination of misdirection and attack power. He was actually looking forward to seeing it as soon as possible. You should have seen Tetsu-kan in there, Honuki added. The guy's pretty much a walking tank now. You damn right I am the steel quirk user, announced proudly. I'm so close to perfecting my new transformation that I can almost taste it. Are you sure that it isn't all that titanium that you've been eating? Takagi joked. I still can't believe that it took you this long to figure out that you eat other metals besides iron. Before anyone else could comment, a scraggly voice suddenly made its presence known. Are you already finished? Vlad said Aizawa as him and the 1A students walked up. This was pretty much their first time seeing the other class ever since moving into the dorms. And from the looks of it, everyone seemed to be doing well. And a lot of them had some new additions to their hero costumes. Yeah, you guys are all good to go. Aizawa simply hummed before instructing his students to go inside the gym. Naturally, the wannabe heroes took the time to greet each other and catch up. It's nice to see all of you again, said Yaoyorozu to the group. Right back at you, Kendo replied before immediately being cut off. Hey 1A scrubs, did you hear the licensing exam only has a 50% pass rate? That means your entire class could fail. Naito Monoma began cackling like a madman. He's certainly lively today, everyone's thoughts echoed. Out of all the students in Class 1B, Monoma was probably the one who made the biggest leap in terms of ability, which did nothing to satiate his already questionable ego. Monoma's observations are correct. There is a possibility that we'll have to come to battle if we partake in the same exam. That appears to be the hand that fate has dealt us, Takoyami stated from his spot next to Asui and Uraraka. That is why our classes will be in different testing locations. Aizawa added. Each school has at most one class in a single location, so you won't be going up against each other. Tien followed up. How sad. We won't be able to face each other directly. You losers won't get to see the superior might of Class 1B. Monoma cheered, only to receive a swift chop to the back of the neck from Kendo. With the pleasantries now out of the way, the 1A students began making their way into the building with only a few sticking around to mingle for a bit longer. Suddenly and without warning, Midoriya felt something hit him on the shoulder with enough force to make him take a step back. The green-haired teen turned his head and his heart almost dropped into his stomach when he found himself locking eyes with Katsuki Bakugo. Time seemed to freeze as the two remained silent, and Midoriya instantly remembered what happened on the day of the rescue. It was no surprise that Bakugo obviously harbored some hostility towards him, which wasn't anything out of the usual. But no matter what, Midoriya knew that trying to apologize to the boy for breaking his arms would have been pointless. His eyes briefly drifted down towards the boy's arms and he was glad that Recovery Girl did a good job at healing his injuries. Damn traitor was the only thing that Bakugo decided to say in a low tone before walking off into the building, leaving Midoriya slightly stunned at the pure audacity of such an act. Geez, what's his problem? Takagi asked Midoriya immediately after, curious about that rather tense interaction. Who knows? Midoriya shrugged rather unconvincingly. Did something happen between you two? Yanagi interjected. By the grace of whatever deity was looking out for him, Midoriya didn't even get the chance to try and come up with an answer before a deep voice caught his attention. Excuse me, Midoriya-san. The 1B students all turned their heads to see none other than Fumikage Takoyami, Class 1AS resident edgelord. Yes, Takoyami-san, he replied in a curious tone. Without missing a beat, the raven-headed teen bowed in his direction at a nearly perfect 90-degree angle. I owe you my deepest apologies. For what happened back at the training camp, Takoyami further clarified. Had it not been for my error, you would have never been kidnapped by those villains. I deeply regret causing you to get stuck in such an unfavorable situation. All Midoriya could do was look at the boy with a surprised expression, as did everyone else. This was only his second time talking to him, but from what he could gather, Takoyami was a good person. It quickly dawned on him that his classmate must have blamed himself for what happened to him back at the camp, and something like that was the last thing Midoriya wanted. Please, don't worry about it, Takoyami-san, Midoriya told him. It wasn't your fault. You don't need to apologize to me for anything. I disagree with that declaration, but I assure you, I will find a way to repay you for my folly. You don't have to do that. Honestly, the green-haired boy repeated, even though it was obvious that it was a pointless gesture. In any case, I simply decided to let you know what my position is. I apologize for taking up your time, was the last thing that Takoyami told him before electing to join the rest of his class, leaving Midoriya slightly guilty about the boy's feelings. Man, that guy practically screams edgelord, doesn't he? Takagi said in a joking manner to try and lighten up the mood a bit. In Ogosti, the two of you would make a pretty good match. All Yanagi did was give the girl a dry look before walking off in the direction of the locker room, obviously not in the mood to entertain Takagi's devious antics at the moment. What him just saying what everyone else was thinking. We were not all thinking that. Tetsu deadpanned. Blay, you people are total squares. The lizard tail splitter user groaned before the rest of 1B began making their way over to the locker rooms to get changed and head back to the dorms for some much-needed rest and relaxation. Late into the night, Takagi found herself waking up due to a bad case of cottonmouth. Normally, the green-haired teen would have just hopped right out of bed and drudged all the way over to the kitchen to grab a bottle of water out of the refrigerator. But tonight that probably wasn't such a good idea, mainly due to the admittedly comfortable mound of flesh that she was laying on top of. With a slight grin on her face, Takagi turned her head over to the right to take in the pleasant sight of Midoriya peacefully sleeping underneath her. Due to the generous amount of moonlight breaching through her bedroom window, the girl was able to fully appreciate the delicate features on her boyfriend's freckled face. Midoriya may not have been drop-dead gorgeous like most supermodels, but he had a certain level of cuteness that she just couldn't get enough of. After a little bit of convincing, and a quick heads-up to Kayama in case of trouble, the girl was finally able to spend the entire night snuggled up close to her green-haired body pillow. Of course, the boy was a bit nervous about doing something like this at first, but he was more than willing to give it a shot. Very gently, the green-haired girl slipped out of his grasp around her waist and silently exited the room to get that much-needed bottle of water that she was desperately craving at the moment. After about 10 minutes, Takagi returned to her room only to see the boy in the exact same position that she had left him prior to leaving. Except now, she had a full view of everything that he had to offer. Midoriya was surprisingly well-built. His well-toned arms and thighs were on full display as he laid spread out across the bed, lightly snoring like a baby kitten. It was at that moment that Takagi had an absolutely brilliant idea. Although they had been dating for a while, the girl never once got the chance to see him without a shirt on. She already knew that he had a killer set of abs on him based on her not-so-subtle peeking that she had been doing all year. And now was the perfect time for her to inspect the goods. A little peek won't hurt. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. I am his girlfriend after all. The girl convinced herself before fully committing to what she was about to do. She silently closed the distance between the two of them and carefully lifted her Velociraptor-themed comforter from atop his body, taking a moment to identify her target. Luckily, there was enough moonlight present in the room to where she didn't even need to think about turning on her lights or using her cell phone. A wide and almost feral grin crept onto Takagi's face as she reached over the bed and grabbed the hem of Midoriya's shirt. Although she would never admit it, she could already feel the heat rapidly rising in her face. Of course, she had seen shirtless men before. Her internet history was more than enough proof of that. But this was almost like unwrapping a Christmas present that had been sitting under the tree for an entire month. She quickly established to herself that she was only going to look under his shirt and not embark on the more daring route of taking a peek at the real treasure underneath his shorts. That was something she could wait a bit longer for maybe. With more than enough courage and little to no trepidation, Takagi took a deep breath and slowly lifted the cloth from atop his body, making sure she used her other hand to secure the parts that protected the boy's modesty, even though she could already tell that there was nothing modest about it. But that's a topic for a later chapter. Fully prepared to burn the sight into her memory for the next time that she had some time to herself, Takagi raised his shirt all the way up to his chest and started taking as many mental pictures as she possibly could. However, what the girl ended up seeing made her freeze. Years of learning proper first aid from both Kayama and her father had allowed Takagi to become very knowledgeable about different types of injuries, including self-inflicted ones, and what she was looking at couldn't be categorized as anything but, to her horror, all across the right side of Midoriya's abdomen were a series of scars. Ones that were clean, too clean. Every last centimeter of the cuts appeared to be meticulously placed to avoid another. She knew what those were, she wasn't an idiot. Dozens of clean cuts stacked on top of one another with what looked like practiced precision. There was only one possible explanation. "Oh my God," the girl unintentionally said in a hushed tone before immediately clamping her hand over her mouth. In an instant, Takagi's lust was replaced by a feeling of dread, one that washed over her body faster than a cheetah in an open field. No way, this couldn't be happening. There had to be some kind of mistake. Midoriya wasn't that type of person. There was no way that someone like him could be doing something like that. He wasn't a depressed person. A bit sheepish and nervous at times, sure, but a far cry from what she envisioned someone who engaged in that type of behavior. The longer the girl looked, the more she was able to assess the situation. From what she could tell, these scars were old, very old, so much so that they had already healed up significantly. But they did little to subside her now flaring emotions. Suddenly, a lot of things started to make sense and the dots were finally beginning to connect. She already knew that the boy had a pretty rough childhood due to his former quirkless status, but she never imagined that things had gotten this bad. Takagi could feel the tears beginning to well up in her eyes, finally understanding just what her boyfriend had truly gone through in the earlier years of his childhood. It was far worse than she initially imagined, and it took all she had for her to keep her composure. The green-haired girl quickly wiped her eyes and pulled his shirt back down before disappearing into her bathroom and closing the door behind her. The girl sat silent against the wall for all of 5 minutes as she thought about what she had just seen, trying to come to terms with a secret that she was certain that he did not want her to find out. What was she supposed to do? What could she do? Should she tell somebody? But if so, then who? Another few minutes passed before Takagi finally decided to pull out her phone and begin scrolling through her contacts. There was only one person who she felt comfortable enough talking to about this right now. T-Rex, hey, T-Rex, are you awake? Lipstick, what the hell, Runt, do you know what time it is? Lipstick, your dazzling older sister needs her beauty sleep. T-Rex, I need to talk to you about something, it's important. After her much-needed talk with Nanao, Takagi still couldn't decide on how she would approach this new discovery of hers. According to her sister, who was a psychology major, outright confronting him about it right now was not a good idea. The main reason for this was because doing something so drastic might leave him feeling like he was backed into a corner. When it came to things like this, it was best to strike while the iron is cold and ease into it. From the brief look that she was able to get, none of the scars on Midoriya's abdomen looked anywhere close to fresh, which meant that it had been a while since the last time he cut himself. She didn't really know whether or not that was a good thing, but for the time being it was one less thing to worry about. After getting off the phone with her sister, the girl began to wonder if she should inform one of the teachers about this. Kayama would obviously be her first choice, followed by Kan or Inui, but she needed time to figure out exactly how to broach that subject properly, which was a lot easier said than done. Does anyone else know about this? The green-haired teen then wondered before her mind immediately thought of Anohana. He was the only other person that she knew of with a similar problem, and him and Midoriya knew each other pretty well, so of course he had to have some knowledge about it. But what about any of the other students? She found it pretty hard to believe that none of the other boys had noticed since they all changed together during class. But Midoriya was more than smart enough to find a way to cover his tracks. At least now it made a lot of sense as to why he was usually the last one out of the locker room. What about Ghosty? She then asked herself. Out of everyone in their class, Yanagi was probably the closest to him besides her. The two did spend a lot of time together in and out of class, and the poltergeist user could definitely keep a secret. Deciding that she needed more time to think about how she was going to handle this, Takagi chose to play it safe for now and keep watch over him just in case. And above all, she was by no means going to tip him off about her finding out his secret. The next morning, however, that proved to be a lot easier said than done. Surprisingly, Midoriya offered to cook breakfast for her. It was pretty early in the morning by her standards, but Takagi was not prepared to turn down the chance at her boyfriend cooking her a nice meal, especially since their training for the licensing exam was getting more intense by the day. So hats on the menu for today. Handsome, the girl grinned at him while trying to keep her mind in the right place, and her eyes off of a certain area. Just some bacon, eggs, and toast. I wanted to try my hand at an all-American breakfast, but we don't have any potatoes. So you won't be getting a side of hash browns. The boy answered. That's cool. I'd much rather have a side of you instead, she said in a sultry tone while giving him a near predatory look, which was more than enough to make the boy blush. Thankfully, Takagi didn't have to wait long for her morning feast. The two of them wasted no time in sitting down and digging into their breakfast before going over their plans for the day. Upon her first bite, she unwittingly let out a satisfied moan at the rush of flavor that exploded in her mouth. Inoizuku, if this whole hero thing doesn't work out, you'd make an amazing housewife someday. Wow, thanks. He gave her a slightly sarcastic smile. I'm not nearly as good of a cook as my mom, but I know enough to keep myself fed. Same, Takagi retorted. Since my dad works so much, I pretty much had to teach myself how to work around a kitchen. Oh yeah, how is he anyway? Same as usual. His department just started working with some guys from the Debriefing Corporation. Apparently, they are going into the hero support business soon and the company is going to be working alongside them. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm sure he'll tell you all about it the next time that you see him. It has been a while, hasn't it? I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I can even invite my mom, Midoriya suggested. That's actually a good idea. It would certainly make things less awkward. She smiled back. After finishing their food, the young couple quickly cleaned the place up and started making their way back upstairs. Since training wasn't until this afternoon, they had more than enough time to hang out and catch up on some of the latest shows. However, Takagi had other plans in mind. The moment the doors to the elevator closed, the girl placed her hands on either side of the boy's face and pulled him in for a kiss. This wasn't their first time making out in a public setting, and for Takagi, doing something like this just made it slightly more fun. As for Midoriya, normally he would stray away from blatant acts of PDA like this, but the rational part of his brain wasn't really functioning at the moment. Every time his girlfriend did something like this, it was hard for him to do anything but follow her lead. As the seconds passed, the two of them got more into it, and at one point, Takagi decided to throw caution to the wind by leaping up and wrapping her legs around the boy's waist, locking their bodies in close together. In response, Midoriya gripped his hands underneath her thighs to keep her in place. The two brunettes were so lost in their own little world that they completely ignored the fact that the elevator had already stopped moving. The sound of an exaggerated cough was enough to bring the young couple out of their makeout session and freeze in place. Against their better instincts, both Midoriya and Takagi turned their heads to see none other than Ibara Shiozaki standing right in front of them. The vine-haired teen was dressed in a white bathrobe and was holding a large cup of tea. Ibara, how long have you been standing there? Takagi asked in a semi-joking tone while still very much wrapped around her boyfriend, whose face was now redder than a ripe tomato. Silence was the only answer she got as Shiozaki nonchalantly took a sip from her cup while giving them a very disapproving look. Well, sorry to hold you up. We'll be on our way now. Shiozaki nodded as Takagi hopped off of Midoriya and rapidly began pulling him towards her room, partly to hide her own embarrassment, while also wanting to get right back to the morning festivities. Dear God, please have mercy on their sinful souls. The Vine Quirk said a quick prayer before going about her business, hoping to erase the memory of what she had just witnessed from her mind. Before they even knew it, the day of the exam had finally arrived. The students of 1B were all crowded inside of the bus on their way to the exam venue. It was hard not to feel slightly intimidated by all of this. As far as they were aware, they were the only first-year class taking the provisional license exam, so pretty much everyone here had way more experience than they did. I'm getting kind of nervous. Ibara groaned with some trepidation in his voice. Seriously, this is so stressful. Oh man, what if I can't get my license? Awase began mumbling while shaking Honuki in the seat next to him. We'll be fine, guys. All of us have been training our butts off for this. There's no way that we're going to fail, said Kendo as she did her best to keep her classmates' spirits up. Hey, Kansensei, Tetsu suddenly shouted. You got any tips and tricks for us to know before the exam? At the front of the bus, the themed hero rubbed his chin and thought for a moment before deciding to answer. He knew that he really shouldn't be telling them this and that they couldn't rely on him for guidance during the actual exam, but he didn't really see a problem with giving his pupils some pointers. Well, I remember when I took my exam, all of us in Ketsubatsu pretty much ganged up on the UA students. We spent a couple of days looking at old sports festival footage to come up with battle plans against them, the teacher told them. There was a brief silence before the students fully processed that information. Shit, I didn't even think about that. Kamakiri clicked his teeth. He's right, most of us were caught on camera during the sports festival, especially the ones who made it to the tournament stage. Shota followed up. Do you really think that the other schools would target us all like that? Komori said in a nervous tone. It would certainly make sense, Midoriya replied. On top of our lack of experience, we shouldn't put it past some of the other schools to try and go after people that they know. I agree with Midoriya-kun, said Monoma. As soon as we find out what the actual format of the exam is, we need to come up with a strategy to keep us from getting mobbed. Well, we still have a while before we actually get there. I don't see the harm in doing some last-minute prep. Takagi shrugged. As the students began brainstorming possible scenarios and strategies for what they now knew was coming their way, Ken couldn't help but smile at how seriously they all were taking this. Aizawa would probably give him an earful if he ever found out that he told them about the infamous crushing of UA. But in his opinion, it was a teacher's duty to make sure that his students were well prepared for anything that came their way. We'll be arriving in about 10 minutes. I want you all to do your best, you hear me? The themed hero told his students. Yes, sir. We're the greatest in class ever, Away shouted in the middle of the floor while dancing around with Tsunotori and Tsuburaba. I still can't believe that we all passed. Tetsu also cheered while throwing his arm over Honuki's shoulder in celebration. It got kinda dodgy there for a second. If it wasn't for Fukudashi-kun and Bondo-kun, I might gotten taken out by those girls from Seiyai Academy, said Shota in a relieved tone. At the moment, the students of 1B were all having an impromptu celebration after the stellar performance at the licensing exam. Miraculously, they all managed to pass, which was practically unheard of. All throughout the common area, everyone was living it up. Monoma and Shishida were in the middle of a riveting game of chess. Kamakiri and Kodai were in the kitchen preparing drinks for everyone. Most of the girls were crowded around one of the kitchen tables while talking about the exam, and pretty much everyone else was doing random things and passing around their grade sheets. Does anyone know how the 1A guys did? I texted Yae Yorazusan earlier, but she hasn't gotten back to me yet. Kendo answered, it wouldn't surprise me if they all passed too. I mean, they do have Bakugo and Todoroki, and those two are walking powerhouses. Speaking of powerhouses, I still can't believe that Takagi knocked out 5 people in a single blow. I almost fell over watching that happen. Honuki did his best to suppress his laughter. Dude, you should have seen that guy from Shiksu when he went up against Tetsu. Apparently he had a magnetism quirk and almost shit his pants when his body turned to copper, away stated. I'm just glad that I ate some before the test started, otherwise I would've been screwed. The steel quirk user announced proudly. Still, I can't stand eating that stuff. It tastes like crap and it only lasted for a couple of seconds. Yes, we are truly blessed to have come out of this trial victorious. The Lord smiled upon us on this fateful day and provided us with means to overcome these hardships. Shiozaki clasped her hands together in a prayer position before a beam of sunshine anointed her in its radiant glow. So are we ever going to address that light thing, or are we just going to keep rolling with it? Fukudashi turned to Kodai, who couldn't do anything but give him an indifferent shrug. While the festivities inside were in full swing, Midoriya, Yanagi, and Takagi were sitting on the balcony outside the building. They were all having a pretty normal conversation about what happened back at the exam. That was until Midoriya's phone suddenly started ringing. The green-haired boy checked the screen and saw that it was an incoming video call from Katsuragi. He sent her a message earlier that he and the others passed the exam, and he figured that she was calling to follow up on that. Hello, the boy said as the image of his pseudo-sister popped up on the screen in her regular, non-hero attire. Izuku, congratulations, nice job on getting your provisional license on your first try, the woman said in a boisterous tone. Thanks. Hey, is that Blizzard? Takagi asked. Really? Yanagi raised an eyebrow. Ah, is that Takagi-san and Yanagi-san? How are you girls doing? Pretty and awesome, Takagi answered for both of them. I presume that you two passed the exam as well. Sure did. Well, congratulations. Thanks. So, I guess this means that your internships will be starting up again pretty soon. Usually UA allows you to do that once you get certified. We haven't heard anything about that yet. Yanagi replied. Well, when that comes up, you three are more than welcome to join me at my agency. Really, the 3 students said in unison. Of course, the green-haired woman smiled. I'd be happy to have you all join me. Izuku and Yanagi-san would benefit from it greatly since we all have the same quirk. And since Takagi-san wants to be a rescue specialist, it only makes sense. Can't really argue with you there. The lizard tail splitter user nodded in agreement. Well, ask Kan-sensei about it when classes start again on Monday, Midoriya told her. Excellent. Katsuragi smiled. Anyways, I just wanted to give you a call and tell you how proud I am. I'm working the night shift today, so I need to get going. Have a wonderful rest of your day. You too, the 3 students said to her before the call ended. Man, we haven't even had our provisional licenses for a full day and we're already getting offers. Takagi joked. So how often do you and Blizzard talk on the phone? Yanagi turned towards Midoriya and gave him a curious look. About once a week, he replied while scratching his cheek a bit bashfully. I see. The gray-haired teen simply nodded. Yeah, apparently the two of them are like family now. I even heard him call her One-ichin on the phone. Although she would never admit to it, Yanagi was actually kind of jealous of her friend. Ever since she was a kid, the Psychic Sisters were some of her favorite heroes. They were actually a pretty big reason why she decided to try and become one herself. She used to watch videos of the two of them all the time when she was growing up. And she even had Tornado as her screensaver for a long time. When she first heard that Blizzard had decided to take him up under her wing, she felt pretty bad about not being the one to catch one of her idol's attention. But luckily, she got over those feelings pretty quickly. And now that she had the opportunity to train under Blizzard along with her friends, she was more than satisfied with that. Midoriya suddenly stood up and began stretching his arms out before letting out yawn. I'm still pretty tired from today, so I'm going to go take a nap. He'll see you guys later. Try not to dream about me too much. Takagi shot back with a grin. I'm going to go join everyone else inside. I think it's high time that I whoop Monoma and Shishida's butt in chess. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yanagi agreed before standing up from her seat. See you guys later. Later that evening. It wasn't until a few hours later when Midoriya finally re-emerged out of his room. Most of the students were in their own rooms and relaxing after the taxing day that they had. And the only people present in the common area were Bondo, Shota, Shishida, Fukudashi, and Kodai, who were all in the middle of a game of Super Smash Bros. What's up, Midoriya-kun? Shota said politely to his classmate. Where are you heading off to? Fukudashi's thought bubble spelled out. Oh, I am just going out for a jog. I need to stretch my legs a bit. The green-haired teen replied in an unusual tone. Cool. Pretty much everyone nodded. Have fun. Yeah, no problem, Jude, was all the boy said before making his way out of the building. Shishida began rubbing his chin with a thoughtful look on his face. What's wrong? I believe that is the first time that I have ever heard Midoriya-san refer to anyone as Jude, the furry teen said. Now that I think about it, I haven't heard him say that before either, Fukudashi added. Koda nodded before everyone turned their attention right back to their game. Jesus Christ, I'm glad that I didn't have to talk to anybody for too long. Especially that girlfriend of his. Trying to keep a low profile is hard when you live with a bunch of idiot teenagers, Tatsumaki Katsuragi thought to herself as she continued walking towards the training field. One of the added benefits of this new situation of hers was a bit of shared knowledge between her and Midoriya, which allowed her to learn quite a bit about the boy. She may have known the names of all of his classmates and friends, but the woman wasn't about to press her luck during times where she borrowed his body. But now that she was in the clear, the former heroine was more than ready to cut loose for a bit and have some fun. If she remembered correctly, the training field near Gym Gamma was open for anybody to use when class wasn't in session. And as much as she wanted to get out of this hellhole and pay her sister a visit, she knew that her control over this body was temporary and that it wasn't a good idea. So for now, she was simply going to get some practice in with her quirk. I'm still under 50% of my maximum, the woman pondered briefly. On top being only at a fraction of her strength, there was another issue that she was aware of. Each time she took Midoriya's body out for a stroll, she could feel her control of this vessel weakening. And the woman had a pretty good idea as to why. Simply put, this was only a temporary arrangement. Eventually her and Midoriya's consciousness would merge into one, and she would very well cease to exist entirely. Anyone that knew Tatsumaki would agree that she was a strong-willed individual, and that might have been the only reason that she was able to do this. But in time, the former number 4 heroine would be no more. But until that fateful day arrived, she was going to milk this for all that it worth. A couple of minutes passed by as Tatsumaki continued making her way over to the training field. But just as her destination came within eyesight, she decided to stop and address something that had been bothering her up until this point. It's rude to go around stalking people, she announced as she turned around to face the building on her left, doing her best not to sound like herself. Silence was the only response that she received before the person that had been pursuing her for that last few minutes made their presence known. And from behind the corner, Katsuki Bakugo stepped out. He was dressed in a black tank top with matching pants and had a look of absolute irritation on his face. Oh, it's this asshole, the woman thought. Is there something that you need? What are you doing? Bakugo said in a tone that she would normally find unacceptable. But seeing as she had to keep up appearances, she wasn't going to throw the boy up against a wall. HMPH, I should be asking you the same thing, Bakugo. But if you must know, I simply wanted to get some late afternoon training in. Something about the way she said that definitely rubbed the ashen blonde teen the wrong way, which made it hard for Tatsumaki to suppress a slight grin on her face. Of course, thanks to her access to Midoriya's memory, she knew quite a bit about the boy. And if there was one thing that she hated, it was people who thought they were hot shit. Which is why she made it a point to antagonize Endeavor whenever the two found themselves in the same room. TCH, Bakugo scoffed before getting right to the point. You and I need to have a little talk. Come with me. And where exactly do you plan on taking me? She asked condescendingly. Training ground beta. Yeah, I don't think so. What the boy gave her a weird look. We can have this little chat of yours in the woods on the east side of campus. It's a bit more private there. Whatever, just hurry your ass up, was all that Bakugo said before shoving his hands in his pockets and walking in the direction of the woods. Tatsumaki had a pretty good idea as to what was going on, but she saw this as the perfect opportunity to do Midoriya a favor and deal with a problem of his that had been going on for far too long. Oh yeah, this is going to be fun. The short walk through the school grounds was an awkward one to say the least. Not a word was said the entire time, and Tatsumaki's patience was beginning to wear thin. The sun had just barely set and there were still a few hours until the students' curfew. And the last thing she wanted to do right now was waste her valuable time dealing with some spoiled brat. But this was just a necessary evil to the green-haired heroine. After another brief couple of minutes, the two of them stopped in the middle of the woods on the east side of campus. It was a small clearing that was more than good enough for a private conversation. Both individuals stood with a good 15 meters of space in between them, and the painfully annoying silence continued on for another 15 seconds or so before the former heroine decided to get this show on the road. So she spoke in a tone that certainly rubbed Bakugo the wrong way. Care to explain why you drugged me all the way out here? You think you're pretty slick, don't you? Deku, Bakugo simply said. First of all, the woman scowled while placing her hand on her hip. That will be the only time you call me by that name. It'd be in your best interest not to do it again. Where the hell do you get off thinking you can tell me what to do, was the boy's immediate response. Ever since coming to this school you've been acting like some big shot. What, you think that just because you now have that shitty quirk of yours that you can? Bakugo's mouth immediately clamped shut before he could finish what he had to say. For a split second, he wondered what was going on. But it was clear to him that this loser had just shut him up, literally. You have 60 seconds to make your point. But do watch what you say, I won't tell you again. No way did you bring me all the way out here. The irritated stare that Bakugo was giving her let Tatsumaki know that she was definitely the one in control of the situation. She knew that this boy wasn't an idiot, so she doubted that he would try something foolish. You passed the provisional license exam, didn't you? Yeah, and you. That's none of your damn business, the ashen blonde howled back with a bit more anger than usual. Ah, so that's what this is about. The woman grinded slightly. She could tell a bruised ego from a mile away. There are a few things I want you to tell me. First of all, when exactly did you get a quirk? The ashen blonde teen demanded. None of your damn business. What? I'm not going to repeat myself. What the hell is your aim malfunction? You nerd, back in middle school you used to cower at my very presence. Now you think that you can just speak to me whatever way you like. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone far stronger than you, for starters, Tatsumaki said with a smug grin that did nothing to calm down Bakugo's rapidly growing anger. Even though she knew that Midoriya would never act this way, in this particular instance she felt the need to show as little regard for his former bully as possible. She absolutely loved knocking people down a peg, and this guy was almost easy prey. TCH, the explosion quirk user scoffed before continuing his inquiry. 6 hours, Bakugo started. What? 6 hours is how long I was trapped alone with those losers villains. And during that time they did nothing but try and convince me to join their side. Can you believe it? They thought that I would do something as stupid as become a villain. Well, it's not like they were too far off the mark. What? Don't pretend like you don't know what I'm talking about, Tatsumaki retorted. Someone like you is more than suited to become a villain. After all, you harass people on a daily basis and yell the words die or I'll kill you every 30 seconds. And on top of that, that third-rate quirk of yours is more suited for terrorism than it is heroics. You want to try that again? Bakugo grinded his teeth as he began letting off miniature explosions in his right hand. If anyone was the perfect candidate to become a villain, it would definitely be you. Well, how dare you say something like that to me, Deku? Apparently that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Originally, the ashen blonde teen was going to try and get some answers out of the green-haired boy. But his attitude and entire demeanor was pissing him off. He had no clue what had gotten into the boy, but Bakugo certainly wasn't going to stand for the blatant disrespect that he had been receiving this entire time. In the blink of an eye, Bakugo was soaring through the air after using his quirk to propel himself forward. But unfortunately for the ashen blonde teen, Tatsumaki's reaction speed was top class. He only made it about 3 meters before his body was forced to ground. In a split second, Bakugo could feel his control over his own body slip away from him. Of course, this wasn't his first time falling under the influence of the boy's quirk, but something about this was different. Before, it was just a simple feeling of weightlessness. Now, it was as if the very gravity around him was adding more pressure onto his body. HMPH, you've got a lot of nerve. Tatsumaki smirked as she casually walked up towards him. I thought that you were supposed to be smart. You should know better than to attack someone who can end you without lifting a finger. I may only be at about 40% of my maximum strength, but that's more than enough to handle you. Noba before me. As soon as she said that, Bakugo's body began moving on its own. From his spot on the ground, the explosion quirk user moved to a position where he was now on his knees with his hands pressed against his thighs and facing his enemy. This bastard just made me kneel. Using his eyes, Bakugo glanced up at Tatsumaki. The woman was now standing right in front of him with her arms folding across her chest, all while giving him a look that made his boil. Now, you're going to tell me exactly what you want, idiot. Yeah, you helped out those damn villains. The police fed me some bullshit about you being mind-controlled. But I didn't believe it for a damn second. What the hell were you thinking? It's the truth. The woman shrugged. This body was being controlled. I don't believe you. You can think whatever you want. It doesn't really matter to me. Stop lying to me, you son of a. You attacked me and then went after All Might. Because of you he almost lost against that villain boss. That overgrown buffoon was on his last leg anyway. It was only a matter of time before he went up against someone that he couldn't handle anymore. If you ask me, that old fossil should be thankful that the other heroes came to bail him out. Bakugo couldn't believe what he was hearing. All his life, Midoriya idolized All Might. He practically thought of him as a god, and the fact that he had the audacity to say something like that in front of him was unbelievable. Look, brat, this has been fun and all, but I don't really have a lot of time, so I'm gonna get going. You should head back to your dorm and relax before you do something even more stupid than challenging me to a fight. With that, Tatsumaki released her quirk and began walking towards the direction of campus, finally giving Bakugo a chance to regain control over his own body. Don't you dare turn your back to me, Deku, the boy shouted at her back. If you think you are so strong now, then why don't fight me like a man? I'll show you once and for all who's strongest. Because it wouldn't even be a challenge, was all the woman replied with. Suddenly, the area began shaking. Then before Bakugo even knew what was going on, several of the trees around them were ripped out of the ground and began floating in the air. The ashen blonde teen watched as every single one of the trees began condensing and reforming into smaller and smaller shapes. Once they were done, 10 newly formed wooden spears were aimed directly at him. Gungnir, Tatsumaki announced confidently. This was a move of hers that she rarely ever used before she died, but it was more than enough to get her point across. However, if you truly think that you can take me on, by all means, go ahead and try. Silence was the only thing that came out of Bakugo's mouth as he stood in awe at the display of power that he just witnessed, and the ashen blonde teen instantly began trembling. What was happening was he actually experiencing fear right now, fear brought on by the useless Deku of all people. I thought so. Tatsumaki smirked once again before levitating into the air. Now if you excuse me, I've got some flying to do. Have a wonderful evening, Katsuki Bakugo. That was the last thing the woman said before flying off into the direction of the school, leaving Bakugo with quite a bit to think about. The first day of the new semester went about as expected for the students of Class 1B. The syllabus they received from Kan that morning let them know that their overall workload was going to be increased for the new term, which earned quite a few groans from everyone not named Midoriya, Takagi, Kendo, Yanagi, Honuki, or Kodai. But overall it wasn't anything that they couldn't handle. Despite all of this, there was still a silver lining that the students were more than a bit excited about, and that was their upcoming work studies. Much like the internships at the start of year, the students had the opportunity to work under any pro hero of their choosing as long as they were accepted. Except now that they had their provisional licenses, they would be granted a lot more freedom on the job. At the moment, the students were getting ready to head out to lunch. They had a pretty easy schedule for the rest of the day, which did nothing to quell their overall excitement. So Izuku, you plan on actually eating lunch with the rest of us today? Takagi asked the green-haired boy as their usual group made their way through the hall. Oh yeah, it's been so long that I almost forgot. Honuki interjected. Where exactly do you run off to during lunch? Midoriya paused for a moment as everyone gave him a slew of curious looks, only taking a second before giving them an answer. Well, I usually just go to the roof. Really? Yanagi glanced back at him. Yeah, well that certainly makes a lot of sense, Kendo said. No wonder we could never find you. Next it was Tetsu's turn to speak up. You know what, that sounds like a good idea. The cafeteria is usually packed. I bet the roof has a ton of space. Then it's decided, Takagi cheered. Looks like the roof is our new lunch spot. Is that alright with you, Izuku? Yeah, sure. The green-haired teen nodded. He pretty much expected this to happen ever since Takagi found out about his secret hiding spot. In the past he looked forward to having some alone time during the break, but nowadays he wasn't opposed to the idea of having some extra guests. Just as the group of teens turned the corner, an all-too-familiar sea of sky-blue hair made her presence known. Izuku, the bubbly voice of Neji Hadu shouted from across the hall. The group of first-years all turned their heads to see the blonette walking alongside her classmate, Tamaki Amajiki. Tamaki, hey, Kendo gave the boy a wave, only for him to immediately hide behind his classmate. Hado-senpai, how's it going? Hey, I heard that the first-years are going to be starting their work studies pretty soon. Cool. How you know what this means? Right, you can finally join me and Ryukyu at her agency. Doesn't that sound like fun? The blonette said in an excited tone. Actually, Midoriya said a bit bashfully while scratching his cheek. I was already planning on working under Blizzard again. Really, almost everybody said in unison at that announcement. Yeah, HMPH Hado began to pout. No fair, I already called dibs on you. I'm sorry. The boy apologized with a bow. Hey, Takagi suddenly interjected after noticing a missing person. Isn't there usually three of you? Where's that blonde dude with the crazy hair? Oh yeah, Miriokan is busy with his work study, so he's not at school today. The girl quickly explained before an idea popped into her head. Hey, why don't we all eat lunch together? Doesn't that sound fun? I haven't had a chance to talk to the rest of you first years yet, and you guys have some pretty awesome quirks. Sounds like nice idea for me. Tsunotori shrugged. Yeah, I don't see why not. Awase followed up. Alright, then it's been decided, let's go. Hado cheered before grabbing Midoriya by the shoulders and pulling him in the direction of the cafeteria, forcing the others to try and catch up with her. It didn't take long before the group consisting of Midoriya, Takagi, Tetsu, Kendo, Yanagi, Honuki, Shiozaki, Tsunotori, Awase, Amajiki, and Hado to grab their food and make their way up to the school roof. It was a lovely day outside and the atmosphere was pretty much perfect to get some fresh air and avoid the usual madness of the cafeteria. Wait, so Blizzard offered to take on all three of you? Kendo asked her fellow classmates in between her sips of coffee. Yeah, I was actually pretty surprised myself, Midoriya replied. Man, you guys are so lucky. Awase groaned in jealousy. I don't know if he'll be able to even do a work study. School's already hard enough as it is. Well, I'm excited. I can't wait to get started, Tetsu said confidently after taking a massive bite out of a chunk of aluminum foil. Are you sure that your GPA can handle that? Metalhead Takagi joked, only for the steel quirk user to immediately deflate at the idea of his grades dropping lower than what they already were. I still think that you should join me at Ryukyu's agency, but Blizzard seems like the best fit for you. Hey, are you sure that you two aren't related? You guys look a lot alike and you have the same quirk. I'm pretty sure you can pass off as her younger brother. Believe me, we've been trying to get Midoriya-kun to admit to it all year. Honuki chuckled. Next it was Shiozaki's turn to speak. I've been meaning to ask, what are the work studies like? They can't be much different from our internships, can they? Essentially they are not. You just have a lot more freedom to help out the pros that decide to take you on. And you can get called in at any time to help out. Amajiki quietly responded while facing away from the group. Oh yeah, are you still working with Fakum? Kendo asked the indigo-haired teen, earning a silent nod. Seriously, I love Fakum, he's a total badass. Tetsu's eyes lit up at that information. Working with him must be awesome. I desire to do work studies too. It sounds like much fun. I can't wait to start, Tsunotori said. Awa, you're like the most adorable person ever, Tsunotori-chan, and I love your accent, Hadu said to the horned teen. The conversation continued on like this for another 5 minutes or so before the door to the roof opened up. Everyone turned their heads to see a trio of 1A students consisting of Takoyami, Asui, and Uraraka standing there with their lunches in hand. Hey, what's up 1A? We haven't seen you guys in a while. Takage was the first to greet them. I didn't know that this many people came up here during lunch, Jiro. Asui, the vice rep of Class 1A with the long scar on her face, said rather bluntly. Indeed, we assumed that no one else would be up here. Takoyami continued. Yeah, this is kind of a new thing for us too. How have you guys been? Pretty good, Jiro. The frog-themed teen answered as the three of them sat down to join their fellow students. How did the licensing exam go for you guys? I texted Yae Yorizun, but she never got back to me. Kendo inquired. Half of us ended up passing. Uraraka answered. What happened? Said Awase. Most of us got knocked out in the first part. The other schools pretty much ganged up on us at the start. Uraraka explained. You guys too? Hohonuki asked. If it wasn't for Kansensei tipping us off beforehand, we wouldn't have been prepared for that. Apparently they call it the crushing of UA. It seems as though your class was far better prepared than we were. It was truly a turbulent trial, but some of us were still able to make it out victorious. Doesn't he sound exactly like Kiruaro? Awase whispered to Shiozaki, who silently agreed with him. So, who all ended up passing? Besides the three of us, Jiro. There was Mama-chan, Rin-kun, Kaioka-chan, Kaminari-chan, Shaji-kun, Tora-chan, and Mineta-kun. Asui explained. Wait, so Bakugo and Todoroki failed Midoriya and Takage thought at the same time. It was hard to believe that the two strongest students in their class failed the exam. To be frank, they should have been guaranteed to get their licenses. But considering the former's attitude, it wasn't all that much surprising. Todoroki, however, was definitely a shocker. What about you guys? All of us passed. The 1B students echoed in unison, which was quite the surprise to the others. So, are you guys taking part in the work studies? Said Kendo. Yes, Takoyami nodded. He'll be working with Hawks again. The number 2 hero, nice going dude. Tetsu flashed him a thumbs up. That's so cool. Hadu spoke up. The two of you are birds, so of course he'd pick you. Hey, Takoyami-kun, can you fly too? You're the one with that bird spirit quirk, right? I bet you can transform it into a pair of wings and soar around the sky like an eagle. Oh hey, we should start a flying club. Wouldn't that be awesome? Something about what the girl said made the raven-headed teen pause for a moment. Admittedly, Midoriya had the exact same question. If anything, Takoyami more than likely had some trick up his sleeve that would grant him some level of aerial ability. He didn't know much about the boy besides his quirk, but he was definitely one of strongest amongst the first years in his opinion. What about you guys? Tetsu asked the other two 1A students. I haven't decided yet, Jiro. Actually, I'm planning on going to Ingenium's agency, Uraraka announced a bit nervously. He asked me a while ago if I would like to work under him and his team, and it's too good of an offer to refuse. Yet another surprise to add to the list for the 1B students. Of course, everyone was well aware of the situation concerning the famed Ideton agency. With their flagship hero permanently out of commission and the wood bear having been killed by Stain, there were more than a few questions about what direction the group would take in the future. But it was nice to see that they were still continuing hero operations for the time being. From what they knew, Uraraka was probably the closest to the now-deceased Tenya Ida out of everyone in 1A, so it made sense that Ingenium would make her an offer. Their group dynamic was pretty much flawless and she would definitely make a good addition to the team. Man, you guys are so awesome, Hadu cheered before everyone went back to their food. Soon enough, lunch came to an end and the students were all on their way back to class. Izukun, Takage-chan, Hadu shouted at the two brunettes. Yeah, what are you two doing this weekend? The brunette asked somewhat impatiently. Nothing much, Takage answered. Why? How would you guys like to go on a double date with me and Yu this Friday? I've been wanting to do one for a while now and I think it'd be a lot of fun. You think so too, right? What do you say? Seriously, the green-haired girl gave her a surprised look. Yeah. It suddenly occurred to Midoriya that he completely forgot about Hiatus' girlfriend mentioning that to him a couple of weeks ago. With all the craziness surrounding the exams, it totally slipped his mind. The boy then glanced over at his girlfriend, who was also giving him a curious look. Where do you plan on going? There's this new Korean barbecue place that opened up not too far away from the school. They are having a special where you get half off if you bring a group of 4 or more people. Yuya's been wanting to check it out for a while now. Tamaki-kun and Mirio-kun won't be able to make it, so the two of you are the next best thing. Sounds awesome, right? Takage took a moment to think about this proposal. It had been a while since her and Midoriya had been on an actual date, and now that exams were over, this was the perfect chance to make up for lost time. On top of that, she was certainly a fan of Korean barbecue, so that was just an added benefit. Sounds like a good idea to me, she said with her signature toothy grin. Yeah, I think it would be a lot of fun. Midoriya followed up. Awesome, I'll text you the details later. See you guys later. The brunette gave them one final wave before heading in the opposite direction to her class, leaving the young couple to do the same. I'm kinda looking forward to this. We haven't gone out in a while. Yeah, The boy nodded. Takagi was quick to grab him by the hand and begin leading him towards the class. They still had plenty of time before the bell rang, so they were no way in a rush. That reminds me, we're still going to the orphanage on Saturday, right? Yeah, I already got the green light from Kansensei and Kase-san is fine with it. Ono-san is even going to be there since classes don't start for him until next week. Cool, was her short reply. Actually, this was more than cool. This was the perfect chance for her to bring up a topic that had been plaguing her mind all week. Hey, since we're on the subject, can I ask you something? What is it? Brain Boy isn't cutting himself anymore, is he? That question was enough to make Midoriya freeze in place. For a couple of seconds, he simply stared at her in bewilderment before she continued talking. I first noticed at that time you helped him out during our internships. Plus, he's almost always in long-sleeve shirts. I don't plan on asking him about it or anything, but I was just curious. And I know, he's not doing it anymore. Midoriya replied rather easily. He stopped a while ago, before I met him. Good, she nodded. I was worried for a second. That's not really something people should be doing. Yeah, Midoriya nervously agreed. I remember reading something about self-harm stuff a while ago. Most of the time it's people who are really depressed and need some kind of release from all the stress in their life. Considering the fact that he used to get harassed in school, I'm really not surprised. Yeah, I can't really argue with you there. Takagi quickly glanced down at the boy's abdomen before catching herself and looking back at him. Have you ever felt like doing something like that before? I know you used to go through something similar before you did the whole homeschool thing. No, I can't say that I have. He answered rather quickly, something about the way that she asked him that seemed odd to him. Almost like it was a loaded question and she was expecting some kind of answer. Does she? Okay. The girl simply shrugged. You know, if you ever need someone to talk to about anything, or just need to get something off your chest, I'm here for you. Thanks, but I'm fine. I'm past that part of my life, so you don't need to worry. Cool, was all Takagi said before detaching her head from her shoulders and planting a few quick pecks on his lips. No PDA in the halls, you two hurry up and get to class. The voice of Snipe randomly came from out of nowhere, forcing the two teens to straighten up and rush back to their classroom before the bell rang. Later that afternoon, once classes were finally done for the day, the majority of the 1B students were all lounging about in the common area. Really? Hado-senpai asked you about doing your work study with Ryukyu? Midoriya asked Tsunotori as the two powered their way through their literature homework. Yeah, totally crazy, right? I ran into her on the way back to the dorms and the two of us just started talking. Next thing I knew, she offered to put in a good word for me with Ryukyu. The horned teen answered excitedly. Well, that's awesome. I'm happy for you. Thanks. Hey guys, Inagi interjected from across the table. Can we please stick to Japanese while we're doing our homework? Oh yeah, sorry. The two apologized. It's cool. On the other side of the room, Takagi, Tetsu, and Awase were doing their math homework. Or more accurately, Takagi was doing her best to help the two boys out while they struggled to figure out exactly what they were doing. So you're going to ask that Amajiki dude to let you talk to Fatcom? The green-haired teen asked her childhood friend. Hell yeah, I am, the steel quirk user replied. You know, Fatcom's one of my top 5 favorite heroes. Why wouldn't I jump at the chance to do a work study with him? And Amajiki seems like a cool dude. I'm sure he'd put in a good word for me. Well, I'm rooting for you. Just try and make sure that you don't end up failing any classes because of this. I can't guarantee that he'll be able to help you out as much if we're all doing work studies. And your mom would be pretty pissed if I let you fall behind. She told him. In all honesty, Takagi should have seen this coming. Tetsu has been a fan of Fatcom ever since elementary school. She never really understood why he liked him so much, only that it had something to do with the fact that they both had to eat to get stronger and that the BGMI hero punched people really hard. So it wasn't a surprise to her that he was going to do everything that he could to work under him. Don't worry about it. The boy waved off. Things continued on as normal for the next 15 minutes or so before Monoma, Kamakiri, and Subiraba came running down the stairs. The three boys were all wide-eyed and almost looked to be out of breath. Hey, have you guys seen the news yet? Subiraba asked the rest of the class. What's going on? Kendo asked. Look, the boy almost shoved his phone right into the orange-haired teen's face. Kendo examined the mobile device for a brief moment before her own eyes blew open, prompting the rest of the students to become much more interested in what was going on. Well, don't keep us in the dark. What's up? Takagi said impatiently. They caught the hero killer. With the entire building almost erupted. Oh, thank the Lord. Shiozaki clasped her hands together in joy after receiving what was certainly some delightful news. No one had forgotten what happened to their classmate at the start of the school year, and hearing that the man who ended his life was now behind bars was a massive relief. Kamakiri was quick to pull out his own cell phone and walked right over to Midoriya, wasting no time in showing his fellow green-haired student the JNN article. You might want to take a look at this. Midoriya grabbed the device from Kamakiri's hand and began scrolling through the article. The rest of the class started surrounding him, so for the sake of time he chose to read it out loud. Early this afternoon in West Tokyo near Minato Ward, the serial killer commonly referred to as Stain was apprehended after making yet another attempt on a hero's life. The man has been wanted for the assaults and murders of over 6 to 5 heroes and sidekicks over the course of the last year. He said. Who took him down? Shroom Komori asked. presumably speaking for everyone else. Keep reading, Kamakiri demanded. Midoriya was quick to comply before continuing on. After receiving an alert signal, police and nearby heroes responded to the call. Details about the situation are still unclear as of yet, but from what information has been gathered, the pro-hero who apprehended the villain was. Holy shit. Earlier that day, when Fubuki Katsuragi woke up this morning, she thought that she was just going to have a regular and uneventful day. Her schedule was primarily filled with the administrative duties that came with running her own hero agency, along with a quick trip to West Tokyo for a short meeting with the president of the HPSC. However, it looked like she was going to have to put her meeting on hold for the time being. Damn you, you false hero. Stain, also known as the hero killer, shouted at the green-haired woman as she wrapped a nearby fence around his body. Thanks, Blizzard. If it wasn't for you, I'd be dead by now. Airjet, the Buster hero, said to her in a grateful tone as he continued to patch up the wound on his left leg. Don't worry about it, she replied. I'm just glad that I decided to take a shortcut to the HPSC headquarters building. True to her word, the green-haired heroine just so happened to be flying over the city when she caught sight of Airjet laying in a nearby alley in a pool of his own. Naturally, the woman was quick to rush to his aid and showed up just in time to save him from what was sure to be certain death. Much to her surprise, she found herself standing face-to-face with someone who the police and heroes had been trying to track down for months. The infamous Stain. I've heard that this man has some sort of paralysis quirk. Is that how he got you? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's activated by. I saw him lick some of mine after he stabbed me. Then my body completely froze up, the Buster hero explained. Blizzard was quick to turn their attention back to the captured villain. Well, I guess today just wasn't your day. If it was anybody else besides me, you might've gotten away. But I don't need to move my body to use my quirk. Silence, you fake. Stain barked back at her. I know who you are. You're one of those psychic sisters. You may have only recently started to clean up your act, but you're just like all the rest of them. All you care about is fame and recognition. He'll admit that popularity used to be a priority of mine back when I was younger, but I haven't cared about stuff like that for a couple of years now. However, I will not tolerate being talked down to by a psychopathic murderer. The woman countered. If you think that these restraints can hold me, then you're sorely mistaken. Yeah, tell it to the cops. Airjet interjected after finally standing back on his feet. I just sent the emergency signal out on the HN. The police will be here in a couple of minutes. Good. The woman nodded. Well, hero killer, it looks like this is your last day as a free man. You've built up quite a name for yourself, and I can assure you that you will not be seeing the light of day anytime soon. Damn you, was all the masked man bothered to say before a crew of police officers and heroes showed up to the scene. He was quickly put into the back of an armored vehicle and taken away to the nearest precinct. Good job, Blizzard. We can all sleep a bit sounder tonight knowing that this maniac is finally off the streets. One of the police officers said to her in a grateful tone after taking her statement. I was just doing my job. You know, the hero rankings are going to be coming out pretty soon. I wouldn't be surprised if this gave you a massive boost. I'm not concerned about stuff like that. She waved off. Well, thank you anyway. You're free to go. Our office will send the paperwork to your agency to be processed once we're done. Have a wonderful rest of your day, Mom. You too. When all that was said and done, Blizzard wasted no time in going about her business. Although she certainly felt proud of herself for finally bringing that sword-wielding maniac to justice. A part of her knew that she should expect some unwanted attention from the press pretty soon. It hadn't quite dawned on her that she just captured one of the most wanted criminals in the country yet. But once the news caught wind of this, the reality of what she had just done will certainly seep in. I should probably give Lily and the others a heads up about this, she thought before her mind wandered over to her late sister. Is this what One-Ichin felt like when she took down Moonfish? Probably not. Actually, I wonder what Izuku will say about this when he finds out. With that, the woman took off in the direction of her original destination, thinking about how cool she was going to look to her younger brother once the news of this finally broke. Before they knew it, Friday had quickly arrived. As he sat and waited in the common area for his date to show up, Midoriya once again checked himself to make sure that he was good to go. He had everything that he needed, including his wallet and cell phone. And there was nothing wrong with his outfit as far as he could tell. The green-haired youth was sporting a pair of blue jeans with a simple red flannel shirt, along with his signature red shoes. The boy couldn't help have a pretty good feeling about this outing. There were no issues at school this week. His first counseling session with Inui was a lot less stressful than he had initially thought. And now he was going to start off the weekend by having a good time with his girlfriend and some upperclassmen. Girlfriend, yeah, I still can't get used to that, Midoriya thought to himself with a slight smile on his face. It wasn't too long ago that the mere idea of him having a girlfriend seemed like a foolish dream. Almost up there with actually having a quirk and getting the chance to become a hero. Alright, Ymir, a cheery voice brought the boy out of his thoughts. As soon as he turned to face her, Midoriya's brain momentarily froze at the sight before him. Standing there, in a royal blue sundress with matching sandals, was Takagi. The girl's moss green locks were tied back into a ponytail and she was also sporting a pair of white bracelets on either wrist. Amazing, Midoriya said to himself as the girl made her approach. So how do I look? Takagi asked while twirling around to give him a full view of her outfit before striking a pose. You look great. Like amazing. He stuttered a bit as he tried to regain his nerve. And I really like that dress. Well, thank you. She smiled at him. You don't look half bad yourself. Red's a good color on you. Thank you. He simply nodded. Now, before we go, the girl said while pulling her phone out of her front pocket and wrapping her arm around him. Before he really had a chance to react, Takagi took the liberty of snapping a few quick photos of the two of them. They were pretty good pictures from what he could tell, and he definitely made a mental note to remind himself to ask her to send one of them to him to save in his phone for later. Alright, let's hurry up and meet up with Hiatus. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to this. Yeah, me too, was all he said before the green-haired duo made their way out of the building. By the time the group finally arrived at the restaurant, the place was already packed and bursting with energy. All over the dining area was a slew of people from all different walks of life. Salarymen, students, a couple of off-duty pro heroes, you name it. On first glance, the place looked to have some sort of old-school Korean vibe to it. And judging by the almost intoxicating aroma flowing through their nostrils, the group of students knew that they were in for a good time. Oh man, my mouth is already watering, Takagi grinned while growing increasingly impatient. Yeah, this place is pretty popular. I'm glad that we got a reservation. Hey, it told her as their party walked over to the counter. Welcome, do you all have a reservation? The lady behind the cash register asked in a polite tone that sounded a bit too rehearsed. Yeah, we do. Hiatus was the first to respond. Hiatus, party of 4 mom. The woman took a brief second to search through the list on her computer before nodding and directing the students to their area. Hey, isn't that Midoriya the guy that got kidnapped by those villains? Yeah, I think you're right. Holy shit, man, that must've been rough. I wonder what happened to him. I recognize that blue-haired chick too. I've seen her in pictures with Ryukyu. I think she's like her sidekick or something. I'm pretty sure all of them go to UA. Lucky bastard, why does he get to hang out with a ton of pretty girls? Better make sure he doesn't hear you. You remember what he did to the blonde-haired kid during the sports festival, right? Luckily they heard none of that. And once the 4 of them finally sat down at their table, Hiatus wasted no time in rambling on about how cool the restaurant looked, and how jealous her 2 other friends were going to be when she tells them about it. Wow, this place is pretty awesome, don't you think, Yuha? Yeah, I bet the food here is amazing. The redhead teen smiled. I don't think I've ever had Korean food before, Midoriya admitted while looking around the area. Well, you're in for a treat. Takagi patted him on the shoulder. Korean barbecue is the best. Takagi-chan's right. They let you cook your own food and we get to stay here for a whole hour. It's like an all-you-can-eat custom buffet, said Hiatus in a more excited tone than before. It only took a few minutes for the food to arrive and even less time for them to get the party started. As they placed their selected choices of meats on the open hot plate in the middle of the table, the group decided to engage in some polite conversation. So, are you guys excited to finally get your work studies started? They're so much fun. And Blizzard's super cool too. Izukan, you're really lucky to get to work under someone with the same quirk as you. That's what I said. Takagi joined in. She's like the perfect teacher for him. And she's a top-notch rescue hero too. I read that she took out the hero killer a few days ago. That must've been scary. Hey, I put her 2 cents in while stacking more meat onto the hot plate. Oh, do you think that's going to boost her hero ranking? She dropped off quite a bit over the last few years. Ryuki is probably going to be in the top 10 again this time around. Wouldn't it be awesome if Blizzard made it to she's number 30 now? Isn't she? That'd be a major jump in such a short time. It's weird that she's so low since her quirk is so powerful and she's all over the place. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. The green-haired boy agreed with his upperclassman. Now that he thought about it, he never did get a chance to ask his pseudo-sibling why she stopped caring about hero rankings so much. Early in her career, Katsuragi seemed to care about it quite a bit. It probably has something to do with Tatsumaki's death. You're right about that, Takagi then said. Either way, I'm really looking forward to it. Our internships got cut short the last time, but now we get the chance to do some actual hero work with a top hero. I've been meaning to ask you, Takagi. Hey, then turned her attention to the girl. Are you related to Midnight Sensei? She's mentioned you a couple of times when we were setting up for the sports festivals. Not really. Aunt Nimura's been with my family ever since I was a kid. My dad makes her costumes. The girl answered. Oh, so he's a hero support engineer? That's pretty cool. Oh hey, I heard a rumor that she was crushing on somebody pretty hard. Some of the other students in our homeroom mentioned it a couple of times. Have you heard that? Do you know who it is? Simon, tell us. Hiatus asked the girl in an inquisitive tone. The green-haired youth couldn't help but smile at that. Oh yeah, totally. She's absolutely in love with my dad. She's been trying for years to get him to go out with her. Whoa, really? That's so awesome. She's kinda like your stepmom then. You know, I saw her drawing pictures of some guy's face this one time in class while we were taking a test. I bet it was him. Oh really? If anyone thought that Satsuna Takagi was just going to let some juicy information like that slide, they were dead wrong. Not only was this excellent ammo for her to use the next time that the R-rated heroine tried to tease her, she was determined to see if she could get her hands on one of these alleged drawings. You're plotting something, aren't you? Midoriya gave her a skeptical look, only to receive a devious grin in response. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready to dig in. Hey, announced before the redhead began stacking pieces of cooked meat and sauce onto her plate. The other students nodded and quickly followed her lead by doing the same. Overall, it was a pretty great outing. A lot more fun than Midoriya had been expecting. By now the boy was still getting used to doing these kinds of things, but he was glad that he got to share this experience with people that he could consider his friends. Eventually, their Friday night outing came to an end and the group of UA students were able to make it back to campus before it got too late. After saying their goodbyes to Hadu and Heya, the young couple decided to stroll around the school grounds for a bit before heading into their building. And since they still had an entire hour until curfew, they had more than enough time to enjoy the night air. The roads were empty and it was apparent that privacy wasn't going to be an issue. That was pretty fun. Takagi tucked her hands behind her back as she walked backwards while still facing him. Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed myself, Midoriya replied. It's amazing how much food Hadu can eat. I guess all those calories just go straight to her ass and ass. Must be nice. Midoriya's face flushed with red as he stumbled. I don't know how to respond to that. Seeing as she got the exact reaction that she was looking for, all Takagi could do was giggle at her boyfriend's expression. I know, I just like seeing you get all flustered when I bring up stuff like that. But Simon, I mean it's not even fair. She's walking around with watermelons in her chest and I'm stuck with these. The girl proceeded to boldly cup her own chest before lightly juggling her mounds in his face. If there was ever an action to cause Midoriya to completely forget how to process thought, that was definitely it. And it certainly didn't help that a good amount of Takagi's cleavage was showing through her neckline. Setsuna, oh man, seriously Izuku, you're just too easy sometimes, she giggled as she put her hands on either side of his face, pulling his focus onto her. Hey, I'm joking. He slowly managed to calm himself down. You really are too much sometimes. I know, but I just like seeing you all hot and bothered like this. It's not very funny. Takagi then shook her head. It's hilarious. She followed up by kissing his nose before stepping away. And cute. Midoriya's blush worsened before it slowly began to fade. He took a deep breath. Oh okay, he smiled determinedly. I'm going to get you back. I'd like to see you try. She smirked confidently. The two continued their walk around the campus before Midoriya finally decided to try something that had been waiting to do all afternoon. He himself knew that he was still an amateur when it came to the whole romance thing. But according to a few blog articles that he read, doing something spontaneous was just what he needed. Hey, he turned to face her. I want to try something. What is it? The girl gave him a curious look. Just to close your eyes, he asked. Takagi gave a quick shrug before doing as she was told and clamping her eyelids shut. Without any warning, Midoriya suddenly grabbed the green-haired girl by her waist and Takagi instantly felt her feet leave the ground. It took her all of 1 second to realize that the boy had just activated his. And judging by how the wind was now moving at a faster pace than before, they were slowly moving upwards. Izuku, what are yo? The girl didn't get a chance to finish her question before the feeling of Midoriya's lips pressing against her own silenced her. Now when it comes to the dynamic of their relationship, Takagi was usually the one to initiate intimate contact, which she didn't have a problem with. But she would be lying if she said that she didn't enjoy the rare occasions when Midoriya took charge. Okay, you can open your eyes now, the boy said in an uncharacteristically smooth voice after the two parted lips. Takagi simply did as she was told and opened her eyes to see that two greenettes were floating pretty high up into the air. Before she spoke, the girl took a moment to look around and was taken aback by the view. From where they were, she could see the entire school along with a good part of the city skyline in the horizon. Pretty nice, Midoriya said to her with a grin. She couldn't exactly put it into words, but there was something about the way that the light hit Midoriya's face that managed to highlight the boy's features. The soft glow gave the boy a slightly angelic tone and his emerald green locks almost looked as though they were shining. The two stayed like this for another few seconds, all while slowly twirling in a clockwise motion. The next thing that Takagi did was place her hand on the boy's cheek and smile at him. I like you. What? He gave her a confused look. I like you. I don't think I've actually told you, so I thought I'd let you know. Well, thanks. Midoriya blushed a bit. I like you too. Of course you do, who doesn't? That was the last thing that was said between the young couple before descending back to the earth and walking back to their dorm hand in hand. Both of them greatly appreciating their wonderful night out. Said morning. After the short train ride over to Saitama Prefecture, Midoriya and Takagi were making the journey towards the orphanage. It was their first time going there in quite a while and the telekinesis user was really excited to see everyone again. Before they knew it, the young couple found themselves arriving at the building and were greeted by Kasai at the door. Midoriya-kun, Takagi-san, it's so nice to see you again. It's been far too long. Hello Kasai-san, sorry I haven't been able to drop by recently. School's gotten pretty busy. The green-haired teen bashfully rubbed the back of his head. Nonsense. The blonde-haired woman waved off. I'm just glad that you are all right. After hearing about what happened, all of us were worried about you. Well, I'm fine now. I'm sorry causing all of you so much trouble. The three chatted for another few seconds before entering the building and making the trip over to the library. Once they got to their destination, Midoriya didn't even make it 2 steps past the doorway before a semi-strong force tackled him to the ground. Midoriya and 2 tiny voices said in perfect sync. The boy then opened his eyes and allowed his vision to clear up enough to see 2 patches of purple hair laying on top of him. Kani-chan, we heard what happened on the news. Are you okay? The first of the 2 twins asked in a worried tone. Those meanies didn't hurt you, did they? The other one quickly followed up without giving him a chance to reply. Did you get saved by all might and endeavor? Back near the doorway, all Takagi could do was laugh at the spectacle before her. The sight of seeing her boyfriend pinned down to the ground by two 7-year-olds was exactly what she needed. Oh man, that was pretty funny. I think the two of them were worried about you, Izuku. Takagi and the rambunctious duo shouted in unison. How's it going, you rascals? Alright, you two. I'm sure the last thing that Midoriya-kun needs is you guys bothering him about stuff he doesn't want to talk about. Anohana made his presence known while casually walking up to the group. The pink-eyed boy proceeded to lift the two children up off of Midoriya before setting them back down on the ground. What's up, man? How you been? Him doing alright, Midoriya replied. Brain boy, I haven't seen you in a while. Takagi chimed in. How's college life treating you? Pretty good so far. I start classes next week, he replied with a slight smile. But I already got a chance to check out the science labs at the university and am really excited to get started. Cool, cool. The lizard tail splitter user nodded her head. Oh yeah, I told my sister to be on the lookout for you. Have you had a chance to meet her yet? Suddenly, a not so subtle amount of blush appeared on the quirkless teen's face, and for a moment his eyes drifted off to the side before shaking his head and coming back to his senses. Yeah, I met Nanayasan the day I moved in. She's got a lot of personality. Takagi had a pretty good idea as to why Anohana suddenly became so flustered, but she decided to have mercy on the boy and not embarrass him too much in front of the others. Glad to hear it. Just remember to avoid her when she starts drinking. She has a habit of getting handsy with people. That must run in the family. Midoriya shot the girl a look while keeping his thoughts to himself. Noted. Anohana agreed without missing a beat. After their brief introduction and taking another moment to catch up, the group wasted no time in getting right down to business. Because of the start of the new semester, there wasn't really a lot of homework for most of the kids, so it was pretty easy making sure that everyone got the help that they needed. The tutoring session went on for a good hour and some change before Kasai announced that the younger kids were going to take a break, leaving all of the older residents to kick back and relax for a bit. So, how was your vacation to Island? Takagi started off the conversation while taking a sip from her water bottle. It was actually a lot of fun. That place really is amazing, Anohana responded. It's sad that they had to postpone the expo, though, said Midoriya, but it makes sense after that bombing happened. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Luckily I was on the other side of the island when all that went down. Whoever decided to do that is seriously messed up in the head. Where exactly did it happen? From what I was told, it was an R&D lab for heroes run by some American company. No one was there when it happened, but apparently over 3 billion yen in equipment and research data got destroyed. The quirkless teen further explained. Neither of the two heroes' course students could explain it, but there was something odd about the way he said that. That sucks, Takagi stated. Still, it was a pretty awesome trip, and I met a ton of cool people. Really? Like who? You guys have heard of David Shield, right? Well, I actually got to hang out with his daughter, Melissa, for a couple of days. Wow, that's amazing. Midoriya suddenly perked up at that announcement. David Shield was a legend. Not only was he a Nobel Prize winner, he was a leading expert in the hero support industry. Look at you, Mr. Genius. Was she cute? I bet you got her number, didn't you? The green-haired girl immediately began teasing him. Oh, definitely not. The boy waved off. Actually, the two of us didn't really get along that well. Why not? Midoriya asked. Is she like an asshole or something? No, nothing like that. We just have differing views on a lot of stuff, was Anohana's short reply. Midoriya couldn't help but feel like there was a bit more to that statement than what his friend was telling them, but he decided to ask him about it later. So Anohana-san, are you going to be working on any new projects after you finally start class? You bet I am, and I already have one cooked up that I think is really good. Well, don't keep us in the dark, brain boy. What is it? The boy's entire demeanor suddenly shifted to one of pure excitement. I'm looking into creating a new kind of biofuel, he announced. Even though cars and trains run on electricity nowadays, planes still need fossil fuels to function. After my water purification project did so well, the school's science department is giving me a lot of freedom to work on this. That sounds incredible, said Midoriya. And complicated as hell, Takagi followed up. I know, right? The boy smiled. I've already been doing a lot of research into this topic for the last couple of months, and I have a pretty good idea on where I need to focus my attention. Wow, Anohana-san, you're really incredible. Midoriya smiled, happy that his friend was moving on to do more amazing work. The trio continued with their conversation for a little while longer before Kasai announced that break time was over. The rest of the morning was a rather enjoyable experience for the two UA students as well as the residents of the orphanage. Overall, it was definitely a good day. It wasn't until Sunday evening when the trio consisting of Midoriya, Takagi, and Yanagi finally arrived at the Blizzard Hero Agency. There were quite a few heroes and staff wandering around the place, which was a bit surprising considering that it was still technically the weekend. But as they already knew, heroes are needed at all times throughout the day. Hey, you guys finally decided to show up, a familiar voice called out to them from behind. The trio turned around to see Madoka Ozhana, also known as Ember, giving them a friendly wave. Ember, how's it going? Takagi was the first to greet her. Are you working right now? No, I'm actually about to leave for the day. Oh, the muscular black-haired woman then extended her hand out towards Yanagi. We haven't had the chance to meet yet. Madoka Ozhana. It's nice to meet you, the poltergeist user said in her usual stoic tone of voice. So, are you guys ready for your work studies? You are going to be here for the next couple of days, right? Yes, the three nodded. Cool, well I look forward to working with you. The boss is in her office, you guys can just head on up there. I'm sure Midoriya-kun remembers how to get there. Thank you, the students said to her before making their way towards the elevator. It only took a few minutes for the wannabe heroes to find the office of their new mentor. Like most heads of a company, Katsuraga's office was located on the top floor of the building. The place was pretty extravagant and it had more than a good amount of windows lining the walls, which were no doubt useful for when the psychokinetic heroine didn't feel like using a door. Hello you three, how are you all doing today? Katsuragi smiled at them from behind her large wooden desk. Pretty pumped up and ready to go, Takagi answered back confidently. Glad to hear it. Thank you for agreeing to let us work with you, Blizzardson. I look forward to learning under you, Yanagi said in a polite tone while giving a low bow. No need to be so formal with me, Yanagi-san. Alright, so what's the plan for us today? Midoriya was the next to speak. Nothing for today. It's already pretty late and I wanted the three of you to get settled into your rooms and go over a few things before we head out tomorrow. The woman replied. What things? Katsuragi quickly directed them to set their bags down and have a seat before getting right to business. So, as the three of you know, we here at the Blizzard Agency specialize in rescue operations. Most of our work includes disaster response and relief, search and rescue operations, general hero duties and whatnot. Almost all of the 36 heroes and sidekicks here, including myself, have quirks suited for that line of work. Yeah, your agency is pretty famous for their quick responses to disasters all over the area. However, since the last time that you guys were here, I've been working a special case alongside Ed Shot and the local police. And what is that? The woman turned towards Midoriya and Takagi before answering. You two remember that suicide bomber situation that happened during your internships, correct? Both Greenettes thought back to the final day of their internships at the start of the school year. How could they forget? It was the first time either of them had come anywhere close to actually dying. If it wasn't for Katsuraga's quick action, they and everyone else in the area might not have made it through the day. Yeah, well, currently there is an investigation going on into that event and the likelihood that it was connected with the other bombings that have been happening around the country. Unfortunately, the investigation hit a standstill not too long after the assailant was brought into custody, on account of him shooting himself in the head after being taken in for questioning. Holy shit, Takagi shuddered slightly. She herself suspected that the person from that day had some connection to the attacks going on. But committing suicide before questioning could begin show that these people were not playing around. Are we going to be helping you with this? Yanagi inquired. That still has yet to be determined. Don't take this the wrong way, but all of you are still very green when it comes to hero work. So I have no intention of involving you if I don't think that you can handle it. That's fair. So for now, you three are only going to join me on regular patrols. Once I get an accurate assessment on where you are in terms of ability, we can move on to the more advanced stuff. So is that all we're going to be doing tomorrow? Midoriya then asked. Yes, Katsuragi nodded. Tomorrow morning we're going to have a short training session with Lily and Ozanachin. After that, we'll be patrolling for the rest of the day. Sounds like a plan to me. Takagi smiled. She was hoping to get to the fun stuff right off the bat, but she didn't mind having a little bit of downtime to relax and get prepared. In the meantime, you three are good to go to your rooms and get comfortable. All of you will be staying on the 4th floor. We'll start bright and early tomorrow, so make sure you get plenty of rest. You'll be staying the night here as well, so if there's anything that you need, it'll be available. No problem, boss. Simon Izuku. Now that we have some free time, we can watch that movie I've been wanting to check out. And I'm in dire need of some cuddling right about now, Takagi proudly announced before draping her arms around Midoriya's shoulders. Yeah, sure. He smiled at her. Not so fast there, lovebirds. Katsuragi interjected. I may be lenient, but even am not that irresponsible. Izuku will be sleeping in his own room, while Takagi-san and Yanagi-san share a different one. And just to be safe, y'all all be on opposite ends of the hall. Oh man, Takagi groaned. I don't know what you were expecting, Yanagi said to her classmate in a dry tone, successfully hiding the slight amusement that she got at the girl's displeasure. Hey, can't fault a girl for trying. Takagi shrugged with a sly grin. Be in the training room in the basement at 6 o'clock sharp. Make sure that you wear some workout clothes and don't be late, the green-haired heroine then ordered. Yes, Mom, the trio of students replied before taking their leave. Later that night, begrudgingly, Katsuragi woke up to the sound of an obnoxiously loud knock coming from her bedroom door that drugged the woman out of her restful slumber. Despite being a well-seasoned pro with 5 years of experience under her belt, the woman absolutely hated being woken up in the middle of her sleep. It was part of the reason why she hardly ever spent the night at her agency, especially since it was more often than not someone on the night shift coming to tell her some bad news. But seeing as she was currently responsible for a group of teenagers under her care, there wasn't a lot of room for complaining. Against her will, the green-haired woman levitated herself out of bed and used her quirk to slide her sandals onto her feet before answering the unwanted summons. When she finally opened the door, she was surprised to see that it was Midoriya who was the one standing before her. The boy had his arms folded across his chest and was tapping his foot in an impatient manner. "Izuku, what's up? You got a minute? We need to talk," the green-haired youth said in a peculiar tone of voice, something that the woman wasn't used to seeing from him. "Loser, come on in." Katsuragi stepped aside to allow him entry into her room. As she watched him, she started taking notice of how Midoriya was carrying himself. First and foremost, instead of actually walking, the boy just casually floated over to the chair before setting himself down. Second, was the way that he was sitting. Instead of his usual posture, the boy sat with his arms folded across his chest and his right leg placed over his left. Very similar to a certain someone that she knew. "Sit," Midoriya then said in a way that made it sound like a demand more than a polite request. Interested to see exactly where the boy was going with this, the green-haired heroine took the seat right across from him. "So what did you want to talk about?" Midoriya let out a brief sigh while he pinched the bridge of his nose. Obviously whatever was on his mind was something serious. "Look, first of all I need you to promise me not to freak out about what I tell you. What I have to say is already hard enough to believe, and I'm really not in the mood to repeat myself." "All right." Fubuki tilted her head in confusion. "As incredibly insane as this sounds, I am not that little nerd." He started off. "Izuku, what are you talking about? Like I just said, I am not Midoriya. I may be using his body and his voice at the moment, but in reality it's me, Tatsumaki." There was a brief pause while Fubuki tried to process the declaration. Did she hear that correctly? Of course she didn't. Her fatigued mind must have still been a little foggy, because she could have sworn that Midoriya just said that he was actually her older sister. Sure, he had her cells in his body, but that was pretty much it. "Izuku, what? You have a scar on your right ankle from that time you fell off a tree when you were 7. Mom and Dad got you a limited edition Gang Orca plushie for your 12th birthday after you begged them for it for 3 months straight. When you were 14, you tried to cut your own hair and ended up chopping off your bangs. And you wore a ponytail for a good 3 months before it all grew back." That statement was enough to make Fubuki take a long pause. What was going on? How did Midoriya know any of that? How do you? You used to wet the bed until you were 10. Your first kiss wasn't until your last year in middle school. And throughout your entire time at UA, you were absolutely head over heels for that American exchange student in your class. You know who I'm talking about. The annoying one with the enhancement quirk who used to shave his head and run around in that ridiculous yellow costume. "Stop." And now blushing Fubuki placed her hand over the woman's mouth, trying desperately to not be reminded of any more of her more shameful secrets. Suddenly it dawned on her. The realization hit her like a freight train. There were only 2 people on Earth that she ever confessed that to. The first was Lily, who could be trusted with the most dire of secrets. The other, One-Ichin, the woman blurted out with an expression of absolute astonishment on her face. "Yes, like I already told you, it's me. You damn brat. What, how be beauty are dead? As it turns out, note everybody dies when they are killed," Tatsumaki quipped in a rather dry tone. If there was ever a time where Fubuki Katsuragi thought that she had lost her mind, it was definitely right now. As much as the woman wanted to blame this entire situation on her own imagination, she couldn't. Of all the crazy things that she had experienced in her short 23 years of life, this was definitely at the top. "I don't exactly know how this is possible, but my best guess is that my consciousness was transferred along with my quirk," Tatsumaki quickly explained. "This can't be happening." The other Katsutagi sibling began rubbing her temples, desperately trying to rationalize what was happening. "Well, it is." "Wait," the younger woman interjected. "If you're really here, then what about Izuku? Don't worry about the brat, he's fine. He's in Dreamland right now. Does he know about this? That kid already has enough problems going on in his life right now. The last thing he needs to hear is that a dead person is using his body every other time he falls asleep." Fubuki made a mental note to follow up on that declaration at a later time. Aside from his counseling at school, she wasn't aware of any other issues that her pseudo-sibling was currently going through. "Look," Tatsumaki then spoke up. "This might be the only time that he'll get a chance to do this. But I wanted to talk to you before I'm gone for good. I suspect that he'll only be able to move around like this 1 or 2 more times before my consciousness is completely merged with Midoriya's." "What do you mean?" "Fubuki, I'm sorry," the elder sibling said. "What? Okay, on the list of things that Fubuki never thought that she would hear in her entire life, that was certainly on the top of list. Her sister never apologized for anything. I know that I wasn't the best sister to you growing up. My memories are still a little fuzzy, but looking back I could have treated you a lot better. I spent most of our time together being way too controlling and overprotective, which wasn't good for either of us, and all it took was me apparently dying to realize that." Fubuki wasn't an emotional person by nature. She was normally very calm and controlled, but hearing those words were enough to cause a few tears to well up in her emerald green eyes. Tatsumaki was right. Their relationship was far from perfect, and at times Fubuki hated her sister for pushing her so hard. But deep down she knew it was out of love more than anything. "One-Ichin, I just wanted to get that off my chest. I don't know what to say. There really isn't anything to say. Just know that I'm sorry for the way I treated you, and that I'm proud of how you've turned out. You're an amazing hero and I'm sure that y'all continue to do great things." Thank you." the younger sibling said with a wobbly grin while trying to hold back her tears. Alright, now that we got that awkward nonsense out of the way, the two of us have some catching up to do. Tatsumaki clapped her hands together and smiled. Wait, Fubuki protested. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this. How exactly are you able to do this, and what did you mean that you and Izuku were going to be merging personalities? We live in a world where people can fly, breath underwater, change the weather, and run faster than the speed of sound. This really shouldn't be all that surprising. And to clarify, our minds are becoming one. The only way that I've been able to hold on for so long is because I have a stronger will than him. Is there any chance that you can talk to him, maybe help him out? He's doing a pretty decent job so far, so I don't see the point in coddling him. We can communicate when we're both unconscious, but lately I just haven't felt like it. I see. Fubuki nodded her head in understanding. Don't worry, me and the nerd are gonna have a long overdue conversation before I'm gone. I just wanted to take advantage of my limited freedom for the time being. I guess that makes sense. Of course it does. Tatsumaki replied before standing up and walking to the other side of the room. Now, I know you keep some booze stored away in here somewhere. I hate drinking, but this time I'll make an exception on account of me being dead and all. Wait, Wanachin Izuka's still underage. You can't get drunk in his body. Oh, good point, the elder sibling retorted. Why do I have a feeling that this is going to be a long night? Just as they were told the day before, Takagi and Yanagi were up bright and early to ensure that they made it to the basement in time for morning training. They still had a couple of hours before sunrise, but their excitement more than made up for the limited amount of sleep than they were used to. The only real consolation prize to all of this is that they didn't have to worry about going to class today. I wonder what kind of training they are going to have us do today. Yanagi wondered in her usual stoic tone. Fubuki probably just wants to get a good baseline on our skills before heading out today. Headshot did the same thing on the first day of our last internship. Takagi replied after a quick yawn. As the two teens stepped out of the elevator and walked through the hallway, it only took them a few seconds before locating the door to their destination. Right before the girls were about to set foot out of the corridor into the room, they both heard the familiar voices of Katsuragi and Midoriya from around the corner. It really wasn't that big of a deal. Honestly, I came across him in Airjet completely by accident, the voice of Katsuragi said with a quick laugh. Really? Well, I guess it was a lucky break then. Midoriya chuckled. I wonder what those two are talking about. Takagi and Yanagi thought simultaneously. Just be glad that you missed the media firestorm that came after. Once it went public, there were reporters camping outside the building trying to get me to do an interview. It was a total hassle. I wouldn't doubt it. They must be talking about that whole stain thing. Takagi whispered to her friend. That wasn't even the worst part. My parents ended up coming down here and raised all sorts of hell. Just be glad that you weren't here for that. The green-haired heroine then joked. Oh yeah, I never did ask you what your parents were like. I feel like I'm going to have to meet them at some point. Midoriya asked. They are some interesting people. Even though the two students couldn't see her face, they could definitely hear the sudden uneasiness in her voice. I'm still trying to figure how I'm going to break the news to them. I mean, how exactly am I supposed to explain that some boy they never met is in possession of their daughter's quirk, and that we're all technically related now? You could almost hear the record scratch in Takagi and Yanaga's heads after that statement. Okay, something was weird about this conversation. That much was clear, and for multiple reasons. What exactly did she mean by Midoriya being in possession of their daughter's quirk? And how exactly were they related? Sure, they looked similar and had identical quirks, but that was just a coincidence, right? We shouldn't be eavesdropping on them like this, Yanagi whispered to Takagi, only for the green-haired girl to place her hand over the poltergeist user's mouth. Well, I'm sure they can't be that bad. Midoriya countered the woman's declaration. I never did tell you this, but I come from a rather high-class background. And when it comes to people like that, things can get a little crazy, especially when it comes to children. What do you mean? You've heard of quirk breeding before, right? It's a pretty common practice, even nowadays. All three teenagers paused at the same time. Of course they've heard of quirk breeding before, who hadn't arranged unions by carefully selected donors with the sole purpose of choosing or enhancing a specific quirk or set of quirks. Although the practice was technically illegal, there was no real way to regulate it. Wait, you don't mean? Midoriya slightly shuddered. Yeah, Katsuragi nodded. My parents spent a lot of time and money making sure that they had powerful children. I love them and all, but I don't think it's a good idea for you to meet them just yet. I still need to find a way to break the news to them without it becoming a whole spectacle. All Midoriya could do was nod and agree. I understand. But don't worry, I'm sure they'll like you. And once they see what a fine young man you are, they'll be happy to welcome you into the family. I mean, you are technically related to them now that you have Wanachin's cells in your body. I guess you're right. Deciding that continuing to eavesdrop on what was certainly meant to be a private conversation wasn't a good idea, the two girls quickly entered the room to make her presence known, albeit a bit obnoxiously, pretending as if they didn't just hear the last part of their talk. However, now that they couldn't erase what they heard from their memories, both Takagi and Yanagi had some serious questions about the exact nature of Midoriya and Katsuraga's relationship. I guess this is just one more thing that I'll need to ask him about, the green-haired youth thought to herself. Before long, all the necessary parties were present and accounted for. Much to the students' surprise, the training room was actually quite big. It was a wide-open area that encompassed nearly the entire bottom floor of the building's basement. Whatever they were going to do, it was certainly going to require a lot of space. "So, what's the plan, boss?" Takagi inquired, presumable speaking for the other two students. "Just some basic battle training," Katsuragi replied. "I want to see how well you guys handle yourselves in a fight. I got a pretty good assessment of your abilities from your end-of-semester exams, but I'm curious to see how you've all improved." "Sounds pretty straightforward," said Yanagi. "There has to be more to it than that though, right?" Midoriya looked at his pseudo-sibling. "Correct," the woman said with a very suspicious grin. "For this training, the three of you will be facing off against Lily and Ozanachin." She then pointed to the two other women in the room, directing everyone's attention towards them. Both women were on the floor a few meters away from them, stretching out and getting warmed up. Ozana was dressed in a pair of orange sweatpants and a black tank top that helped show off her superior physique, while Lily was wearing a simple black sports bra and leggings. 3 against 2 doesn't that seem a little unfair? "Oh, you don't have to worry about us," the flame control user grinned. "I think the two of us will be quite alright." "Wait, isn't Lillison your assistant?" Yanagi asked. "Lily actually has her hero license. She may prefer doing office work, but she's pretty skilled. I only have it for emergencies. I prefer to leave the real hero work to the pros. I never got a chance to learn what her quirk is. She never used it the last time I was here." Midoriya realized. The worst part about this was that there were absolutely no indications as to what her power was. His best guess was that it might be something plant-based judging by her nickname and the accessory that she usually wears on her head. "Alright, I know how these things usually go. What's the catch?" Takagi asked. "An astute observation, young lady. The rules are as follows. Izuku and Yanagisen aren't allowed to use any long-range attacks. Close combat is where they are the weakest. As for you, Takagi-san, you can do as you please." "And what about them?" the gray-haired teen followed up. "Ozanachin doesn't have fire starters on her, so that's her handicap. Lily, on the other hand, can do as she pleases." "So you won't be participating," said Midoriya. "Oh no, I'm just going to sit back and observe," Katsuragi responded in a weird tone. It was blatantly obvious to the young trio that they were being set up, but there wasn't really anything that they could do about it. They may have had the advantage in numbers. On top of that, one of their opponents won't be using their quirk, but they would be foolish to take this lightly. He'll give you guys a minute to strategize. After that, we'll get started." "Yes, Mom." Midoriya, Takagi and Yanagi all said in unison before huddling up to go over their attack plan. "So, what's the plan?" Takagi asked her partners. "Our best bet is to work with what we already know," Midoriya answered. "Ozanachin can manipulate fire, but that's useless in this scenario. But with her build she looks like she can handle herself in a fight. And we don't have any information on the other one, do we?" Yanagi inquired, only to get a negative head shake from the boy. Takagi then spoke up. "Alright, so here's what I got. My quirk is the best matchup against Embers since I can cover multiple areas at once. So I'm pretty sure I can handle her on my own. You two have the best chance against Flower Girl over there, so you can take her on." "Are you sure?" the boy gave her a concerned look. Sure, he was confident in her abilities. But Ozana was handpicked by Endeavor of all people. "Totally. Alright," he nodded. "In that case, me and Ryukasan will flank Lillison on both sides to keep her busy. We can't use long-range attacks, but that doesn't mean that we can't use our quirks on her directly. I don't have my support items, but she seems to be within my weight limit, so we definitely stand a chance." "Hey kids, you done talking yet? I'm starting to get bored over here," Ozana suddenly shouted to them from across the training room. The three students simply nodded at each other before taking up their fighting stances and giving the all-clear. As the two adults sized them up, they had a pretty good idea of what they were going to do. Logically speaking, they would send Takagi after Ozana, but Lily was their main target. "I can leave the boss baby brother and the pale one to you, right? It shouldn't be a problem." Lily shrugged nonchalantly. "Alright, you can start whenever you're ready," Katsuragi announced from the sideline. She had her cell phone in her hand and was obviously recording the fight, which only further bolstered the students' suspicion. With nothing more that was needed to be said, the battle quickly went underway. Like they predicted, the first one to make their move was Takagi. The green-haired girl sprinted towards Ozana at full speed while the other two made their way towards the lavender-eyed woman. In mere seconds, the two opposing sides met the other head-on. "You gotta deal with me, Ember, don't worry, he'll be sure to go easy on you," Takagi began taunting before launching one of her arms towards the woman's head, only for Ozana to dodge it with little effort. "Oh good, then that means he'll get to relax a bit." The black-haired heroine countered by charging at Takagi herself with her fists raised. On the other end of the equation, Midoriya and Yanagi were quickly upon their opponent. While the boy chose to use his flight advantage and take to the sky, Yanagi covered him by flanking the woman on her left side. In one split second, the gray-haired girl used her quirk to lift Lily's body off of the ground and move her into prime position for Midoriya to follow up with an across-the-body kick. None of this seemed to faze the woman, however, seeing as she kept a very calm expression on her face. Just as the boy's foot was about to make contact, the woman let out a slight smirk. "Bone swing." The moment those words left her mouth, Midoriya and Yanagi's eyes widened at the almost terrifying sight before them. Without any warning, Lily's exposed skin briefly ruptured before several large white protrusions practically exploded from her body. This action was so quick that Midoriya didn't even get the chance to stop before slamming face first into a hardened wall of what felt like solid metal. With the Yanagi gasped, only narrowly avoiding the attack by throwing herself to the right. Hoping to quickly recover, Midoriya pulled himself back to get a good look at what just happened. To his surprise and slight horror, he was now able to see what was going on. From the area where her ribs were supposed to be, 4 large talon-like objects were sticking out of her body. That was a pretty good move, but you're going to have to be faster than that, Lily said in a calm tone. What kind of quirk is that? Yanagi inquired. That actually looks kind of cool. My quirk is Bone Spur. I can manipulate the bones in my body to various degrees. In addition to this, my bones are far stronger than a normal person's. Its range is limited, but it gets the job done, the woman announced. With that brief explanation, Midoriya quickly realized why they were given the handicap by Katsuragi. Close combat fighting was their weak point, and judging by what he just saw, Lily's quirk was perfect for that kind of thing. Well, this isn't going to be easy. He clicked his teeth. At the other end of the training area, the battle between Takagi and Ozhana was in full swing. Once the two got met in the middle of the floor, the green-haired girl was doing her best to avoid a flurry of well-aimed punches at her head. What are you waiting for, Lizardy? Let's see that quirk of yours in action. The black-haired woman taunted with a slight smirk on her face. Oh, I was planning on it. I was just trying to see how well you can handle yourself, the girl retorted before activating her power and splitting herself up into 20 pieces and surrounding her opponent. Ozhana suddenly paused at the sight of seeing Takagi's quirk in action. But that moment of hesitation was all that the girl needed to attack. Scalestorm. Without missing a beat, the lizard tail splitter user launched herself at her opponent from multiple directions. However, she certainly wasn't expecting what happened next. In a rather stunning display of speed and dexterity, Ozhana quickly lowered herself to the ground and power slid underneath the girl's body before any one of the pieces could hit her. No way she was able to react that fast. Takagi's floating head looked on in amazement. Hoping to quickly recover from this, the girl proceeded to launch her pieces at the woman, leading to a veritable game of cat and mouse all across the training area. Ryukasen, behind you, Midoriya shouted just in time for Yanagi to dodge one of Lily's surprise attacks. By now, the entire fight had been going on for a few minutes with no sign of stopping anytime soon. Like Midoriya had predicted, this was a lot harder than what he originally thought. Despite the clear advantage in overall abilities, the woman was a tough opponent to take down. Initially, the boy thought that simply using his quirk to throw her against a wall would put her down. But every time either one of them tried that, Lily used her bones to catch herself to lessen the impact. And direct blows were next to impossible since they were liable to get skewered if they got in too close. Her range seems to be limited to about 4 meters. Even so, it's dangerous to get in too close, was the conclusion that Midoriya was able to come to so far. This would be a lot easier if we could work from a distance, Yanagi said in an uncharacteristically annoyed tone. Yeah, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? Fubikison was right. Short-range distances aren't your strong suit, Lily stated in a calm tone. In that case, he'll just have to use this. The two teenagers watched as the bone spur user extended out her left arm and forced the bone right out of her skin. In terms of visually disturbing quirks, this definitely took the cake, surpassing even that of Takagi. Once she was done, Lily was now holding what could only be described as a sword-shaped piece of bone in her hand. Bone Spike, in guessing that she can also regrow bones that she loses. Her quirk is insane, it's almost like Setsuna's. Midoriya and Yanagi didn't even get a chance to think before the woman dashed towards them at an impressive speed and made a slashing attempt at them. At that moment, the light bulb went off over the girl's head. The weapon that she was holding wasn't attached to her body like the rest had been so far, meaning that she could easily use it for herself. Heist, the poltergeist user, ripped the object out of her opponent's hand. Once the sword was in her possession, she got into a sloppy kenjutsu stance and readied herself to attack. Hopefully those tips I got from Mushison will help me out. I probably should have thought that one through a bit more. Lily sounded a bit disappointed in herself before assuming a new stance. Eternal Fang. At the moment, Takagi was still chasing Ozhana around their section of the training area. The black-haired heroine was surprisingly nimble on her feet, somehow managing to avoid every attack that came her way. Looking to conserve her stamina, the girl decided to give up on the chase and put her body back together. You're giving up already? I'm just getting warmed up, Ozhana taunted, feeling a bit more lively than she was a few minutes ago. I guess I'll have to use my new ultimate move on her, Takagi resolved herself. In battle, there was no time to second-guess yourself. If she had any chance at winning this, she was going to need to catch her opponent completely off guard. With her mind made up, the green-haired youth charged at her opponent full speed. Really, a frontal attack. Ozhana tried not to feel insulted at such an obvious feint. Her 2 years of working under Endeavor taught her not to fall for tricks like these. The woman got into a boxing stance and prepared herself to maneuver out of the way, but she wasn't ready for what happened next. Scale dash. Mere centimeters before making contact, Takagi's body exploded into about 40 pieces and breezed past Ozhana's body faster than she could blink. She can split herself up that much in the time that it took her to process that thought. Takagi had rapidly put herself back together and delivered a resounding backwards kick right into the woman's body, knocking her onto the ground. You liked it, the girl shouted in satisfaction. I've been working on my speed and precision. It doesn't matter how brawny and muscle-bound you are. No one can react that quickly to my attack," she continued with a newfound sense of confidence. Instantly, the air around Takagi grew stiff. "Ah shit," Katsuragi cringed upon hearing her brother's girlfriend's foolish declaration. Who the hell? Without any warning, Ozhana was suddenly back on her feet and closed the distance between the two of them. Except at this particular point in time, the woman was surrounded by an aura of pure intimidation. "Cow, are you calling a gorilla Cyclops, you brat?" Unfortunately for Takagi, her momentary lapse in judgment was enough for her to be completely unprepared for what could only be described as the most devastating shoulder chop in human history, one that would put even Kenda's best effort to shame. Across the other end of the room, Midoriya and Yanagi were barely able to avoid a multitude of bone spikes erupting from Lily's body. The sound of the impact to Takagi's shoulder was enough to momentarily distract the two teens, which was a costly mistake. Setsuna Midoriya shouted, "Bone swing." At the exact same moment that Lily made her move, Yanagi used her own quirk to launch the bone sword directly at the woman. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on her side today as the weapon simply bounced off her extended rib and sent it flying in the other direction. "Okay, now the kid gloves are off," Midoriya said to himself before flying towards his opponent at high speed. The boy managed to dodge another attack while zooming past the woman's body and catching her off guard. He's fast. Lily had just enough wherewithal to extend the bones out of her spine and send another attack aimed at his chest, but by that point it was already too late. Palace of inertia. Right away, the woman felt her body freeze in place, including the bone protrusions sticking out her back and shoulders. This wasn't her first time being on the wrong end of a telekinetic quirk, but this a far different feeling than what she was used to. "Ryaikasen." Tada, Yanagi responded before once again taking control of the bone sword and throwing it towards Lily. At the very last second, Midoriya released his quirk and the woman was helpless to avoid getting hit in the face with the blunt side of her own weapon, the force of which was strong enough to knock her down to the ground. That proved to be the final move of the match before Katsuragi shouted at everyone to stop. "Alright, that's enough. I'd prefer to not have to send anyone to the hospital this morning." Everyone in the room instantly relaxed, minus Takagi, who was still on the ground reeling from that last hit. What was that? Lily directed her attention towards the boy. "Oh, it was just a new move that I learned," the boy answered. "It lets me stop movement within a certain area." I swear I've seen that somewhere before." "Did Fubuka-san teach you that?" "No." On the other side of the equation, Ozhana decided to have pity on Takagi and help her back onto her feet. "Sorry about that, Takagi-san. I blanked out there for a second. I get kind of sensitive when people comment on my physique," the woman said in an apologetic tone with a bit of blush on her face. "It's fine. I kinda deserved it for letting my guard down." Takagi gave her a weak grin in return. "Jesus Christ, I don't think I've ever been hit that hard before." "Sorry, don't worry about it. I guess fighting fires isn't the only thing that you're good at." "Definitely not. You know, my mom was actually a firefighter. She used to work near this area before she died on the job." I am sorry to hear that." Ozhana's expression instantly changed after that statement. Her bashful disposition shifted to one that looked a bit dark, almost apologetic even. The woman looked like she wanted to say something else, but stopped herself before the words could come out. "That was a pretty good job, you three." Katsuragi drew the attention back to her. "Technically I should call that a win for Lily since Palace of Inertia could be considered a long-range attack, but he'll let it slide this time." "Sorry about that." Midoriya sheepishly scratched his cheek. "Obviously you've all improved on your personal abilities, but you would have been better off working together as a group." "Takagi-san, confidence is good to have, but don't underestimate your opponents when they have the advantage in battle experience." "Noted." The green-haired girl nodded while tending to her now bruised shoulder and pride. "As for you two, you got too caught up in the rules of the fight and let that limit you. Try not to overthink things in the future. The better strategy would have been for you all to get Ozhana and Lily close together. Lily would have been severely limited in her attacks and Ozhana wouldn't have had so much room to work with." "Understood. You are all still kids, so I don't expect you to have all the answers yet. But use this as an example of what to expect when we go out this morning." "Yes, Mom." "Alright, go shower, get breakfast and meet me on the roof in 2 hours. We have a lot to cover today." The three students gave a set of mock salutes before taking their leave and making the journey towards their rooms. Inside the training area, the other two heroines couldn't help but notice the odd expression plastered all over the flame control user's face. "You okay, Matakachen?" Lily asked in a concerned tone. "Yeah, I'm fine." She waved her hands in front of her face rather unconvincingly before looking back towards the doorway. "I almost slipped up a minute ago. Now really isn't the best time to tell her. Hopefully I can work up the nerve to confess before she finds out on her own." Rescue, battle and evacuation. Those are the 3 basic duties of a hero, Tatsuragi said to the 3 teenagers as their group flew through the sky above Saitama Prefecture. Most agencies serve a specific purpose and use that to filter out the kind of requests that they take on. However, when it comes to rescue heroes like myself, it helps to be proactive instead of reactive. "And what do you mean by that?" Midoriya looked to the woman for a response. "Depending on the type of area that you work in, you have to learn the landscape and possible hotspots for disasters to occur. For example, if we were in a city next to the coastline or a river, then flooding and typhoons would be a regular hazard. Geez, talk about learning as you go, Takagi thought to herself. She knew that work studies were going to be harder than their previous internships. But this was different. During her time with Edshot, she felt more like a guest than an actual hero in training. Now, she was more concerned about keeping up with their leader. So what should we be on the lookout for here? Yanagi was the next to speak. The entire town is primarily metropolitan and suburban areas. On top of that, we're pretty much the transportation hub of the country. So large-scale attacks, earthquakes, and traffic accidents are what I keep my eyes on. There's also the nuclear power plant nearby that every hero agency in the area keeps tabs on, said the green-haired heroine. It's also a Monday, so we should probably take that into account too, right, since there will be more people out and about. That's an excellent observation, Lizardy. Thank you, Takagi smiled, feeling slightly proud of herself. The group continued their aerial observation of the city for the next 30 minutes or so with little to no issue. Despite the abundance of people roaming around, things were relatively quiet. Apparently, there was a lot of empty time in the everyday lives of pro heroes. If nothing was going on, then there was nothing to do. Local heroes typically handled all of the minor incidents around the city, while the specialist just waited for a call to come in. During this downtime, Katsuragi took it upon herself to make sure that the students paid attention to all of the little things that were easy to miss, such as weather forecasts, traffic reports, and events in the area that would attract large crowds of people. This went on for a good while before the woman's phone began ringing. Though for Blizzardson, we have a situation on the south side of town, the unnamed dispatch employee practically shouted into the phone. What's wrong? There's a runaway bus heading right towards Sakatama Bridge. You're the closest hero in the area from what we can see. It's gaining speed and the two people inside are ignoring all police commands. Him on the way. Sakatama Bridge, that's pretty close, Takagi pointed out, looking in the direction of the specified area. We can get there in less than 5 minutes if we hurry. Alright kids, no time to waste. Let's get a move on, the psychokinetic heroine ordered. Yes mom. Without missing a beat, Yanagi whipped out her new hoverboard and Takagi hopped right onto Midoriya's back. In terms of airspeed, she was slowest out of the group and time was obviously a factor. With nothing else that needed to be said, the quartet took off in the direction of the bridge at top speed. Like Katsuragi had said, the group was near the location in only a few minutes, and from what they could see, they weren't a moment too soon. Down below, they spotted the vehicle in question, which was speeding through the road with little regard for anything in sight. Luckily, there weren't a lot of pedestrians on the ground, and traffic was pretty light. Stopping that bus is top priority. Me and Skywalker can get it off the street. Lizardy and Emily, grab whoever is inside that thing and be careful. Got it. The students quickly nodded before splitting off into two teams. Both groups were quick to catch up to the runaway vehicle and flanked it on either side. On first glance, there was no one inside besides two individuals dressed in all black. Hoping that they would listen to reason, Katsuragi yelled out to them from the open window. Stop the bus and pull over, this is your only warning. You quirky, one of the men shouted back. What did he just call her? Midoriya wondered briefly. Now that he thought about it, that was same thing that Suicide Bomber from before said. This bus is rigged to blow in about 1 minute. If you value your lives, I suggest you get the hell back, the female driver followed up. Everyone's eyes widened at that declaration and it suddenly became very clear that the situation was much worse than they thought. Midoriya looked ahead to see that they would be upon the bridge in about the same amount of time. Realistically speaking, there was no way that they would be able to evacuate the area that fast. So their only option was to get the bus as far away from here as possible. You three, get the hell. You bastards. Takagi wasted no time in crashing her body right through the window on the opposite side of the bus to grab the two villains. Setsunachin Yanagi called out to her before removing the strap on her belt and sending 5 of her minidiscs into the door and shattering the glass. What the? The two villains inside the bus were obviously not prepared for such a reckless move. And in a rather impressive display of speed, both girls landed 2 simultaneous blows that were strong enough to knock the wind out of them. Ghosty, grab that girl. Takagi then ordered the other before taking hold of the man and pulling him out through the shattered doorway, with Yanagi using her minidiscs to do the same to the other. Whatever works, I guess. Katsuragi took a moment to be impressed before turning her attention towards Midoriya. Head to the bridge and get ready. It'll be tough, but I can move the bus on my own. That it was the only thing the boy said before flying ahead, posting himself above the traffic. Now that the kids were out of the way, Katsuragi didn't need to worry about their safety. Something like this was well within her weight limit. But there was one problem. There was nowhere for her to safely deposit the bus. The side roads were a no-go, and lifting it up into the air could mean that the blast radius would be that much greater. On top of that, she had maybe 30 seconds at the most to make a decision. I guess he'll have to toss it in the river and hope for the best, she decided before summoning her power and levitating the bus towards the water. Seeing as she didn't have the luxury of time on her side, the woman launched the vehicle into the middle of the river about 600 meters away from the bridge itself. Shit, that's too close, Midoriya realized only moments before everything went sideways. Boom! The deafening explosion rang through the area as the bus finally detonated, sending a pillar of water and mud into the air. It was so loud that Midoriya had to cup his own ears for safety. Somehow, despite the shockwave itself doing enough to stop every car and truck on the road, the vehicles were able to remain on the bridge. Whatever kind of explosives were in that thing, they definitely packed a punch. What the hell was that? One of the citizens hopped out of their car and frantically shouted. Is there a villain attack? Was it a bomb? One of the vital rules of being a hero was making sure that people were calm and didn't start panicking. So Midoriya decided to take care of the job and call out to the people below. Everything is alright, please try and remain calm. The situation has been handled, so there's no need to worry. A hero? Is that Blizzard? What the hell is going on? Just before the boy could speak to try and further contain the situation, something strange happened. Help! A frantic voice suddenly called out to him. Except something was off. Midoriya couldn't really describe it, but it sounded like it was coming from inside his head. What was even more strange was that he instantly knew where it was coming from. His body practically moved on its own, and the green-haired youth quickly flew under the bridge to see what was going on. When he finally got a good look at things, he was shocked by what he saw. There in the middle of the water was a man and a small child frantically splashing about. Hold on, the boy shouted, then used his quirk to lift the two citizens from out of the river and over to safety. Once they were on dry land, Midoriya immediately rushed to their aid. Now that he was able to focus, he could see them clearly. The man looked to be about his mom's age with black hair and a mustache, while the other was a small girl with bright red hair. The closest person to him was the child, so that was who he tended to first. Are you guys alright? He asked. The little girl briefly looked up at him before a look of fright etched itself onto her face and started to back away. Oh right, I forget that this mask is kind of intimidating. The boy quickly realized what must startled the girl so bad before removing the object from his head to reveal his face. Hey, it's all right. I'm not going to hurt you, he then said in a soft tone while giving her an honest smile. Apparently this was enough to calm the girl down, just enough for her to relax a bit. Jean, oh my god, there you are, the man shouted in a very noticeable American accent as he ran towards the two of them. Everything is fine, sir. Your daughter looks to be okay, Midoriya replied in English, now more thankful than ever that his father took the time to teach him. The man quickly grabbed hold of the child and pulled her into a tight hug while speaking way too fast for him to understand. Skywalker, there you are. Midoriya looked above him to see Katsuragi flying towards him with a worried look on her face. One-ichin, what's going on? I think these two were caught up in the blast and got thrown into the river. The boy motioned over to the father and daughter. Katsuragi glanced over at the pair to see that while the man was still holding on to the girl tightly, the child was looking at Midoriya with a set of bright green eyes that were focused solely on him. Are you guys alright? We're fine, thank you, young man. We were walking under the bridge when that explosion happened. Neither of us can swim and the water was too violent. The man answered her. Let's get you two over to the street so you can get out of here, Katsuragi suggested, then proceeded to use her power to levitate the two just off the main road. Thanks again, hero. I don't know how you found us in all that water, but I'm grateful. Midoriya tilted his head in confusion before responding. Didn't one of you call out to me? I heard someone screaming for help. Now it was the man's turn to be confused. Well, it wasn't either of us. I was barely able to keep my head above the water, let alone yell. And my daughter here, Jean, is mute, so she can't even speak. Really? Midoriya then looked at the kid whose face hadn't changed one bit. That was weird. He could have sworn that he heard what sounded like a small child call out to him. Now that he got a better look at her, the girl couldn't have been older than 4 or 5. In any case, I suggest that the two of you get far away from here. The main road is backed up, but it's safe for you to head down the other street. Right, thank you, Blizzard. And thanks again to you two, young man, was all the man said before running in the direction opposite of the bridge. Let's go find those other two. Our job here isn't done yet. Katsuragi placed her hand on the boy's left shoulder. Right, he replied by putting his helmet back on his head. Thank you. The same voice from before once again rang inside Midoriya's head. The boy whipped his head around to see the little redhead girl still staring directly at him despite the distance between the two of them. Was she the one that called out to him? It had to be. How else would he have known where to find them? She must have some sort of telepathic quirk. Back with Takagi and Yanagi, the two girls had made quick work of subduing the criminals after taking them off of the bus. Things got kind of dodgy there after the massive explosion, but they were still able to detain the two figures dressed in all black. Emily, be careful, we still don't know what their quirks are, said Takagi while continuing to pin the man against the ground with his hands behind his back. I wonder why they haven't used them already. Yanagi wondered out loud as she held the unnamed woman in the air. That's because we don't have quirks, you damn idiot, the woman responded in a very irritated tone. What? Yeah, laugh it up while you still can, you bastards. She's right, the two are just a couple of quirkless rejects, the other one said. They were quirkless? Well, that certainly explained why they hadn't attacked them yet. There may have been a slight sense of relief at the knowledge that they didn't need to worry about any surprises. But neither one of the two girls were dumb enough to let their guards down. What the hell were two thinking anyway? Do you know how many people could have been killed? Do you actually realize what you were about to do? Takagi shouted. And what if it? The woman barked. You quirky bastards think that you're all so powerful. We may not have any fancy powers, but we don't need them to kill as many of you as we can. You may have foiled our plans today, but our brothers will finish where we have failed. We won't stop until every last of your hellish kind feel the pain that we've felt for so long. These guys are psychotic, said Yanagi in her usually stoic tone. Despite her calm exterior, the girl shuddered slightly at the wild look on the two criminals' faces. Who is we? Are you part of some type of group or something? Takagi further questioned. Is that why you did this? Because you're quirkless? What the hell does that have to do with anything? That seemed to be the end of the conversation since neither one of the two criminals decided to respond. Takagi did not have a good feeling about this at all. Something about this didn't sit right with her. These people sounded like a couple of religious zealots instead of your run-of-the-mill villains. Obviously there was something bigger at play here, and her best guess was that their quirkless status had something to do with this. There's no point in talking to them, Yanagi interjected. The police can handle that. We just need to make sure that we can keep them under control before Blizzard and Skywalker get back here. Yeah, you're right, Takagi nodded, still feeling very unsure about what she just heard. It wasn't long before the group was reunited along with the police. By some miracle, no one was gravely injured in that attack. Thanks to Katsuraga's quick thinking, by throwing that bus into the river, all of the damage was limited to that one area. This was an excellent job, you three. The green-haired heroine complimented them. There were no deaths, and I think we finally caught a lucky break. She then motioned over to the two quirkless criminals who were now in handcuffs and being put into an armored vehicle. Yeah, we got really lucky, didn't we? Indeed. So what happens now? Midoriya asked after removing his helmet once again to push his hair back. We can worry about filing our reports later, and those two will be taken in for interrogation. There won't be another repeat of last time, so I suspect that we'll be able to get a lot more information this time around. Good. Takagi folded her arms with relief. She was still trying to wrap her head around what she heard. Was it possible that they were dealing with some sort of quirkless villain group? It certainly wasn't out of the realm of possibility. She then looked over to her boyfriend. The image of the way those two criminals looked was still fresh in her mind. They had a fire in their eyes, and she could tell that they meant every word of what they said. Was this common amongst quirkless people? Did a lot of them feel like that? More specifically, did Midoriya ever think like that? The girl quickly shook her head to expel that thought. That was impossible. Midoriya was way too nice of a guy, especially for something like that. However, one thing she was certain of was the pain in their voice when they admitted that they didn't have quirks. It was the kind of pain that would lead someone to do something crazy. Takagi then drifted her eyes over to the right side of Midoriya's abdomen. There was still a talk that she needed to have with him about those scars on his body. Unbeknownst to her, she was obvious enough for Yanagi to notice this. In the meantime, we have to continue our patrol of the area. Hero work is never done, and we have a tight schedule to keep. The teens were brought out of their thoughts by Katsuraga's voice. Yes, Mom, Midoriya answered for all three of them. With that, the quartet continued on about their business for the rest of the day before heading back to the agency and finishing up their work. The students needed to get ready to head back to school tomorrow, and Takagi resolved to have that much-needed conversation with her boyfriend when they were finally back home. Somewhere in Japan, Watanabe and Nakamura were unsuccessful in their mission, and they were taken into custody. It won't be long before the police catch on to what we're doing. I trust those two to keep quiet, but I'm not getting my hopes up. Agreed, we're gonna have to push up our timetable. There is one good thing that came out of this though, and what is that? We now know that Nitro's new product is a lot more powerful than the last, and we know exactly how much we'll need for our big operation. I guess it was worth all the extra money, huh? He said that he'll be able to resume manufacturing by the end of this week. Also, he's given us the contact information for a supplier of those quirk bullets that are going around. That will help us out a lot. Indeed. In any case, this was a good test run. I suggest we stay low for a while before we're ready to make our move. There's sure to be a lot of eyes on us very soon. Agreed. He'll contact everyone when all of our pieces are in place. Until then, stay under radar and keep finding new members to recruit. We're going to need them for what's to come.